Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku lost his sight in a tragic accident part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. Why don't you just go jump off the roof? That way maybe in the next life you'll be born with a quirk. Hearing those words repeating in his head, the 14-year-old boy solemnly walked through the streets, his head downward so that no one would be able to see his face. The mocking and hateful words that he had heard just an hour earlier at the end of school. Katsuki, Izuku Midoriya said, "You are wrong about me," he said to himself, referring to the one who had said that to him earlier today at the end of school. If there was one thing that the young teenager wanted to be anything more in the world, since he was 4 years old, it was to become a hero. Heroes. They were the symbol of peace and justice, heroic men and women who risked their lives to save innocents and combat evil. Izuku had longed to become one, to join their ranks, to be known as one of the greatest heroes ever, to stand alongside his idol who was the inspiration and the hope of billions worldwide who no matter what always won no matter the odds and saved the day. All Might, however, life, for some reason seemed to have it in for Izuku. To become a hero, you needed what was known as a quirk. 80% of the planet's population possessed one which granted them abilities and powers, whether it would be super strength or transforming your body, for example. But Izuku was one of the unlucky few who didn't have one. To this day, he still remembered the doctor saying he couldn't become a hero and that he was quirkless, and how his mother had broken down sobbing, hugging him that day, apologizing over and over how that he couldn't achieve his dreams. However, Izuku wasn't going to let that stop him. In fact, it only renewed his determination to become one. He spent hours and days watching tapes and videos of heroes in action, studying them and learning how they fought. From Mount Lady to Eraserhead, he learned how they fought in the hope of learning how they did so he too could learn it and maybe, just maybe, become a hero just by watching and analyzing their moves. Listen, Midoriya, it's a nice dream, but those without quirks can't become heroes. Maybe you do have a quirk. What with all the crying you do? Izuku, I'm so sorry. The words of the doctor, his classmates and his mother entered his head, telling him over and over that he couldn't become a hero and it'd be best to give up his dream. No. It didn't matter what anyone said. It didn't matter what the doctors, his mother or Katsuki said. There was those who had quirks that was deemed useless and a joke, like one in America who could communicate with squirrels, and yet they had become a hero as well. If they could with something like that, then so could he as well. Izuku lifted up his head and his green eyes hardened in resolve. He will become a hero. He'd show everyone that he too could become one. And he'd become the greatest hero to ever exist, even greater than All Might. I will enter UA. I swear it. I'm going to enter it and I will become a hero, he said in proclamation. Izuku continued walking, and a noticeable step was in his stroll now, full of confidence and determination. Already he was lost in thought and mumbling to himself on how he could find a way to enter. What the hell's got him in such a cocky mood now? Katsuki Bakugo said as he saw him from around the corner. The blonde standing there by himself, looking on, an annoyed look on his face at what he was seeing. Stupid Deku. Katsuki muttered to himself, a disdainful look on his eyes. Why the hell was he still persisting on becoming a hero? Everyone but him knows it's impossible for him to become one. But who gives a damn? If he wants to continue embarrassing himself, then so be it, he said as he lazily slouched against the wall. The brash, arrogant boy whose explosion quirk made him a shoo-in to become an accepted applicant of UA next year stared hard at Deku, the name he had called him ever since they were little, and he discovered he had one and Izuku didn't, and felt getting in was a cakewalk. But the fact that worthless Deku had said in front of everyone today that he'd join the school had ticked him off. A smug look appeared on Katsuki's face as an idea to have some fun and make Deku cry as well. Nothing too bad, just enough for some entertainment and give him some laughs. He raised his hand up and timed it, and activating his quirk set off an explosion with a loud bang right in front of Izuku, to startle and scare him out of his shoes. However, so focused on his antics, Katsuki had paid no attention to the surroundings and failed to notice the truck that was passing through, and on it were several barrels with a marking on them. No one could possibly guess what was going to happen next. The driver of the truck was startled and scared witless hearing the explosion at what had just happened, thinking that he was under attack, and veered all over the road trying to get it under control. Izuku looked on, his eyes widening at what he saw as it was coming at him. The driver screamed and turned left, pulling the steering wheel as hard as he could to miss him. The large vehicle turned and missed him just barely. Izuku let loose the breath that he had been holding as crisis had just narrowly been averted, it seemed. However, the truck was only part of the danger. The real threat was that which was on it. The barrels jostled and became loose as they bumped into one another, and the rope which was holding them snapped from the force, and one came undone and a barrel fell over. The barrel tipped over, falling off the truck, and the lid come off of it, spewing its contents of a green liquid substance. Watching from afar, the smug look on Katsuki's face had vanished and turned into shock at what was happening, having not expected the events to unfold the way that they had. Izuku could only look on in horror and opened his mouth to scream before it fell over him. 𝐭𝐸 Midoriya's greatest fear that one day, something terrible would happen to her son. It was every mother's deepest concern for tragedy to befall their child. She had seen how distraught he had been as he had been told that he couldn't become a hero and gently tried to comfort him the only way she could figure in the hope that he'd come to terms with it. While he still researched heroes obsessively, she was sure it was just a phase and he'd grow out of it soon enough. He'd settle down and find himself something to do with his life, like become a musician perhaps or a lawyer. Izuku had not come home from school the usual time. She wasn't surprised. He often wandered around town and went to hangouts just like other teenagers his age did, so she wasn't too concerned. It was then that she got the phone call from the hospital and the message which shook her being to the entire core and left her numb with fear. "Mrs. Midoriya, you must come to the hospital right away. Your son has been involved in a terrible accident." The day, an event that all parents dread for their children, had come. One which, despite their best wishes, had happened. The truck had been hauling radioactive waste when it had lost control, and one of the barrels had fallen off from it, and the contents had been spilled out onto Izuku's figure, namely in the area around his eyes. Other barrels had fallen off as well, risking contaminating the area, but heroes who were nearby had heard Izuku's cries and rushed to the scene, blocking off the section to prevent others from being affected and transporting him to a hospital to get him medical attention which he desperately needed. 𝐭𝐸 was told that her son was in intensive care and she had a million questions. How did this happen? What was Izuku doing near such a thing? "Let me see him. Please, you got to let me see him," she shouted, trying to push her way through, but was held back by nurses and staff telling her that if she went to his room, that she'd risk being infected as well. Standing silently there, having followed and went to the hospital as well to see what was happening, was Katsuki. None of his cockiness or arrogance that was usually on his face was there anymore. A stunned, sullen look was now across his face as he recalled everything that had happened only hours ago. He walked over to where 𝐭𝐸 was seated on a bench, dapping her eyes with a tissue which was one of many that belonged to a pile next to her that she had used since getting here. "Mrs. Midoriya," he said, and his voice was far different than his usual brash tone. "Back you go," 𝐭𝐸 said, recognizing the boy. She hadn't seen him in years, not since he stopped coming over to play with her son, but recognized him. "What are you doing here?" she said, and her features softened. "I'm sure Izuku, when he recovers, would be glad to know that his classmates have come to see him," she said with a smile. "Mrs. Midoriya," he said in a solemn tone, "what happened to Deku? I mean Izuku. You see, we was in the same area when I had set off an explosion. It was supposed to be just like a firecracker at a festival, that's all. Something small and couldn't dent a piece of cardboard. I didn't see or realize that the truck was coming. If I had, I'd never would've." "What are you saying?" 𝐭𝐸 asked, a look of disbelief on her face at what she was hearing. "Are you saying that you caused all this?" Katsuki couldn't say anything in response. He wanted to say 1,000 things about what had happened, but nothing could escape his lips. "How could you? How could you do such a thing?" 𝐭𝐸 shouted in a demanding and accusing tone to the boy, who could not say anything as she stood up. "What made you possibly think of doing such a thing?" she yelled at Katsuki, her voice echoing all over the hospital floor. "Do you not know what you have done to him?" It was an accident," he weakly tried to defend himself. "It was supposed to just be an harmless prank. That's all it was. I didn't mean for smack." Katsuki's head whipped back, the blonde boy having a red mark on his face now from the stinging slap he had just received from the sobbing mother who had struck him. "Monster, you're a monster," 𝐭𝐸 shouted as staff tended to her, trying to get her to calm down. Lying on the hospital bed, Izuku laid there silently, not moving a muscle. Bandages were taped around his damaged eyes. The green-haired boy laid there. The only sound was that of his breathing. A sniffle escaped him, and tears were seen falling out, passing through his bandages. The entire world around him was dark. He couldn't see a thing. Not since what had happened. His vision was gone. He couldn't even see that which was around his face. He could hear, taste, touch, and smell, but his eyesight were gone. He was scared and wanted to feel the touch of a human being, just to know that they were there with him. The whole world around him had vanished. It seemed the damage is too extensive. He heard the doctor's voice coming from the next room over. Even though it was past a solid wall, he could hear him as if he was right next to him. A tone of regret and sorrow in his voice, and he could hear the sobs and cries of his mother at what had happened to him. "There's nothing we can do to restore his vision, I'm afraid. It's a flat-out miracle that he's even still alive." Izuku felt a large lump in his throat, as if a bowling ball had been shoved down it, and a pain in his chest that wouldn't go away at what he was hearing. "Your son is blind, Miss Midoriya." Lying there on the bed, Izuku could only join his mother in crying at what had happened to him and how his dreams of being a hero were now gone forever. Lying aimlessly on the bed of his home, Izuku Midoriya stared up at the ceiling. Across his face, covering his eyes, were a pair of dark glasses that he now adorned over his damaged eyes. 10 days had passed since the incident, and it had been 6 days since he had returned home from the hospital. What was he going to do now? What could he do? Was his entire life over before it even began? Would he be living the rest of his life with his mom? The thought of putting such a burden on her sickened him. She had already been through so much beforehand. "My baby," 𝐭 had said as she laid next to him on the hospital bed, holding him in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "My poor baby," she whimpered as she cried, and tears went down his own face. Some of his classmates from school had dropped by to pay their sympathies to him. He had the feeling, though, that most only did it so to not feel guilty for having picked on him for not having a quirk, and so they could feel at ease about it. A twitch went up in his head as he realized that someone was approaching nearby. Strangely enough, ever since what had happened, he always seemed to know when a person was coming or if someone else was about to enter the room. "Izuku," 𝗀 said, standing in his doorway. "There's someone here who wants to see you," she said. "Tell them I don't want to see anyone," Izuku said, and turned over in bed facing away from her. "Izuku, please get up. You can't spend all your time in bed," his mother sternly lectured him. With a sigh, he rolled up out of bed and, stumbling a bit, walked over to the door, keeping his head away from her. Even though he couldn't see her face, he could easily picture the pained look on his mother's face at seeing him like this. 𝗀 looked on at her son, wishing that there was something that she could do, anything to help him. She'd gladly go through what he was going through if it meant he could see again. She was distraught knowing the pain he was in and how she couldn't do anything. And she was also ashamed of herself, of her actions at the hospital when her emotions had gotten the better of her and in the heat of moment had lashed out and struck Bakugo and called him a monster. She regretted it the moment she did so, feeling shame that she would strike a boy her son's age, as her mind had been racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, and hearing that Bakugo had been involved in the incident, something had snapped inside of her and she lashed out. She helped Izuku, leading him to the living room. "Ah," a voice said to them as they entered the living room, as a figure was seen seated on one of the couches in their home. If Izuku could still see, he would see that the man was a gaunt and thin man with blue eyes whose clothes clung to him and seemed too big for his body, as his appearance was odd, as he had blonde hair that was tied up. The man couldn't possibly weigh no more than 100 pounds tops. "You must be Izuku, correct?" "Izuku, this is Mr. Toshinori Yagi. He has offered to be a teacher for you," 𝗀 said to him, explaining who he was. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Izuki," Mr. Yagi said in a friendly and hospitable voice, extending his hand towards Izuku's own, which he reached over and shook, and for some reason his voice sounded similar, as if he had heard it before. "I'm here to offer my services to you. I've got a background and am a licensed instructor to teach those who are with disabilities," the man informed the two. "You want to teach me?" Izuku asked, a confused tone in his voice. "Correct, young man. I am a teacher who has worked with those who," the man paused, looking for the right word not to offend him, "are in similar positions such as you are. I can teach you Braille and how to get around, be able to live life as close as it was before what had happened. What do you say?" "No thanks," Izuku replied to him. "Thanks for coming. You can leave now." "Izuku, don't be rude to our guest," 𝗀 scolded him at his display. "I'm sorry, Mr. Yagi, but I'm not offended, ma'am," the man said with a smile. "I know he's going through a hard time right now, and it would not be the first time I was told no at first." "Izuku, listen to me," he said to him. "I'm not trying to make you feel lesser than others because of what's happened. Just because of what's happened does not mean your life is over. Let me help you. At least spend an hour with me before you make a decision." "I don't feel like it," Izuku muttered. 1 hour, 60 minutes, that's all I'm asking, and if you don't like it at the end, I'll leave and never bother you again." "Am I asking really all that much from you in exchange?" he asked him, and Izuku knew it was better to humor him. "All right then, but only 1 hour," he said to him. "Excellent. I'm sure 1 hour is more than enough time to convince you," the man said with a smile. "Now, Mrs. Midoriya, would you mind if I take your son outside?" "I trust you wouldn't mind if I did. We won't be going far." "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt. Just be careful. Izuku, don't forget your walking stick." "I know," Izuku replied, as he had a cane that he had to use the times he was going outside. "We'll be back before you know it," Mr. Yagi said as they exited the apartment and left the building. The two walked for a block before Izuku stopped. "Look, I realize that you want to help me, but there's nothing you can really do, Mr. Yagi," he said to him. "What I want more than anything is nothing that you can do." "Oh, are you certain of that?" the man questioned him. "It's not like you can turn me into a hero, what with the way that I am. I'm blind and have no quirk, so that means that hey, what's going on?" Izuku was cut off when he was suddenly effortlessly picked up off the ground, and he felt the air bracing against him as he felt like he was flying. After several harrowing seconds, he felt his feet touch the ground again. Where the heck am I?" he said, moving around when a hand grabbed him. "Easy, kid. If you start running, you're going to fall off the roof of this place and make yourself a nasty dent on the pavement. We're on the roof of the apartment building of where you live." How on earth did we get up here?" Izuku shouted, his heart pounding against his chest. "Simple, I leapt up," Mr. Yaga's voice said to him. "What?" Izuku said, and he noticed that the man's voice had changed. It was filled with more confidence and it sounded inspiring. "But how? Come on now. Are you not my biggest fan from what I figured out just by looking at your home?" the man said to him in an amused tone. Do you not know all my attacks and catchphrases? Surely you know that everything will be fine now that I am here. Izuku's eyes widened behind the glasses he wore. The All Might, he weakly whispered, not believing what he was hearing. It couldn't be him. Yes, it is me, he said, and the thin, shriveled-up man had transformed into a giant muscular man with bulging biceps and a chest that could stop a full-speed bus just by slamming into it. The symbol of justice and peace for the world. All Might proclaimed, announcing who he was. This can't be real. Izuku shouted, his eyes watering in shock and awe at the fact that his idol was standing before him. Oh, how he wished he wasn't blind right now so he could see him with his own eyes, as he had long dreamed of standing next to him one day. How is this possible? What your mother saw beforehand was merely a form that I have to take. A civilian identity, you could call it. But as of late I'm forced to be in it more and more often. The giant of a man said to him. I don't understand. Izuku said to him, what I'm about to tell you, Izuki, is something only a select few know, and you mustn't tell anyone. If people found out about this, I'm afraid there would be panic and fear spreading throughout. The truth of the matter is, Izuku, while everyone thinks I'm invincible, sadly I'm not. I've taken a lot of hits and grievous wounds in my lifetime as a hero. I've needed extensive surgery in order to survive one especially nasty blow. The toll it's taken on my body means I can only be in my strong form for about 3 hours a day anymore at the most now. The rest of the time I'm in a shriveled up form and state. He said to him, this is the price I paid for my deeds and heroics. But don't think for a second that I wouldn't do it all over again if I had the choice. I don't regret any of my actions. Izuku listened into him, not knowing this about his hero. You also seek to become a hero, do you not? All Might said to him, and Izuku looked on at him, a bit surprised that he knew. Many do aspire to become one. And you are no different, are you? Yes, but I don't have a quirk, Izuku said to him in a solemn voice, his head down. I see. All Might responded to him in understanding. I'm quirkless. People tell me over and over that since I don't have one that I can't become a hero. I thought that maybe if I trained and worked hard and used the knowledge that I learned from studying heroes like you, then maybe I could become one. That I'd show it was possible for people without quirks to be ones as well. If I had met you earlier, I would have asked you if I could become a hero in spite of not having one. But now, because of this, he said and motioned with his right hand to his face, I can't ever become a hero. My idol, who I look up to since I was 4 years old, is standing right in front of me and I can't even see him. Izuku finished in a bitter tone of voice. There are heroes out there without quirks, you know. All Might said, comforting him. They are the ones who arrive first before those like myself do, risking their lives every day in the face of danger despite having no powers. And some are blind as well, or only able to use the upper half of their body. Have you considered becoming a detective perhaps? Izuku was about to respond when he suddenly detected something. Do you smell something? Izuku asked him. All Might said and lifted up his arm and took a whiff of his armpit. I'm smelling gas. Come now, I know I had a chili bean burrito for lunch, but it's surely not kicking in now. All Might protested. No, wait a sec, Izuku said and sniffed again. I can hear something as well. A hissing sound coming down below in the building, he said, looking down at the floors below the roof. All Might looked on at him. Are you certain? Yes, I'm hearing and smelling something. Something foul, it seems like, Izuku said as he had a feeling that something bad was going on. Down below, right? All Might repeated. I'm going to check there, I'll be right back, he said, and without uttering another word leapt off down the rooftop of the building to the ground below. Izuku was stunned at how carelessly he had done it. A few minutes later he had leapt back up to the rooftop, his feet slamming against the pavement. Izuku, he was right. All Might confirmed to him there was something going on in the basement of the building just now. There was a gas leakage. The pipes are old and rusted, and due to it are leaking small puffs of gas. While not much of a threat now, in due time they would become truly dangerous. Fortunately, I was able to bend and twist them back into shape so they would stop, and made a call to a repairman to come fix and replace them. You saved the day again, All Might, Izuku said to him, but All Might shook his head. I'm afraid not. If not for you, not even I would have noticed it. You saved their lives, Midoriya, including that of your mother's. All Might proclaimed to him, shocking him that he would say that to him. His hero would say that he was the one who had done it. Izuku, if you hadn't detected that gas leak just now, disaster could have possibly struck in a short while, as people who live here could have been poisoned from inhaling it, or a fire could have broken out. If not for you, who knows what could have happened. I didn't do anything, Izuku protested. That is where you are wrong. It's the little things that people overlook that shows the difference between true heroes. Some wait to act until disaster strikes, but it is better to be there and stop it from happening that makes the difference between saving and losing lives. Preventing disasters before they even happen is something we must also do. You saved many lives today. Just imagine the damage it could have caused if you hadn't noticed it. Izuku was quiet, stunned that his hero was praising him. All Might Izuku turned to the right. The hero commanded him. What do you hear? Izuku turned and looked on and focused. I hear cars, people talking on their cell phones to one another, children playing. And how far do you think they are from you? I don't know, 10 feet I guess. Try multiplying that by 10. Not to mention we're on the top of a tall building as well and you're hearing them as if they're right next to you. All Might said as he looked on at him. Izuku was silent. All Might, what does this all mean? It means that something happened to you when the incident occurred. Despite the loss of your eyesight, your other 4 senses that you possess, touch, smell, hearing, and taste have apparently been greatly increased beyond the norm of ordinary people. Your hearing has extended to that of several blocks and you detected the smell of gas through multiple floors even though we are outside. Perhaps it was the radiation that caused it, or maybe you obtained a quirk after all when you lost your sight. But one thing is for certain, you are not helpless like you think you are. You said that you want to become a hero. Well then, do you truly wish to become a hero? All Might asked him. Answer me, Izuku Midoriya, is that what you truly want more than anything else in the world? To become a hero and symbolize what peace and justice means? Yes, Izuku proclaimed to him with all his heart. Then, I shall train you. All Might declared to him as he would take him on as his apprentice from this day forward. Izuku smiled for the first time ever since what had happened as tears started to form behind his glasses as he took them off. After all he had been through, he would in fact be able to become a hero, and his idol would teach him. It was as if his nightmare that he had been living had turned into a beautiful dream. Please don't cry, All Might said to him. All right, Izuku said as he sniffed and dried his tears. In 10 months the applications and testing for UA will be opened as enrollment begins. Right now even with your enhanced senses you won't last. So we'll have let's see. All Might stopped and began counting on his fingers. 3 months with 30. And February's gonna be a leap year. That leaves 31 for the rest. Only 305 days to get you up to shape and be able to be accepted. He told him as he rounded up the math. Izuku, this is not going to be an easy task. It will be very grueling and hard work as I'm going to test your limits of how much you can take and I want you to go beyond past them plus ultra. Once we start we cannot quit, so tell me, are you ready? Yes, All Might, Izuku declared to him, and All Might smiled in return as that was what he wanted to hear. The months passed, through Halloween to Christmas and beyond as Midoriya was put through grueling training regime by All Might, strengthening and hardening his body as he developed and worked on gaining muscle mass as he did physical tasks, including clearing all the debris off of a beach that had been piled up. He had given his mother a diet that he wanted now, a proper diet of select foods in order to boost his cardio and stamina. He felt bad for lying to her about what was really going on as she thought All Might in his shriveled up form was just a special needs teacher. But it was for the best right now if she only saw him as that. The last thing was more put on her if she learned that he was training to be a hero. He returned to school after the first week of training, having learned how to read Braille, and resumed his classes. His classmates and teacher were a bit surprised how he was able to transition back so well. Sir, you dropped something just now when you passed by, and it sounds like it's going to rain soon, so you might want to close the window, he said to his teacher as he went over a lesson the board, and the teacher stopped what he was doing and looked. He had heard him drop what sounded like a paper just now. Oh, you're right, Izuku, the teacher said and extended his arm and picked a paper up, a bit surprised he had noticed it as well as the clouds outside were getting darker, showing signs of raining. Katsuki, he had not interacted with him since the incident, and Katsuki it seemed was avoiding him. The two had not spoken to one another in that time period. Izuku wondered if he would ever talk to him again. He hadn't even mocked or taunted him anymore like he used to, or even call him Deku. Katsuki looked on over at Izuku, who was seated and jotting down notes and mumbling to himself, acting despite what had happened that the incident never had happened. One would think he hadn't lost his sight with the way he went. He used a walking stick to move, but he seemed to know where he was going now. Watching on, the blonde muttered under his breath as he thought back to what had happened months ago. Izuku began realizing just what his enhanced senses were capable of doing now. By focusing, he could hear a person several blocks away talking, and also found out he could hear their heartbeat as well. He also discovered that if he pressed his hand against the ink of a page, he could read the words on it as if they were before him, enabling him to rediscover the joy of reading books once more. A classmate at lunch went to play a cruel joke by secretly placing hot sauce on his sandwich while another distracted him, but he detected the smell of it, realizing what was going on and waiting until others had entered the room, providing a distraction, switched it with his classmate, and so he enjoyed a tuna sandwich while the other had to rush for the nearest water fountain to douse flames in his mouth. Another of his abilities that he detected was a type of radar he now seemed to possess. He could tell where things were at in his surroundings. While he couldn't see them, he could make out their shapes and know where they were so he wouldn't be able to bump into them by accident. He was able to help his mother out around the house with household chores. All Might put him through the ringer with his workout, but the mighty hero always knew when to stop for the day when he could tell that he couldn't go on even though he wanted to. If your body breaks down and you can't continue for a time, then all the stuff we did earlier would have gone to waste, he said to Izuku, explaining to him one day when he had said he was fine and protested about wanting to continue although he was knee-deep in sweat and barely able to stand. All Might also enrolled him in a hand-to-hand martial arts program at a school which was funded by and owned by him that was used by the police. He had Izuku learning to fight in hand-to-hand combat, including Aikido, Jujutsu, and other forms of combat, and had taken up fighting with his walking stick, learning to use it like a baton. As winter turned into spring and then to summer, Izuku's body had become strong as he had bulked up, having put on many pounds of muscle. He was no longer the skinny boy who could be picked on. He was athletic and able to do flips and cartwheels as he learned acrobatic maneuvers. Holy stinking super crap! All Might exclaimed at the top of his lungs 3 weeks before Yua was supposed to start as he looked on at the scene before him. The beach, which before had once been littered with debris from old appliances to run-down bikes and other sorts of trash, was now clear and filled with nothing but white sand and clear water. He was impressed beyond even his expectations. "How did I do?" a voice said, and he looked up and saw that Izuku was standing on top of a rock on the beach looking on at him. "You did good, kid," All Might said, and flashed him a thumbs up in approval. "When I first put you up to this, I thought at best it'd be a day or two when you finished, but you did it with time to spare," he said to Izuku, who smiled at him. "Now get down here." Izuku nodded and leapt down, performing a flip and landed on the sand before him. "Now then, it's time for your final lesson at hand," All Might said, and reaching up plucked a hair out of his head. "Take this, Midoriya," he said, handing him the strand of hair. "What do I do with it? Swallow it?" Izuku asked skeptically as he held it in his hands. "Correct," All Might said to him, and a look of confusion appeared on his face. "To obtain one for all, you must consume the DNA of the previous user. That is the only way one can do so and inherit it. Upon doing so, you shall gain my quirk." He instructed him on what he must do. "All Might, do you think I'm worthy of having your quirk?" Izuku asked him. This was what all the training had come down to. From learning to live with being blind, to training and working his butt off this whole time and learning to defend himself, having been taught hand-to-hand combat, to using his other senses. One for all has been passed down from hero to hero. You shall be the 9th generation to have hold it, All Might stated to him. The purpose of these past 10 months has been not only to get your body into shape and develop muscle, but also so that you shall be able to handle it. If I gave it to you beforehand and you tried to use it, your body would likely explode. Now, I'm certain that you'll be able to withstand its power, but do not solely rely on it. Your other senses and skills you've developed have made you into the capable person you are today. I want you to rely on them just as much as it, if not even more so than One for All, as they can be just as powerful if you use them wisely. All Might, if I obtain One for All, will it restore my vision upon doing so?" Izuku asked him as he held the strand of hair. All Might was silent, his arms crossed over his massive chest. "I am unsure, but I sincerely doubt it. I don't want to raise you up with false hopes, Midoriya. I doubt that if you obtain it that it will heal your eyes. A previous wielder before me, I was told, only had one leg, and he did not sprout a new one upon being granted it, as he fought with a prosthetic leg his whole career. Maybe your eyes will heal, maybe it won't," he informed him as Izuku held the strand of hair in his hands. Taking a deep breath, he opened his mouth and plopped All Might's hair into it. He gagged at the taste of human hair, but forced himself to swallow it as it went down his throat. "H-A-H-A-H-A. Well, better down in and then up and out, I always say," All Might said with a laugh at the display as Izuku coughed and cleared his throat. Izuku suddenly began to feel different, his body. It felt stronger, as if bursting with energy that he couldn't begin to explain, waiting to come out. "I feel different," he said, as if felt a glowing warmth inside of him just now. "That is the power that is growing inside your body now. You are now the next chosen bearer of One for All. The powers that which I had are now yours also," All Might confirmed to him, and he felt a light on him and looked on at the rising sun over the beach horizon. "Take it in, young one. This is who are you now," All Might said, stretching his arms out, feeling the sun's embrace. "Feel the illumination of the great ball of fire down upon you, and the view of the crystal water beach that which you yourself have created. Do you not see the beauty of which it possesses?" he asked him. "Izuku, tell me, do you see it?" "I can't. I'm blind, remember?" "Oh, right," All Might said as the wind had been taken out of his sails at being reminded. "Now then, Midoriya, you need to tell your mother that you are applying for you." Yeah, wait, what?" Izuku asked, turning to look at him. "Just bring it up during tea time or something. Perhaps once she's had a glass of wine or two," All Might suggested to him. "But I thought you was going to." Izuku protested, and All Might shook his head. "Supervillains I can handle, but mothers are something else, and a foe I find that not even I can defeat. You're going to have to tell her about this. Once you do that, I'll start giving you some pointers on how to use One for All without risking tearing your body to pieces." "Ciao," he said, and departed, leaving him there pondering how he was going to tell his mom about all this. The next morning, Inko got ready to get up and make breakfast when she came to the kitchen and saw to her surprise a meal of pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, and hash browns with a glass of orange juice laid out and prepared for her. "What is this?" she said in shock at what she was seeing. "Good morning, Mom," Izuku said to her as he revealed himself to her, having gotten up early to cook and make breakfast for her. "I thought you'd like it if I cooked for you for a change." "You did all this?" she asked him, and he smiled at her. "Yes, so go ahead and dig in, Mom," he told her. His mother smiled before picking up a utensil and began to eat. While he had relearned how to cook, never had he made a gourmet meal like this before. 𝐭 ate breakfast, which was delicious, as she ate in appreciative silence. Izuku looked on at his mother watching her eat, waiting for the right moment to spring the news on her. "That was delicious, Izuku," 𝗏 said with a beaming smile. "Thank you for a wonderful meal," she told him as she was drinking the rest of her juice. Izuku took a deep breath as it was all or nothing. "Mom," he said to her, "there's a reason why I did this." Mom, I want to enroll in 𝐂𝐴, he told her. 𝗏's eyes widened at what she heard. "What did you just say?" she asked, putting the cup down, nearly dropping and spilling it. "I want to enroll in the hero school." 𝗏 looked on shock before scowling. "Izuku, I thought we've put this hero business behind us," she lectured him sternly. "But Mom, enough, Izuku," she said to him, raising her voice, letting her disappointment known. "You know that you can't with your condition. There's a big difference between cooking me breakfast and what you are saying. What, can't you just try to have a normal life instead? There are people with quirks after all like me who don't try to become heroes." Izuku gritted his teeth. "But Mom, I can do this. You know that I can. All Might himself said that I could." "All Might? When did you ever meet? He's Mr. Yagi, Mom. These past 10 months. I'm sorry I've been hiding it from you, but he's been training me. I knew that if you found out you'd order me to stop. All this time I've been working with him. It's because of him I'm able to lead a functional life now." "Izuku, you can't. You are. I'm not helpless, Mom," Izuku exclaimed, raising his voice to her, surprising 𝗏 that he did. "I'm blind, yes, but that doesn't mean I can't do anything anymore. I know, ever since I lost my eyes, that you think that I am and that you need to hold my hand all the time like I'm a newborn kitten, but I'm not. I can take care of myself. I can get anywhere now and know where I'm going." "Mom, please," he begged her. "Let me do this. I need to do this. Ever since I was 4, when I was first told I couldn't be a hero, the desire to be one has only grown stronger inside me," Izuku said to her. "When I lost my eyesight, I was about to give up, but now I've found out that I can still become a hero and save people. This is a second chance for me. I've learned how to defend and take care of myself as I've learned self-defense, and I won't ever use it to hurt others. You know that I can walk from here to school and back without any assistance now and go anywhere in town. If you prohibit me from doing so, I might as well go dig a hole outside for a grave, because I'd be dead inside." "Mom, you don't have to worry about me," he said to her, pleading with her to let him do this. "Mom, please, you've got to let me at least try out." 𝗏 was silent for a long moment, not saying anything to her son as she listened to what he said to her just now. "The day that I stop worrying about you is the day I no longer can call myself your mother." 𝗏 replied to him, her voice soft. "I will always worry about you so long as I live. But I know for how long you've been dreaming of being a hero and how much it means to you, and if I don't allow you the chance, I'm basically robbing you of all your hopes and dreams, and that's the worst thing that a mother could ever do, and something I can't ever do again." "Mom," Izuku said to her, "when you was 4 years old and spent all day on the computer watching videos after being told you couldn't become a hero, you asked me if you could become one after all." 𝗏 said as she remembered that day and the broken-hearted look on his face, with tears streaming down his face as he asked her. "Instead of supporting you, I just did what everyone else did and told you that you couldn't. I should have said yes. I should have said yes 1,000 times that you could. It's not your fault, Mom," Izuku said as both had been broken-hearted at what had happened that day. "I never ever meant to hurt you," she said as tears had formed in her eyes as she wrapped her arms around him in a hug and he hugged her back. "And I apologize for doing so. Any parent's greatest wish is to see their child achieve and succeed in their dreams. But please promise me this: when you go to enroll at 𝐂𝐴, you won't do anything reckless." "I promise, Mom," Izuku said to her, a tear falling down his cheek. "I'm going to make you proud." 𝗏 smiled at her son. "I already am proud of you." Nearly a month later, Izuku Midoriya found himself standing in front of 𝐂𝐴, preparing to take the first step on his path towards becoming a hero he always dreamed of becoming. Izuku stood before the gates to 𝐂𝐴. Just beyond this was entry into the famous school for hopeful heroes in the entire world. His entire dream was right in front of him now, but the blind boy did not step forward despite others doing so and not paying any attention to him standing there. Despite wanting to step forward and go in, his feet felt like they were glued in quick-drying cement. He stood there on the spot looking ahead, as this was everything he had been working for. The chance to enroll in 𝐂𝐴 and start training to become a hero. But what if they don't accept me because I'm blind? What if I don't even get a chance to try out? He thought to himself as sweat poured down his brow, making a puddle, thinking of them automatically turning him down once they saw him. All my work this past year will have been for nothing? Nothing. He thought as disheartenment filled him all over. "Are you nervous?" a voice suddenly said, startling him. "You've been standing there like a statue for the past 5 minutes. The voice, which was a female, said to him. "Huh," he said, turning his head. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, but I was wondering if you was okay. A female said to him. Oh, sorry, just first time jitters, that's all, he said as he rubbed his head. A girl with long dark green hair that she had tied in a bow at the bottom looked on at the odd boy as she had arrived and noticed him. My name's 𝗧𝗵𝗲, but you can call me 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿. Are you here to take part? He asked her. Yes, I've enrolled in the hero course and I guess you have as well. What's your quirk? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 asked him, putting her finger to her chin, wondering why he was wearing dark glasses like that. My quirk is enhanced senses, Izuku said. It wasn't exactly a lie. He did have those in his other 4 senses. He felt it was too early to tell people he had one for all, considering he was still working on it. Every time he used it so far, he was lucky if his arm hadn't been blown off. All Might had told him it would take time and training before he could fully use it without risking injury to himself. At best, he was at 2% right now after 3 weeks of training and could only use it in brief spurts. Good thing All Might knew a healer who could fix him up in less than an hour, even if her methods were unorthodox. Whoa, that's cool, a voice said, and they turned their attention as a boy was heard approaching. So you can hear whatever's around you or something like that. Who are you? Izuku asked him, and the boy had wild red hair and a confident look on his face as he stepped forward. Ijiro Kirishima, the manliest student here, he proclaimed, sticking a thumb into his chest. Nice shades, by the way, he said to Izuku, unaware of what they really were for. Izuku Midoriya. And this person I just met is 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I told you to call me Tsu, she reminded him. Well, I guess I'll see you around. Maybe we'll be paired up together in how they test us, Kirishima stated before walking off. Well, shall we go in now? Tsuyu asked him. Yeah, sure, he said to her. So what do you think will be the test? Tsuyu asked him as they went up the steps. I wonder if it's just one part or if there will be multiple parts to it. I don't know, it could be anything, Izuku responded, as All Might hadn't told him about what he'd be going through. Well, personally I am hoping it's multi. That way if I do bad one I can make up for it on the others. Makes sense to me, he said as he walked and talked with her. Someone suddenly brushed right by him. Watch it, Deku, the person said, and Izuku recognized that voice instantly. Katsuki, he said as he heard him walk off. He shouldn't have been surprised though. Katsuki had long made it known he was going to attend you. Greetings applicants, welcome today's hopefuls and tomorrow's heroes. Allow me to introduce myself. A man with flashy clothing and hairstyle said, his voice echoing all around. If you heard my voice before, then I'm sure that you know me automatically. I am the one and only, oft imitated but never duplicated, Present Mike, he exclaimed, introducing himself. For being here today, you are all wishing to become the next top hero in the world. However, only a few of you shall be allowed to pass and be able to attend you. I know you don't want to wait, and neither do I, so let's go over the rules. They were told of and informed of the rules and process. There was robots that was unleashed inside a makeshift city. Their assignment was to find and destroy them. There was different types that had different point values, some worth more than others. They would be judged and based on how they defeated them. If they gained enough points from it in the writing test after this, they would pass and be accepted into 𝐒𝐻. Smash some bots, is that it? Katsuki said with an arrogant smirk. All you background and fodder characters might as well just head home right now. I'll crush them all by myself. Hey, who you callin' a background character? Ijiro shouted angrily, stepping forward. Get the hell out of my face, tomato hair. Katsuki snapped at him. A boy with glasses stepped forward. Need I remind you that we are supposed to be fighting the robots, not one another, he said in an annoyed tone of voice. Buzz off 4 eyes, Katsuki said in annoyance. How rude. It would be wise to get to know the names of others. You might need their help someday. The short-haired boy said, the day I need help from the likes of you is when pigs fly. Oink. A applicant with the head of a boar said in confusion, thinking they were talking about him. Katsuki's making friends as usual way, Izuku said, shaking his head at hearing at the display. Now then, boys to the left and girls to the right. Follow to the changing room where you'll be wearing the outfits assigned for it. Once you've all changed, you'll be led to the testing room, Present Mike said. But first, where are my manners? A word from Principal Nezu. Let's all give him a big hand. The entire gathered group looked on, expecting to see him enter, each having their own visual in their mind of what he looked like. To all their surprise, a small rodent-like man wearing a suit appeared and approached the stage. Thank you, the mouse man spoke up. To all hopefuls, remember the reason why you chose to become a hero and always think of it every day. Only a few of you, I'm afraid, will be able to succeed and pass today. But a true hero is one who never gives up no matter the overwhelming odds he or she faces. Therefore, I ask that you only give it your all today and every day, he said, raising his hands up, and the room cheered. After changing into a blue jumpsuit outfit, the hopefuls were herded and taken to a large room where the practical test would be held. Whoa, they built an entire city in here. How'd they do that? A girl who had her shirt curled upwards and sleeves rolled so to expose her stomach and arms said, looking on your mark, get set, GOOO. Present Mike shouted as the test then began. At that, all hopeful applicants started as they charged into the makeshift city. Izuku ran, keeping back in the distance as he didn't want to get caught up in the rush. He jogged at an even pace as he made his way. His radar sense was nearly overflowing and going haywire with how many people and stuff was here. He continued on, going past a corner when suddenly a robot lunged out at him. Only his advanced hearing saved him as he ducked under the attack as it rolled about on a pair of wheels attacked to its legs. The bot, which was worth 1 point, revved up its engine and charged at Izuku, who got out of the way again. Not to be deterred at you, turned and came at him again. Now, he mentally shouted and did a flip over it. The robot smashed into a wall, stunning it, and Izuku took that happening to strike the leg and damage it and knock off the wheel. The bot staggered, trying to balance on one leg when Izuku destroyed the other leg, making it fall down and deactivate. Listening closely, he had heard the joints and gears in the bot, knowing where to strike and damage it. The past near year had proved invaluable for him in learning how to fight and strike an opponent. "That's one," he said before going off as he could hear the sounds of fighting. Principal Nezu sipped a cup of tea as he watched on from afar as the scene looked like the 4th of July was happening, what with all the explosions and fighting that was going on. He was in a room filled with several TV screens giving him full access to every inch of the arena. The machines were designed only to wound, not kill. They had sensors installed in them that recognized that if a student was too injured to continue fighting, to leave them alone, a result of numerous lawsuits in the past when some had went overboard in attacking. "Oh yeah," Ijiro shouted as he used his quirk of hardening to withstand the attacks as his skin broke the pincer of a crab like 1 pointer. "This is almost too easy," he said, and got ready to punch and shatter it when it exploded to his surprise. "Hey, that was mine," he shouted in anger as he saw Katsuki having destroyed it, who arrogantly smirked at him. "It's survival of the fittest, don't you know? And you're looking at them," he boasted as he then destroyed a wasp robot. The red-haired boy fumed as no way was he going to be outdone by him. A yawning sound was heard as 2 heroes were seen looking on at the battle that was going on. The other was Present Mike, whilst the other, who had yawned, seemed unimpressed with the whole thing. "Pretty good haul of recruits this year, eh, 𝐬𝐸?" Present Mike asked the baggy-haired instructor, who constantly looked ready to doze off. "I've seen better," he muttered as he saw a pink-skinned girl use acid to melt the arms off of one while a boy shoot out a laser from his belly to destroy the head of another. "Once again, the standards are the same though. Whoever breaks the most stuff is best suited for being a hero," he said with a shake of his head. "Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, they say, you know," Hiyaji said to him, and Aizawa shook his head, not pleased. "I've been trying for years to get them to change how they do the testing, but the public is more concerned with how explosive and flashy you can be," 𝐬𝐸 muttered to himself. Those with quirks like the loud one known as Katsuki were shoe-ins to pass. Others with less offensive-minded quirks, like a boy he saw with purple hair earlier before the day started, who had been looking on with envy at the others, were at a disadvantage. "Endeavor's son is doing quite well," Present Mike said, and they saw a boy with white and red hair with a burn mark on his face freeze the legs of 2 at once, causing them to topple over and crash. "But it appears that he's only using half of his power. Why isn't he using his father's powers also? From what I hear, he has refused to use his old man's power, relying solely on that of his mother's instead to spite him after the upbringing he's had under him," Aizawa said in a lazy tone as he knew everything about Shoto Todoroki, the son of the infamous second-ranked hero. Izuku used his martial arts training to dispose of bots, racking up points. His strength body able to knock them down. "No good though," he said as nearby a boy electrocuted himself to destroy 3 at once. "These bots I've taken out are only 1-pointers, it feels like. I need to knock off a 3-pointer if I want to have a chance soon," he said, and leaping up scaled a wall, perching on it, and his nose detected the scent of ink. "There," he said, and turned left, having detected a fight. A bot that was like an octopus squirted out an ink-like substance all around itself from its nose, spraying those that got too close to make them slip up and batting them with its appendages. A boy fired tape from his arms at one to hold it, but the bot was too strong and it tossed him aside. It then lifted its head up and began spinning all of its appendages around. Anyone who tried to get close to attack would pay dearly. Izuku waited from the rooftop as others had backed away, as he waited until it stopped and jumped down and laid on a tentacle. "Nice day, eh?" he asked casually, and the bot lifted up a tentacle to swat him, only for him to roll out of the way and it destroyed its own arm. "Too bad," he said, getting on another one, and got off in the nick of time again, leaving it only with 6. "You're faster than that, aren't you?" he taunted it, angering the bot, unaware that it was doing what it wanted him to do. It prepared to fire at him when Izuku kicked it square in its nose, turning it upward and making it dose itself in its own ink, blinding its eyes, unable to see as it fumbled backwards. "Now the finisher," he shouted, charging at it towards the edge of the roof. He leapt up and delivered a leaping kick, staggering it, and it fell backwards before exploding. "Not bad," he heard a voice and recognized it as the one from earlier in the day. "Name's 𝐸𝐸," the navy-haired teenager said. "I noticed you standing in front of the gates and wondered if you had fainted standing up," he said to Izuku. "Now I see you are capable, although I haven't seen your quirk fully yet, but do not believe you shall be the top one here." he said before he speed off using his thruster on his legs to go. Tsuyu leapt around, sticking to the walls of cities, staying up high to catch her breath. Thanks to her quirk, Frog, she could get to places like this without any trouble. I wonder how Izuku's doing, she thought to herself. Oh well, no matter, I need to focus on myself for now, she said, and spotted a girl with brown hair whose quirk enabled her to levitate objects and had a group of 2 pointers immobilized and crashed them to the ground. Tsuyu spotted one flyer about to strike the girl from behind when she leapt and dive-bombed onto it and crashed it to the floor. The girl turned and saw that Tsuyu had helped her. Thanks for the help, the brown-haired girl said, and Tsuyu saluted her in response before leaping off. She saw a grasshopper 2-point bot on top of a roof and landed before it. The bug robot's eyes lit on before hopping at her, which she dodged. I don't think you can match me when it comes to leaping, Ribbit, Tsuyu said, and as if taking that as a challenge, the 2-point bot leapt up high thinking to crush her, and Tsuyu dodged, leaping aside in time. It clicked its sharp machine-made mandibles together and lunged again, looking to skewer her. She lashed out with her tongue and it extended several feet and wrapped and entangled the bot's legs. The grasshopper attempted to leap up, but her tongue held it in place, making it jump a short distance before falling and topple over. It then lifted its head up and saw Tsuyu leaping down at it in a diving kick, which knocked its head clean off. Nodding, she went off to find some more. Many of the point bots had been picked off as the 2 senior heroes looked on. The standouts and those who will qualify are starting to break away from the pack, Present Mike noted as they saw 2 girls, one who could create things from her body and another who was using sonic attacks, working together on a group. A boy with the head of a bird lured and baited one towards him onto to emit a dark shadow from his chest and destroy it, as another with super strength smashed 2 together. A 3-point bot shaped like a turtle was shown getting hit with a barrage of attacks, but its thick shell provided it much protection. The 3-point bot hid directly inside its shell, and none of the attacks seemed to be able to hurt it or get past its titanium shell. Forget it, I can't waste the last of my powers on it, the blonde boy from before said, clutching his stomach in pain, and ran off. Sensing that no one else was nearby, the turtle bot cautiously poked out its vulnerable head. A spit of toxic liquid shot out and hit its face, and it let out a robotic moan of pain. Your shell if impenetrable, but not your face, Tsuyu said, having waited for her chance to attack, and spat out another toxic shot. The face was being damaged as it was partly melted from the liquid, burning its face, and burrowed its head back into its shell. It then with deceiving agility charged forward at Tsuyu, who wasn't expecting it to be so fast and was knocked into the air. Tsuyu cried out in pain as her leg injured as she fell on it wrong when she landed. She hissed through her mouth as she tried to stand and pull herself up, but to no avail as she couldn't support it. The turtle bot prepared to attack again as it got ready to charge. Tsuyu took a deep breath, bracing for impact, when to her surprise she was picked up out of the air as the turtle smashed into a building. She opened her eyes and saw that Izuku had a hold of her, having got her before she was hit. Good thing I was nearby and heard what was going on, he asked her, running a short distance before setting her down. Tsuyu, can you walk? Izuku asked her, offering a hand to her. Come on, we can't stay here, he said, and she took it and he pulled her up. Here, let's find someplace for you to rest, he said, having Tsuyu lean on him for support as they walked. You know I told you to call me Tsu, right? Not much longer, Present Mike said, taking a sip of Java as he and Aizawa looked on. Good, I need a nap, Aizawa said, stiffing a yawn as he wanted this to end already. They heard a crashing sound just now, and watching on saw a boy with the hairdo of grapes was sent flying through the air before smashing into and through a wall, having foolishly challenged one of the 0-pointers, thinking to show off. Ouch, clean up on aisle 4, Aizawa dryly said as that boy was done, as no way was he continuing the test after that kind of blow. Looks like the final boss has arrived, he mentioned, as this one was over twice the size of the others and made of far stronger and denser metal than others were. Its footsteps echoed and thundered across the ground. It's about time a damn challenge actually showed up, Katsuki said as he saw it, and focusing his power fired an explosion at it. When the smoke cleared, the bot stood there unscathed. The hell, Katsuki exclaimed in shock, and the bot rose up its clawed hand and lashed at him, forcing him to move out of the way. Now we'll see if they knew when it's best to cut their losses and run when facing a foe they can't beat, Aizawa said, looking on as things were finally getting interesting. The giant robot had a small hole in his stomach compartment which suddenly began to glow as it emitted and gathered up energy. It then unleashed a laser that shot around the area, forcing all in its path to scatter. That one's too heavy for my quirk to use, Achako, the girl who used levitation earlier, said as her powers would be useless on it. I can only stay out of the way. Same here, what appeared to just be an outfit said. I don't think being invisible will be enough. The floating pile of clothes said, which freaked Achako out. 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes left, Present Mike announced. Izuku helped Tsuyu sit down and propped and checked her leg for damage. Can you walk now, Tsuyu? He asked the girl, who grunted in confirmation. A little, Ribbit. It's just a minor sprain, that's all it feels like. I'll be fine in a couple of minutes once I can put some weight on it, she said to him, and Izuku nodded to her. Stay here out of the way until you can. He told her. Wait, what are you going to do? She asked him. I can hear that others need help as well. He said to her before running off. Be careful, Izuku. 𝗬𝗪 called out to him. Choosing to save a fellow student even though he thinks it wouldn't benefit him but does so anyway. Principal 𝗧𝗪 muttered to himself, crossing his arms over his chest. A hero always looks out to ensure that others are fine first, he said, allowing a smile to form, but another scene caught his attention. That 0-pointer's going to be a hassle, he mused. The 0-pointer was nigh unstoppable, as it was not meant to be defeated but only to be avoided, as it smashed through buildings with its claws and fired its laser. Anything in its vicinity was in danger, as it showed no discretion in what it attacked. Hey, come on. Someone help us. This thing's gone crazy. A boy shouted as they huddled together for protection beneath a building from it, but the bot gripped it and tore it in two, making them scream. In his viewing area, Principal 𝗧𝗪 got ready to press a button that would automatically shut it down, but stopped, his eyes widening slightly at what he saw. Hey, over here, you pile of used cars. A voice shouted at the 0-pointer, trying to get its attention. Come get me, you Gundam reject, he yelled, and as if taking offense to his taunts, the bot slowly turned around and seeing Izuku focusing its attention on him, who then began running. The bot slowly stomped after him, thus giving the others room and time to escape as 𝗂𝗪𝗄 used her quirk to levitate pieces out of the way for them. The 0-pointer looked on at Izuku, the single glowing red eye it possessed glaring down at him. A humming sound began to emit from it as it was going to prepare its attack. From what I've been hearing from before, when it attacks, it takes an estimated 15 seconds or so for it to fully charge up and fire from the hole in its stomach. That means I gotta attack while I have the chance, Izuku thought to himself. But I don't think I'm fast enough to get in range and attack before it can. Even if I did, I couldn't do any damage. My only real choice is to use one for all, he said, and clutched a hand into a fist, preparing to use it even though he knew the risks. I just hope that it doesn't kill. Wait, what's that? He said as his foot brushed up at something. He reached down and picked up a medium-sized rock, holding it and guessing the weight and full size of it. This might work, he said to himself as he held it in his arms. He could hear it charging up and knew he only had one shot as he hoisted it and ran at the 0-pointer, which was almost done and fully charged up. This isn't going to end well, Aizawa said as he got ready to make a move, as that kid was going to be nothing more than a stain on the ground after this. He didn't know what the hell he was thinking, but it was suicidal, whatever it was. A hand suddenly gripped his shoulder and he looked and was surprised to see All Might standing there holding him in place. Wait, let's see what happens, he told them, looking on as he wanted to see what Izuku would do. He has a plan. Izuku charged at the giant bot and, hoisting what he had overhead, tossed the rock right at the hole in the center. The rock hit it and got lodged in there, right in the center of the hole where its laser would be exiting from. The bot prepared to fire its laser, and Izuku covered his arms up to brace himself from the oncoming impact. But there was no blast. The rock had clogged up the hole, preventing it from firing. Despite its attempts to fire, it couldn't do so. It could only gather more and more energy right in its center that was piling up. With no way to let loose the gathering energy that was inside it, the bot can only unleash it upon itself, and it blew up, being torn apart from the inside as the laser shot around. The bot was engulfed in explosion and flames, and once the smoke was gone, it was shown dissected with its inner body revealed, as the armor had been blown clean off. Despite it all, though, it was still functioning despite the heavy damage it had taken. 𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪𝗔𝗂𝗪് as Izuku shouted as he leapt up, and his glasses were shown having fallen off. His fist was glowing as he shot off like a rocket right at the robot and slammed his fist into it, piercing right through its single eye. The bot fell over, having been split in two from the force of the attack like a tree in the woods, before shattering on the ground. Well, I know the rules state that that's supposed to just be a 0-pointer, but I think we can give him 30 points for that. Present Mike exclaimed at what he had seen, as no one before had even managed to put a dent in it, but this kid had caused it to blow itself up and then smashed it. All Might had a confident smile on his face, while Aizawa let out a harem, seemingly not impressed. Plus an extra 15 or so for aiding the girl from before, as well as 10 more apiece for giving the others time to escape. All Might said, looking on as most of the tryouts were stunned at what they had just seen him do, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 most of all. Izuku was shown on the ground trying to recover from using one for all. Shaking his head to clear it, he fumbled around. My glasses, where are they? He said as he was on all fours trying to find them, as they had fallen off and he didn't know where. Here, a voice said, and placed them in his hand. They get knocked off over to the side from it, 𝗬𝗪 said as she had found and recovered them. I'm afraid that there's cracks in them though, she said to him. It's okay, I can have them repaired, he told 𝗬𝗪. She then looked at his eyes, and her own widened in surprise when she saw that they were milked over, as she realized that he was blind. Hey, are you okay? Your eyes. It's all right, I've gotten used to it, he said as he put them back on and stood up as he tended to his arm that he had punched with. From the way it felt, it seemed like he had broken a couple of knuckles as well as fractured his wrist. It would take a couple days for that to heal, but that was the least damage he had received from using one for all so far. A buzzer suddenly went off, catching his and everyone else's attention. And that's the time. Present Mike's voice was heard speaking out as the remaining bots shut down automatically. The battle test is over. After an hour rest period for lunch, we shall take the written test, he said as the top 10 results were shown on a screen. Whoa, dude, that was awesome. A familiar voice exclaimed to Izuku. You gotta show me that move sometime, Kirishima said to him, having witnessed it. It was nothing, Izuku said in response as he adjusted his glasses. Oh come on, no need to be bashful, you whopped that Tinken's ass, the red-headed boy said as a group of people had gathered around, having witnessed it. Many were talking and congratulating him on what he did, with some wondering why he wasn't using that attack earlier. It was quite a spectacle, another voice said, but he was admonishing him. But it was risky and the chance was too great, it couldn't have worked. Ada said to him, if you had been off by even a fraction, you would have been killed by it, he said to Izuku. Plus, because it was a 0-pointer, it was all for nothing what you did. It wasn't really worth it, as you should have kept running instead. Hey, don't be a buzzkill, Kirishima said to him. Izuku, you're okay in my book, he said and slapped him hard on the back. Izuku did not expect as he stumbled forward, and the cracked glasses he had fell off to the ground and shattered on contact, revealing his eyes to them all. Hey, what's up with your eyes? One shouted at him in shock. Did they get damaged just now? Have you been blind this whole time? Why didn't you tell anyone? The questions came a million miles and hero to Izuku, who found himself unable to answer as they were going overboard, as he brought his hands up to his ears to try and drown them out. Looking on, Katsuki was the only one who wasn't saying anything as he watched. If I had known, I would have helped you out earlier. Yeah, we don't need someone here with a handicap foolishly risking themselves. Stop it, he said to them in anger, shocking them at his loud outburst. All of you stop. Just stop. He yelled over them to make them be quiet. Taking a deep breath, he then spoke up. In blind, yes, join the rest of the world who knows it. But that does not mean that I'm helpless. I don't need to be treated special just because I can't see. You're insulting me and yourself by acting and believing that I can't do anything, he said as he didn't want to be pitied and thought of as weak because of his handicap that he had. Do you not realize that you are only making things worse by doing so? I don't want or need to be pitied by anyone because of what's happened to me, he said, and he felt Katsuki's presence nearby but didn't turn his gaze to him. What's happened happened. All I want to do now is show that anyone can become a hero. And if any of you have an ounce of respect, you treat me no different than you'd treat the person standing next to you, he said to them. I told you earlier that he was something special, All Might said, looking on at Izuku. He's embraced his handicap, having learned to live with it and not let it hold him down or let others use it against him to make him think he's weak. An impressive performance all around this year, Principal Nezu said as he finished his tea. I'll have to watch him destroy that 0-pointer maybe 1 or perhaps 10 more times, he said with a chuckle. Come on now, look at these boys. You aren't going to find stuff like this anywhere else. The man who had brown skin and was bald said as he held open a large briefcase, and in it were many semi-automatic handheld firearms. Later that night, in the alleys where the wretch and dregs dwelled at, an illegal deal was being made. A black man was shown in front of 4 thugs trying to broker a deal. What do we need guns for? Only losers have those anymore. We have quirks and powers, one said to him, not impressed. Yeah, great for letting yourself be known, the black man said dryly, and that made the group upset over how he was mocking them. These bad babies are custom-made and state-of-the-line, imported directly from America. You can carry them on your person as easily as you would a wallet. And they are all equipped with silencers, meaning you can shoot 100 people without anyone knowing what's happened. Come on now, Turk Barrett only provides the best to his customers, he said to them. Fine, the boss of the group said. There's some places we're planning on hitting up later tonight and they could be useful. Good to hear, my new friends. I trust this is the start of a new friendship. I take cash up front only, Turk said with a smug smile. And I'll take all 5 of you knocked out and your mouths shut, another voice said, surprising them. What the boss said, and saw perched on a lamp post a figure wearing goggles. Who are you? He shouted at him, who smirked. It doesn't matter, have some acid, huh? He said as for some reason his quirk wasn't working. The hero then lunged down and knocked him down to the floor, his feet slamming against his chest, knocking the wind out of him. Shit, Turk shouted and ran off with his briefcase, dropping a pair of guns from it. The hero ignored him and leapt into action as the thugs found their powers to not be working as the goggles-wearing man attacked and moved with blinding speed, attacking them. With their powers unable to work, one tried to grab a gun and fired at him. The fast as lightning hero dodged the bullets as they hit a lamp post, shattering a bulb, and avoided the wild and poorly aimed shots before closing the distance and dropping him with a punch to the jaw. One tried to reach the other gun on the floor, but a foot stomped hard on his fingers, breaking them. It's not nice to play with guns, you know, the hero said, shaking his head. He then kicked them inside of the head, knocking him out as well, looking on at them with disdain. The person who assaulted them knew he wasn't done yet as he darted after the last one, heading to the rooftops. Crap, crap, crap. 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿𝗆 said as the cowardly arms dealer fled the scene having escaped. How the hell was I supposed to know that heroes are on every stinkin' street here of this stupid city? He said as he ran, sweat pouring down his forehead. He continued to run when suddenly a figure dropped down in front of him. He stopped and skidded only to be tripped up by the man, and he dropped to the floor, hitting the concrete, scraping and bloodying his nose. He was grabbed by the back of the collar, forcing him up off the ground. Isn't it a bit late to be out for an evening run? The goggles-wearing man said to him. And don't you know that selling guns in Japan without proper license is a serious crime? What the hell are, he said before he was punched across the face and was knocked out. The briefcase he was carrying hit the ground and spilled open, and several bills flew out of it. The hero looked on with contempt at the man and reached up to his face. The goggles-wearing man lifted them off, revealing his glowing red eyes, which returned back to normal as he leaned down, checking the briefcase for everything that was in there. Tied the arms dealer up for police to find before he would go back and do the same to the others he had knocked out. Bunch of witless idiots who are just as dangerous to each other as they are to civilians. Eraserhead. Shouta Aizawa muttered to himself as he had heard about this meeting through the police network when he noticed something at the very bottom of the briefcase beneath the money and guns. Reaching down, he plucked it up out of there as he took a look at it. It was a sketching of a hand, showing 5 digits reaching out and engulfing over a city with a kanji for a word above it. The hand. He muttered to himself, wondering what this meant before he put it in his clothes and departed. Izuku Midoriya felt like he was walking on air, literally, as he was seen leaping through the rooftops, a beaming smile on his face. He had done it. After all the years of being told that he couldn't and what had happened a year ago, he had passed the enrollment and been accepted into UA, having gotten the message earlier from a recording of All Might that he had. The green-haired hero in training leapt across his walking cane in his other hand as he had never felt so happy before in his life. He hit the ground and, picking up speed, ran to the edge and leapt again, performing a somersault as he did. As he fell, he wrapped his cane around a pipe and swung down it to the pavement below as he stopped before a convenience store, which was the place he had been heading to. The doors opened for him and he stepped inside. Izuku, a voice that sounded familiar, said, suddenly catching his attention, making his ears perk up, and he turned his head towards it. "Tsuyu," he said in response, a look of surprise on his face. "I didn't suspect to see you here," the long-haired frog girl said as she saw him enter the convenience store. In her hand she carried a basket filled with items. "Me neither," he replied to her as he hasn't seen her since the enrollment. "How are you?" "I'm alright, Ribbit. Just picking up some stuff to cook for dinner tonight." "Izuku, did you get the message today as well?" "Yes, I did, and I was granted acceptance into UA. What about yourself?" "Me too. Truth be told, I was afraid to open it and find out. It wasn't until my siblings egged me into doing it that I opened it." Tsuyu replied. "I was nervous too, thinking after all I did during the test that it wasn't enough. But I finally mustered the courage to open it," he said as he thought back to the disc arriving and upon activating All Might appearing via hologram with a recorded message that he had passed the tests. Tsuyu looked on as Izuku picked up items and placed them in a bag. Despite being blind, he seemed to know where everything was at as he went and picked up items. She looked on and went to the counter and paid at the cashier. And he soon joined her and paid for his as well. They exited the store and got ready to go their separate ways when they heard screaming. "Oh," Izuku said as he detected it coming from north of here. "That's not good," Tsuyu said, looking on in alarm at a construction site as a crane was going out of control. "Looks like a machine had a malfunction," she said as people were running to avoid it falling on top of them as it seemed as though it was imminent as it appeared to plummet. A crowd was watching on as a masked woman in spandex appeared and grew to giant size and caught the crane and positioned it right back, stopping it from falling and smashing to the ground, averting disaster. Mount Lady in her giant form posed for the hundreds of cameras that had been whipped out, showing off her enlarged assets and figure to them. "This will be going on for a while," Izuku noted as he could hear them clicking all at once, which was giving him a mild headache. "What do you say we go a different route and get something to drink? My treat. There's a place nearby we can go to." "Okay." Tsuyu replied to him. The two went and soon came to a cafe and went in and sat at a table. "I've never really got the chance to talk with you when the testing was held because of all that was going on," Izuku said to her as each had a drink. "Yeah, also I never got the chance to say it, but thanks for saving me from that turtle bot during the exams," Tsuyu said to him. "No problem, Tsu," he replied with a smile. "You never did say what your quirk is either." "Well, my quirk is frog, and like it sounds like, I can do anything that a frog can do. I can leap up really over buildings and stick to most surfaces. I can also stretch out my tongue for about 20 meters. I also can spit out a toxic mucus in case I can to sting someone. My parents aren't home often, so I have to take care of my siblings," Tsuyu explained to him. "Therefore, I wasn't able to make a lot of friends before as I was too busy with having to look after my brother and sister. Wasn't until the year before that I managed to make my first real friend," she told him, and he nodded his head in understanding. "Well, here's to hoping that you make a lot more friends from here on," he said as he took a sip. Tsuyu nodded her head in understanding. Izuku, you said your senses are enhanced due to your quirk, right? Just how far enhanced are they? Pretty well. I can detect if a person is talking and hear them from across the room. I can also taste every ingredient in something such as this, he said, motioning to the cup that he had. My smells advanced as well. In the kitchen, someone is putting out a burned sandwich which they cooked for too long, he told her, and Tsuyu looked on and saw one of the employees grabbing a fire extinguisher. I can read the label of things I'm looking for by pressing my fingers against the ink of a label on a jar. Plus, I've developed a radar-like sense around my surroundings, letting me know of what's nearby and if someone's close by. So you can see after all? Tsuyu asked him, a bit surprised. Not exactly, he replied to her. I can make out shapes and objects before me like this table and the chairs, but I couldn't tell you what the color of it is, he told her. Ribbit, I see. Tsuyu responded to him. Izuku, I know it's not my place to ask, but when your quirk activated, did your eyesight decrease because of it? No, an incident caused me to lose my vision, Izuku said to her. It never happened until after I lost my eyesight. I see. Sorry, I asked and pried into it. The waitress approached them as she laid a piece of paper on the table. Here's your bill. And because it's couples day, you each get 20% off. Izuku and Tsuyu spat out their drinks in unison, each of their faces burning bright red. Another year, another fresh batch of students hoping to become the greatest hero ever. Principal Nezu said, the mouse man said as he was seated in his chair at his office sipping hot cocoa. It feels like the years just blow right on, boy, wouldn't you say so, All Might? He said to the person seated on a couch. Indeed, All Might replied, but was shown in his shriveled up form. Watching these fresh new recruits reminds me of when I was their age, filled with dreams and fantasies, he said as he took a sip of his own. Correct. This year's batch looks to be impressive though, especially Class 1A, Nezu said as he added marshmallows to his cup. Although, old friend, I hope you don't mind me asking an innocent question. As long as you don't mind an innocent answer. The boy, Izuku Midoriya, raised quite a few eyebrows during the testing period, not only for his efforts but for the fact that he was blind. A person with disabilities is not uncommon here. 5 years there was a girl who was confined to a wheelchair, but her telekinesis made her the top student. All Might replied to him, of course, you shall never hold prejudice or bias against those with disability. My question is that the boy apparently did not have a quirk, I was told, or at least not one to the display of which he was showed when he took down that 0-pointer. One might say that the punch he delivered was very similar to your own, was it not? All Might stayed quiet for a long moment. I suppose you've learned my secret. Yes, I've passed down one for all to him. He's the next generation to hold it. I figured as much, Nezu said, a stern look appearing on his face. Your time is running out, isn't it, my friend? Yes, I can barely hold it for 2 hours now anymore, All Might mentioned to him as he looked at his reflection in the cup. A stark contrast to the figure who the world saw him as. My body is giving out on me. Although my spirit and heart is strong as ever, the toll it's taken over the years is too much. I don't have much longer. Soon I won't be able to use one for all anymore and will forever be like this, he said as only a scant few knew of this state. He let out a cough and brought a hand up to his mouth as a trickle of blood appeared. It will be a heavy day when you must retire, Nezu said, shaking his head. And so you've selected and have groomed Izuku Midoriya to be your successor, is it not? Having passed your quirk to him. Correct, if you don't mind my prying. How come you chose him? He did not have a quirk, and the incident which I read about he suffered has blinded him. Izuku was robbed of a chance at even a normal life. There are heroes out there without quirks every day, from doctors to firemen to more, bravely risking their lives without having any kind of superpowers, and yet the incident took that chance away from him. So it was pity in your heart then? No, All Might corrected him. Izuku showed in his heart to me when I meet him that despite it all he still wanted to be a hero. That if he had just even the tiniest sliver of a chance, he would take it, All Might said to him, thinking back to that day. He exceeded my expectations that I placed on him, even leapt over them, when he did whatever I asked of him with no complaint. Whether it was cleaning up the beach, learning martial arts, or other tasks, that was when I knew that he was the one, as his desire to be a hero burns brighter than the sun. Nezu nodded his head, coming to a full understanding. Well then, if you believe he is right, then I think he is right as well. I'm looking forward to monitoring his progress during the school year. All Might smiled at him and raised his cup up. So am I. 1 week later, Izuku was seated at a desk and minding his own business, twirling his cane in his hands. He could hear the voices of his fellow students. Sounded like there was 20 or so of them here in the classroom, he guessed. It was the first day of school at UA. After going to the auditorium for a welcoming speech, the students had then been sent to their respective classrooms. He had talked with Kirishima earlier, having been surprised but happy that he was in Class 1 as well, along with others including Tenya. Tsuyu was seen speaking to several other female classmates. Among them was a girl who she got along with very well, who had pink skin and horns, named Mina. There was also the girl she had helped out in the exams named 𝐂𝐚𝐲 and a girl with purple hair and earlobes. All in all, it seemed like the first day was going to go smoothly and Izuku was feeling pretty excited about how it was going to go. That is until two contrasting personalities meet for the first time. "What you call me, you droopy-eyed shitbag?" Katsuki shouted angrily, his voice filling the room of Class 1A. Izuku, hearing it, let out a sigh, having not been surprised at it. "I said that you're an annoyance," the violet-haired student replied to him. "I was busy reading before class started and you come in here barreling and stampeding in here like a drunken elephant and bothering everyone," he said, not bothering to turn and regard the angry blonde. Katsuki stepped forward, snarling, when a cane interrupted his approach. "That's enough," Izuku said, stopping him as he held it out in front of him. "Get out of my way, Deku." Katsuki growled at him, but Izuku held his ground. The door opened suddenly as all students turned their heads and saw a man with shaggy black hair and a perpetual tired look on his face in the doorway. Taking a long look at his assembled students standing there, he was surely tempted to turn right back out the door and go back to bed and forget about the day. He thought about giving the entire pack of brats Fs and expelling them right off the bat, but to his chagrin he couldn't do that. Save him a lot of time if Yua would let him, though, as he stepped into the room as everyone took their seat. "All of you shut up and be quiet. I'm Mr. Aizawa, and while you are in my class and my students, you will listen to what I say. First of all," he said before smiling in a comforting way, "I bet you all are feeling pretty confident, right? You passed the tests and were granted enrollment in the most prestigious school for heroes, which only 1 in 300 succeed in. So go ahead, give yourselves a nice long pat on the back. You deserved it," Aizawa said to them, and many in the room started to feel more at ease and relaxed. "Now that you have, I hope you realize just how stupid you must be if you thought that that was worth celebrating," he said in a dry tone, shocking them as his features turned back to his usual apathetic gaze. "Those bots you faced were intentionally designed and programmed to hold back against you. Even the zero-pointer, which our all-star, Mr. Izuku here, destroyed, was only operating at 50% of its max power," he informed them. "If you think the rest of the next 4 years are going to be that easy, go ahead and get out of the room because we don't need you here." And instead of filling in professionally, some of you start to resort to fisticuffs with the day not even starting, the teacher said as he wasn't lacing any of his words with sugar. "A hero's path is tough and filled with many difficulties. That's why only a few last more than a couple years before quitting or getting killed in action. It's my job, unfortunately, for me to make sure that you are actually up to this, as there's a reason why not everyone can become a hero," Aizawa said to them. The shaggy-haired man looked on at the crop of students he had. He knew about Midoriya and Bakugo, the blonde having been highly recommended for the school and Midoriya being All Might's project, but the rest of the class weren't too shabby despite his complaints earlier. There was some who caught his eye more so. Shoto Todoroki, the son of the second-ranked hero in the world, Endeavor, breed and raised for the sole purpose to surpass All Might and become the #1 hero. While he didn't fully approve of the upbringing, one couldn't deny his skill from it. Momo Yaoyorozu was the daughter of one of the richest families, somewhere between Scrooge McDuck rich and Tony Stark rich, he'd guess. But despite it, she didn't flaunt her wealth or acted as though it made her better than everyone else, as she always was there to see if someone needed help. Tenya Ito was from a prestiged multi-generational family and had expectations placed on his shoulders. What with his brother being one of the top current heroes, strived to not bring shame to his family. What with his self-imposed strictness, it seemed he was placing far more on himself than his family had. Kid needed to learn how to relax. Tsuyu was a capable girl who seemed to fit in any role that was given to her. She also was good at keeping her head clear and focus, having not panicked any at all during the tests, which was a good trait to have in the heat of battle. Ibara Shizaki, a girl whose long hair was so green you'd be forgiven if you mistake it for grass. By all accounts, she was a pacifist who only used her quirk for defense, never to harm. While a fight ending without any bloodshed was good, sometimes offensive force is the only thing villains will listen to. And last but not least, the one who had gotten into it earlier with Katsuki, it sounded like Hitoshi Shinso. The boy was rather infamous in his middle school from what he had read before about his quirk, and was ostracized because of it, being constantly told that his quirk was more suited for a villain, yet had enrolled in UA. He had seen the boy that had been looking on in envy at others that Aizawa had seen, as he had been bitter over his dealt hand and seemed surprised to be here. What he didn't know was that Aizawa had played a role in him being in this class. He had fought tooth and nail against the school board to let the boy be allowed entry into the hero course. He had too much potential for it to just be wasted in general department. Just because his quirk wasn't up to snuff of what most believed heroes should have didn't mean he shouldn't get a chance. All in all, they each had potential, but time would tell if they would just be flash in the pans or the next generation of heroes. Reaching behind a podium at the front of the room, he pulled out a blue bodysuit. "These are the uniforms you are going to be assigned to wear during drills and such until you get your own costumes. Wear them with pride, yada yada, stuff like that. You are going to be passing them out. One student who was the tallest in the class and had 4 extra arms said, "Nope, you're going to have to go to the locker room and find them yourself. After you've changed, you'll meet me outside on the field." "How come?" a voice said next to him, and Aizawa was nearly startled as it was the invisible girl Toru. "Don't do that," he admonished her. "As I was saying, we're going to evaluate your quirks and assess your strengths. Oh, and I forget to mention, for every minute it takes to get out there, you'll be running 4 laps each." "What?" the classroom shouted in shock and protest. "But sir, we don't know where the lockers are." A boy with blonde hair with a highlight like a bolt of lightning protested. Aizawa gave a rather unnerving grin in response. "Then you better go find them," he said as he lounged lazily in his chair and checked his phone. "Time's a-wastin'," he mentioned as there was a mad dash out the doorway. "Gangway, every man for himself. Teaching's not so bad after all," he thought to himself as he got up off the chair to head out. A while later, Class 1 was shown outside after having frantically found the locker room and dressed into the tracksuits meet up with their teacher. 7 minutes, so that's a total of 28 laps total, Aizawa said as he checked the timer. "We would have been here sooner if Koji hadn't stopped to pet a bird. Can't you cut us some slack?" The boy with lightning highlight named Denki protested in annoyance. "But it had lost its mommy. I couldn't leave it all alone until it found it," the rock-faced boy said as he had been adamant in helping the bird. "Sorry, but no excuses, even for lost baby birds." 28 laps, Aizawa replied to them. "But Mr. Aizawa," Ochako said to him, "isn't that a little excessive?" she asked, and he snorted in response. "What? You planning on flapping your arms to get where you want to go? Or do you have a private jetpack at home? And cause you haven't noticed, footwork is 50% of a hero's job, and no one wants to be saved by a hero who's constantly out of breath because they don't feel like running. You think a bank robber is going to wait for you to catch them, is that it?" he said to them. "But we're not running yet. Like I said, first we're going to check your strength," he said, and pulled from a bucket a white softball similar to a baseball. "I want you all to throw these using your quirks. That way we get an assessment of just how strong you are." "That's all we must do, sir?" Ibara asked him. "Yep, really complicated, isn't it?" he answered dryly. "Don't damage your brains too much trying to figure it out. Now who's first?" I'll go," Katsuki said, and stepped forward and took one of the balls. Gripping it so hard it was a wonder that it didn't burst, he then tossed it, activating his quirk. "Die," he yelled as it went sailing through the air, a path of destruction in its wake. 726, not bad but still short of the record, Aizawa said, looking at the light-up scoreboard, and Katsuki smirked arrogantly. "You all see that? You backup dancers might as well go back inside. No way you'll ever be able to make half of that," he said, and many in one took offense to that. "Sounds like he's calling you out. Don't just stand there with your tongues hanging out. Step forward and prove him wrong," Aizawa said, and Kirishima was the first to try. The wild-haired boy threw it with all his might and was frustrated when he only cracked 690, and after that a large muscular boy who wolfed a cupcake down in one bite went, followed by Mina, and then a boy with a tail. "I'll go," Izuku said after a while, and stepping to it picked up one of the balls up. Taking it in hand, he felt its shape and form as he held the ball. Taking a deep breath, he concentrated as he held the ball up as he focused, and brought his arm up for a practice throw as he judged the weight of it and the best angle for him to throw it. "While my hair hasn't turned gray yet, kid," Aizawa called out to him to hurry up. Izuku paid him no mind as he steeled himself and, getting ready, brought the ball up and turned his hips to the side. "Now," he shouted mentally, bringing it forward, and chucked the ball as he activated One for All. The ball whizzed by as he threw it with all his might. A gust of wind picked up, blowing his teacher's hair to the side. The ball kept going on and on. 789. 8. Color me less unimpressed than usual, Aizawa said as he read the score. Izuku smirked and moved his hand and fingers. There was no bone fractures or cracks in them. He finally managed to do it in short spurts without damaging his body as he had before. Now he can try and go up to 10% now that he had accomplished it. "Nice, way to go, Izuku," Ijiro shouted, having cheered him on. Izuku smiled as he walked back to the group standing between Tsuyu and Todoroki. It continued on, but the only person who managed to exceed that was Akacho, who used her levitation quirk to send the ball flying as far as she wanted to. "Okay, so you know how to throw a ball," he told them after it was all done. "Now we're going to test your stamina and cardio. Learn up over here and get ready to run. Water will be passed and handed out to you if you need it. If you can't finish, consider yourself done for the year," he told them. The class began to head over to the starting line. Izuku went as well when a hand grabbed him by the collar of his outfit and was turned around. "Mind explaining how in the world you managed to do that?" Katsuki said, demanding to know how he beat him. Izuku pulled himself away from his grip and dusted himself off. "By working hard, Katsuki," he answered, and Katsuki scoffed in disbelief. "Cut the BS, Deku. Even if you worked hard nonstop for 5 years, no way would someone like you, who's a complete wimp, would be able to do that," he told him. "You really think I haven't spent all this time working out, Katsuki?" Izuku responded to him. I told you that I was going to become a great hero, remember? He told him, and many had overheard and noticed what was going on. Aizawa watched on as well, getting ready to step in if necessary, as he felt that this was a long time coming between them. How'd a weakling with no quirk be able to do that, let alone knock down a 50-foot robot? You've been hiding this whole time ever since we were little that you were quirkless, weren't you? Katsuki accused him. I managed to beat you in something. And that's when you decide to talk to me in over a year. Izuku said, a look of disbelief on his face. How you not realized what I've been put through this past year? What I've had to do to adapt to being blind now? And now you are talking to me. The only thing that I hid was that I was blind when I took the enrollment test, because I didn't want people to think that I was helpless. I wasn't hiding a quirk, and what happened back there a year ago with the chemicals hitting my face didn't magically give me one. The blonde was silent for the first time, not saying anything. Did you even begin to think about what I've gone through that day, unable to see? To be cast in total darkness. What it's like to have your eyes be open but not see nothing but a whirl of black around you. Izuku asked him. Katsuki, because of what happened I can't even see my mother smile at me anymore, let alone watch TV or look at the sunset. And yet ever since that time, you've said nothing or haven't even talked to me since then. Izuku said to him. From what I heard, he was only there for a short while and left the hospital soon after I got there and didn't even ask how I was. For all you knew, I probably could have died, and it was a miracle I didn't. TCH, what the hell do you want me to say then? Sorry. Fine, I'm sorry for what happened back there. How am I supposed to react to what happened, huh? I didn't see that truck coming or know what was going to happen back then. But it's not my fault that you didn't get out of the way of the truck. Katsuki argued at him. If you had just moved instead of standing there, none of this would have happened. All this time, and you think that I'm the one to blame for what happened back there? That it's my fault. Your apology is as fake as your excuse. Izuku said in disgust, and Katsuki was ready to explode. To hell with you, Deku. And to hell with your damn sobbing mother. He shouted at him. Izuku glared hard at Katsuki behind his glasses. You always are going to have that pathetic chip on your shoulder, aren't you? Acting as if the world owes you everything. You strut around acting as if you are responsible for the sun raising every day, and without you everyone would die. You know why no one likes you? Because you're an asshole, that's why. A self-absorbed asshole who spares no thoughts or consequences towards the stuff you do, regardless of how it affects others from what you do. He told him. To hell with me. To hell with you, Katsuki. Izuku shouted at him. And if you ever say anything about my mother again, I'll beat the living snot out of you. 𝗳𝗲𝐿, Katsuki shouted, consumed with rage, as he lunged his arm forward and fired an explosion. However, to his shock, Izuku shifted his body to the side and dodged it, and then fearlessly grabbed him by the arm. The next thing he knew, he was on the ground hard as he had been tossed and thrown overhead by Izuku, having used his martial arts training against him, utilizing a judo throw. The boy, who he had mocked and insulted for 10 years, was looking down at him with contempt written all over his face. Katsuki grinded his teeth so hard against one another that it was an utter miracle that they hadn't shattered to pieces. That is enough, Aizawa said, as he had let this gone on far enough. You two got past pent-up aggression with each other you want to let out. Fine, can't expect everyone to get along with everybody. That's good and dandy, but I'm not having it here or during school. Consider yourselves both put on probation for 1 month from this. One more interaction like that between you two from here on, and you both will be expelled permanently. This is your first and last warning, he told them. Reluctantly, the two each went their separate way, but neither fully dropping the matter. Now then, unless anyone else feels like making this into some soap opera drama, all of you shut up and line up. 28 laps, no quirks, go, he said, ordering them to begin running. Grudgingly, the class began to do laps, breaking off into a run as they began their marathon. Aizawa sat and lounged on the grass, as he knew this would take a while. While they was at it, he could freely think back to what he had been working on the past week, thinking back to the sketch he had found in that arms dealer's bag a while back. The hand, he muttered to himself. He had checked newspapers and looked online, but had found no mention of them. He first thought they were some upstart illegal weapons trader, but it appeared not to be. The hero couldn't find a single trace of them, as if they never even existed. Raising his head up, he looked on as some had began their 4th lap whilst others had finished their 2nd. The start of a new year at UA begins. Izuku was seen working out at the gym that All Might had enrolled him in a year ago, using a staff in hand to practice blows and attacks as he was defending himself from 2 others who were fighting him at the same time. Getting in some early exercise before he headed to UA, he dodged an attack, tilting his body to the side, and brought his up to block the other one. Using his momentum against him, he threw him over on his side, and hearing the other opponent preparing to attack, ducked and jabbed the back end of it into his stomach, causing him to inhale deeply. A hit on the shoulder, though, reminded him to never drop his guard, though he continued onwards, practicing his techniques and attacks as others who he had trained and learned under looked on in the room, gauging how his progress was coming along. As that was happening, the scene shifted to the slums, where a black scrawny man was seen walking and staying out of sight. Last thing the pathetic man wanted was more trouble. Never should have came to this stink in the arms dealer grumbled. It was supposed to be an easy gig. Sell guns to any sucker stupid enough to part with money and get paid 10 times the amount for doing so. But some damn scarf-wearing hero had to show up and arrest him and ruin all his work. It took everything he had to post bail. Not even the guys who had hired him in the first place had helped him out, apparently seeing him as expendable. Unfortunately for 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿, his day was about to get worse. A hand reached out from the alley and grabbed the unsuspecting man. He was pulled in and slammed chest first against the wall. "Who the hell do you think you're? Oh snap, it's you." Turk's bluster went right out the window when he saw just who it was that had grabbed him. Standing before him was none other than All Might. "I've got some questions for you, and you're going to answer them," All Might said. "What do I look like? Some gypsy fortune teller?" 𝗧𝗏𝗏 replied, either feeling very brave or very stupid right now. Interrogation wasn't All Might's strong point, but it was easy to do when you're more than 4 times the size of the guy you want info from. "I ain't telling you ahhh." Turk's attempt at resisting was broken down when his arm was twisted in ways it wasn't meant to be. Okay. Turk shouted in pain as All Might was ready to snap his arm off like a twig. "I got some info. Not much, but it's a little," he pleaded. "Tell me," All Might said, still applying quarter pressure, which even that was more than enough to pull his arm clean off. "Who are the Hand? A syndicate? An alliance of villains? The name of a rock band?" He demanded to know. "I don't know who they are exactly. All I know is that some guys who I think are Yakuza offered to pay me to distribute weapons to some of the locals around here. They said that if I did, they'd pay me in gold." "What else?" All Might said, demanding more info as he slightly applied more pressure. Geez, what I'd ever do to you to deserve this?" Turk yelled in pain. "Only thing else I know is that they told me that if I meet some head honchos of major villain syndicates was to show them that piece of paper. And they'll comply. Now come on, show a brother a little mercy. I ain't done nothing. What are their reasons for supplying hoodlums and 2-bit thugs with firearms?" All Might questioned him. "They didn't tell me why. I don't ask questions. People offer me cash and I do the job, you know. Now come on, muscles. I used every penny I had left to make bail. I'm broke and they took away my weapon stash. I ain't doing anything bad the rest of my time here, I promise." All Might knew he wouldn't get any more useful information from the pathetic man and gave a final sharp twist of his arm and shoved Turk away. "I hope to never see you around here again," he warned him before leaping off into the air. "Now," the flashy-looking hero said as he drew on the chalkboard. "What is wrong with the sentence here?" he asked the assembled class. For someone who was possessed with a fantastic character, Present Mike was a dull teacher, as many in the class had to fight the urge to place their heads on their desks and fall asleep. Class 1 was in the middle of English and fighting the urge to not leap out of the windows and end it all, as time seemed to be mocking them with how long it was taking. Finally it ended, and soon it was time for lunch, which was ran by a pro hero. Izuku was seen seated at the table, eating his food calmly by himself, his dark shades over his eyes as he took bites of it and took a sip of 𝗧𝗵𝗏. A voice said, suddenly catching his attention, and he lifted his head up and tilted it towards the direction of where it was coming from. "Shinsu," Izuku said, a bit surprised to see him approach him as the violet-haired student sat down across from him. "Is there something you need?" he asked, curious as to why he was coming over to see him. "No," the baggy-eyed trainee responded. "I just wanted to talk to you." He responded to him. "You intervened the first day when me and Bakugo got into it, remember?" "Yeah, I remember," he answered him. "He and I have history together before." "Not many sit there and call him names to his face, though," he said, recalling how Hitoshi had reacted to him when they had first met. "I've met guys like him all the time in my middle school, barging in louder than a freight train and yelling at the top of their lungs because they forget the sound of their own voice every 5 seconds, he said with distaste, and Izuku nearly choked on his drink at his description of people. "I take it you weren't Mr. Popular in your middle school then?" Izuku dryly said. "Far from it, and my quirk did little to help me either." He replied to him. "I'm sure you know what my quirk is, right? When we all had to introduce ourselves after running laps the first day." "That's right," Izuku replied as they got to know each other and state their names after it. "You said your quirk was hypnosis, wasn't it?" "My quirk is brainwashing, meaning that I can take control of anyone who talks to or answers a question from me," Hitoshi explained. "Once it was found out, though, I was the one everyone stayed away from," he said to Izuku, a bitter look on his face. "What do you mean?" "Everybody I met always told me once they learned about it how that was more suited for a villain and didn't speak to me out of fear that I would brainwash them and make them do stuff. Unlike everyone else in U. My quirk is a curse." "Then why did you enroll in U then?" Izuku asked him. "Don't let what others say about me fool you. My goal in life is to become a hero," Hitoshi answered him. "Ever since I was little, and watching others bravely risk their lives without a second thought inspired me to become a hero," he said, and Izuku then realized that they weren't so different. Both idolized heroes and wanted to be one despite their setbacks before them that hindered them. But because of how the testing was done against robots, with my quirk being useless there, because I'm not a powerhouse not can shoot flames out of my ass, applying to general studies was my only real shot at getting accepted into UA, he told him as the test was designed unknowingly giving those whose quirks such as Shinsu's at a disadvantage. I was surprised when I found out that I had been accepted and enrolled into the hero course. Well, I wanted to enroll in the hero course no matter what, even if I didn't have a quirk, Izuku said to him. Lots of people do each year regardless of what their quirk does. They wouldn't have put you in it unless they believed you could do it. He told Hitoshi, don't you remember a hero named Boxer? I know him. I had his premium trading card when I was young. I have 5 of them, all in mint condition, he said with a touch of pride, recalling a hero before All Might's time. Despite how silly his quirk sounded and appeared to be, he used it effectively to trap villains in them and was voted number 3 in the top 20 heroes before he retired. If a guy who could use boxes as weapons be one of the great heroes, then anyone could be, regardless of their quirk or powers, he told his classmate. On the other side of the room, the girls of Wano were seen seated all together at the table. The girls were talking about the usual things that girls gossiped about: shopping, clothes, and boys. Good to see that except for Kaminari, most of the boys are well behaved and don't try anything, Jiru said as they discussed their classmates of the opposite gender. Thank goodness. I was afraid that some of them would be perverts who might try to sneak into the locker room. Achako replied as they talked. What about you, Momo? Mina asked. I saw you eyeing that blonde boy the first day. Bakugo, was it? No thanks. He may grow up to be handsome, but his attitude is repulsive, the wealthy girl said, shaking her head. Although the other one, Todoroki, seems like the shy type who's afraid to open up to others, she said, twirling her fork in between her fingers. What about you, Aibara? She asked the grass-haired girl. As a Christian, he goes against my beliefs to show interest in the opposite sex until I am of legal age, the religious girl replied, deflecting the question. You're no fun then, Momo said with a pout, wondering if Aibara was wearing a chastity belt underneath her school uniform. But what about you, Tsuyu? Ribbit, me, Tsuyu said in response, having not expected attention to be directed towards her. Yeah, you seem rather sweet with that blind boy from what I saw, Mina said. His name's Izuku. Oh, first name basis already with him, are we? Toru asked in a teasing tone of voice. Quit it, Tsuyu said, admonishing her. Now, let's not be asking which one gets to be her bridesmaids, Jiru said, joining in the teasing. It's not funny, Tsuyu said as she blushed deeply as Mina began to sing a certain song. After lunch, classes resumed until it was time for basic hero training. Having assembled in the room, the class looked but the teacher wasn't there. Where the hell's the teach? Katsuki grumbled out loud. Fine job wasting my time, he said, but was ignored by most of the class. Well, maybe they was involved in the incident that happened recently and can't make it. Denki Kaminari spoke up. What do you mean? Tenya asked, turning his head to look at him. What are you talking about? He asked, wanting information. Well, haven't you heard? Apparently 2 nights ago a group of heroes were busting up a drug operation and in the middle of doing so were ambushed. They were caught off guard by it and unable to defend themselves from the assault. Denki said to them. What you mean? Was it a setup by them? Anjiro asked. No, from what I heard when they got there they discovered that someone had already killed the drug dealers and then attacked them. Whoever did it attacked both villain and hero. They didn't even had time to react before it happened. They were just lucky to get out of there alive if not for the police backup that was stationed there. And it wasn't some run-of-the-mill heroes either. What I heard was both were in the top 15 rankings, and the drug dealers were butchered, cut up and shot without mercy. They didn't even take or post photos of the remains because of how gruesome it was. Denki said, a grave tone in his voice. How barbaric, Aibara said, looking pale at his description of the events. The heroes would live but they are forced to retire because of their crippling wounds. One has to walk with a cane from now on and the other lost an eye. Whoa, Jiru said, looking up from her desk. Well, don't worry ladies, he said with a Casanova grin. I'm here to protect you all in case the slime ball ever shows up here. Ugh, in your dreams, Momo said, shaking her head at his delusions. Was there any clues as to who did it? Izuku asked as it had caught his attention. But before he could get an answer, I am here, a voice shouted, startling the class as the door opened and in stepped a massive giant of a man, entering like a normal person. All Might, the class shouted, not having expected to see him appear in their classroom. Good afternoon, hopeful trainees, All Might said, clad in a teacher's suit and tie, proclaimed to them. I am looking forward to handling your class today, he proclaimed to them as he stood at the front of the room. Whoa, totally awesome, Kirishima exclaimed. Getting taught by the manliest hero in the world, he said, and All Might smirked. Listen up, you bunch of newbies. Here is the assignment you shall be undertaking for today. We all know that villains' preferred method is to make a robbery and then dash off, but the dangerous ones are those who seek to commit damage and threaten lives. Therefore we are having a contest with you all being split into teams of heroes and villains, All Might explained to them. The villain team will have set up a nuclear explosive device, and it's up to the hero team to stop them and deactivate the bomb while the villains try to run out the clock. This is a combat trial simulation you're undergoing to get you ready for the real thing. While this is merely practice, I expect all of you to give it beyond plus ultra during it. Class 1 looked on many excited at the prospect. And before I forget, I have a special surprise for all of you, he said, and pressed a button. The walls suddenly gave away, splitting about, and revealed racks, and on them were suitcases. The outfits you've submitted have been met with approval and finished, so go and suit up. Naturally, boys, you're going to be in a separate room from the girls for this. Meet me at ground beta after you've done so, he said before dashing out of the room. The students stood up and went and grabbed the cases that had their names on them and undressed and began putting on their hero outfits, ranging from flashy, eye-catching outfits to suits of armor that they had asked for in design. Izuku ran his fingers over the material of the costume. His mother had made it for him, having done it all herself, and he was going to wear it with pride, knowing what it represented for the both of them. Even if he couldn't fully see it, he put it on and slipped the mask that came with it over his face, which was designed to mimic All Might's facial structure and pointy hair ends. After dressing into their costumes, all 20 students were soon at the testing room, where they would randomly be paired up with a partner for the training, with one team being heroes and the other being villains, who would have a 5-minute head start to go and prepare defenses, and then the hero team would go after them. There was computer screens set up so the rest of the students would watch and see how it unfolded. Check it out, Kaminari's almost to the bomb. Ribbit, 𝗬𝗪 said, as in the first match he was teaming with Koji against the villain team of Aibara and Masahiro. Looks like it's just you and me, Toots, the electric quirk user said as Aibara stood in front of him, preventing him from getting to the bomb. I don't suppose you'll just let me pass and then go on a date with me right after this, he offered with a smirk. Your hair can provide an all-you-can-eat salad buffet. Take this seriously, will you? Aibara, who was clad in a plain white robe like that of a priestess, scolded him, not interested in his action. My powers are meant to be used for defense only. I have no intentions of using them to bring harm to one another, she told him. Well then, if you won't attack, I guess I'll have to take the offensive then, he said, and lunged at her, looking to tackle her as he charged up. I bet you're really ticklish. Multiple vines sprouted from Aibara's hair and extended and grabbed him and wrapped Denki's body up, immobilizing him as she entrapped him with zero effort. Hey, can't you learn to realize that it was just a joke? Denki sheeply asked from his position as Aibara waited for time to run out. Such vulgar and repulsive attitude is unbecoming of a hero. Aibara chastised him. You should spend more time purifying your soul than giving into the sin of lust. Victory to the villain team, All Might announced, giving the win to her and Masahiro. More matches went on as teams went and competed against one another. Whoa ho ho, did you see that power slam through the floor? Eijiro exclaimed, being pumped up by what he saw. Straight out of New Japan Pro Wrestling, that was. What's happening? Izuku asked, not knowing what was going on as he had been mentally getting ready. What do you mean? Didn't you see that move on the screen they just did? Eijiro asked. I'm blind, remember, Izuku said dryly. Oh, right. Well, since you can't see. Rikadu was facing Mizo and consuming sugar to boost his strength, picked him up and, as Kirishima eloquently put it, thought slammed him, but Mizo recovered and at that close range used his multiple arms to overpower and bind Rikadu, and then wrapped the capture tape around him, thus subduing him. Tenya said, explaining it to him what had happened. That leaves only Ochako, who's guarding the bomb while 𝗬𝗪 is trying to get to it. 𝗬𝗪 was seen sprinting on all fours and leaping up and off the walls. Ochako was levitating and throwing rocks and other objects in the room at her, and she skillfully dodged it as she scaled up top of the walls out of range of her attacks. Come down here and fight me, Ochako challenged 𝗬𝗪, who scaled the walls, her hands and feet sticking to them. She looked and soon saw the bomb, and she could leap to it at that distance and shut it off. 𝗬𝗪 leapt at the bomb, looking to deactivate it, when she suddenly stopped in midair, being held in place. Ribbit, she exclaimed, caught off guard as she couldn't move as she was floating in the air. Sorry, 𝗬𝗪. Ochako apologized to her, a rather unnerving competitive look on her face. But a hero's gotta do what they can to win, she said as she held the frog girl in the air, trapping her with her levitating quirk. 𝗬𝗪 struggled against the hold that Ochako had on her, but found herself unable to break it. She could move her arms and legs but couldn't break hold of the levitating grip on her, meaning she couldn't break free. It then hit her. If she could move her legs and arms, then that must also mean. 𝗬𝗪's tongue lashed out and struck the bomb, deactivating it, shocking Ochako, having not expected her to be able to use it the way she did. Victory to the hero team, All Might said as she and her assigned partner had won. And I must say, 𝗬𝗪, well done in the heat of battle for remembering that your tongue can extend despite your body being immobilized. And Ochako, good performance, but always remember that even a dropped guard for a second can turn victory into defeat, he said, praising the both of them for their efforts after they got back. Good job, both of you out there, Momo said, complimenting the two teams. You did good out there, 𝗬𝗪, Izuku said, as well as he finished checking his gear, unaware of her smiling in response at his praise. The next contest wasn't really a contest, as Todoroki's partner just calmly stepped outside and waited for him to freeze the villain team of as the dual quirk trainee won it single-handedly. Well, that was underwhelming, a voice said, and All Might turned his head and saw Aizawa standing there. Eraserhead, what are you doing here? Trying to encroach and muscle in on my territory, are you? He asked suspiciously, and Aizawa let out a snort. I've got nothing else to do for the day, so I'm just here to watch and see how my class is doing. He replied. See if they're taking this seriously or think they are enrolling in clown school, he said. Mr. Aizawa, a voice said, and he looked to see where it was coming from but didn't see anyone. Right here, sir, he said, and looked and saw a floating glove right in his face. It's me, Toru, don't do that. He admonished her again and then noticed that she had on just a pair of gloves and shoes. Toru, where's your outfit? He asked her. This is my outfit, she stated to him. You mean that you can turn your other clothes invincible as well? Nope, I'm all naked underneath here, she proclaimed, causing him to facepalm. Of course you are, he said, and looked on at the next match that was going on. In our next matches, All Might said as pictures rotated before stopping. Heroes Izuku Midoriya and Hitoshi Shinsu versus villains Katsuki Bakugo and Yuge, he stated, announcing the teams. The two teams lined up. Laser Belly, don't you dare drag me down, and leave Deku the hell alone. He's all mine, you hear? Katsuki stated. Izuku paid him no attention as he took a deep breath as his partner stood next to him. He was wearing an old-fashioned private eye outfit that was a blue color complete with a hat over his head, looking like something out of the movies or detective novels. Villain team, go. All Might shouted, signaling them to begin as the contest started. Izuku and Hitsuhi waited until 5 minutes had passed. Bomb has been planted. Hero team, go. At that they went into the building. So I suppose you've come up with an ingenious plan then? Hitoshi asked as they went down a corridor. Honestly, no disrespect to Yuma, but Katsuki will be the real danger. You know how powerful his quirk is, right? He said, and Hitoshi nodded his head. And he loves to play mind games as well and get underneath your skin. I take it he doesn't call people nicknames for fun then? He dryly asked. Katsuki is a talker. He'll always try to mock and trash talk you. The best way to counter it is to ignore him and make him madder so he'll get sloppy in his attacks, Izuku said, his voice muffled through the mask he wore. At times he had to lift it up so he could get some air as he wasn't used to wearing it. The talker then, perfect. Hitsuhi said, and a hint of a smirk showed on his face as that was the perfect opponent for him. I can hear someone nearby, he told him. Someone's talking. Can you tell who it is? I believe it's Aoyama, Izuku said as he focused his hearing. The voice isn't rough or rude, he said as he listened in. Let me take care of him. He seems the easily distracted sort, and from what I heard from him, he can only shoot for a second before his stomach cramps up, he said, but Shinsu shook his head. Hold on, let me do it. We don't know where Bakugo is, and from what you said, Bakugo's the true threat and you need to be at full strength to face him should we encounter him. How do you plan on getting him then? Izuku asked. I'll create a distraction, and when his back is to me, use the capture tape to bind him, he replied, holding it up. Just as long as his back is to me, I can avoid his power. Izuku thought it over before nodding his head. All right, be careful, he said, and his teammate left without saying a word. Hitsuhi was seen holding the capture tape in his arms as he quietly went through the building. Listening in, he could hear Yuma's voice getting louder the closer he got. That's right, keep yapping, he muttered and peeked his head around a corner. The flamboyant trainee was spotted and had his back to Shinsu, seemingly unaware of his presence as he was chatting. Reaching up to his hat, he took it off and threw it at the wall. Yuga said, turning around, and spotted the hat on the floor. Is somebody near? He asked and stepped forward. Come on out. There's no need to hide in the darkness like a rat, he said, a smile on his face as he went forward and investigated the hat that had been left. Hitoshi suddenly emerged from the corner and charged him, looking to bind him, but Yuga's guard was up more than he expected and ducked low, catching him off guard, and he slipped past him and had to stop himself from crashing. So sorry, hero, but I'm afraid that good will not win today, no, the flashy boy said to Hitoshi. Another talker, Hitoshi muttered in response as the boy sparkled and prepared to fire. Hitoshi, are you there? Izuku asked, but silence was all he got in return. After waiting a minute had passed, he had called in to see who he was doing. Hitoshi, come in, he repeated, but still got no answer. No, he said, gritting his teeth, as that meant that either his partner was unconscious or had been captured. Whatever had happened, he was on his own now. He thought about going to help him out, but time wasn't on his side. He couldn't go find him and then try to shut off the bomb. The only other option left was to go it alone. He went on through the building, keeping quiet and being stealthily, all of his senses focused as he went on. Katsuki was somewhere around here, and it was better to get the drop on him than the other way around. The wall gave way, having been destroyed, and shown standing there through the smoke clad in his outfit was Katsuki. Deku, he sneered at him. Katsuki, Izuku responded as he stood up in front of him. Where's the bomb? It's right behind me. All you gotta do is beat me before it runs out, Katsuki taunted him as it was shown behind him. Izuku reached behind his person and pulled out a baton. "You really think that puny stick is gonna do any good?" he said, insulted that he would face him with just that. "Do you want to get your ass kicked that badly then?" Izuku didn't say anything as he made a couple swings with it. "Take your best shot," he challenged him. Katsuki roared and lunged at him and fired off an explosion from his hand. Izuku dodged it and went low and shoulder tackled him. The blow knocked the wind out of Katsuki, having not expected him to use such force. Snarling, he threw a fist at Izuku, who dodged it. The two went at it with one another. Katsuki released explosives as Izuku countered using his martial arts and fighting technique he had developed over the year. Opening up a betting pool, "I say Izuku wins," Ijiro shouted, looking on. "Young man, I should warn you that gambling is an ugly hobby to take up." All Might lectured him before leaning in close so no one could hear. "Put 2,000 yen down for me on him." A year ago, Izuku Midoriya would have been terrified of facing Katsuki Bakugo and being on the receiving end and up close with his attacks. But after a year of training and going through so much hardship and overcoming the odds, he knew he had nothing to fear from him now anymore. He reflexively dodged and avoided his exploding attacks, the training he had undergone enabling him to know where Katsuki was aiming his attacks before he even did them. He spun out of the way of Katsuki's attack and struck him across the face, delivering an open palm strike which staggered him, who wildly released an attack which he avoided and swung his weapon. Katsuki let out a yell of pain as the iron baton struck against his shin, and he was then hit by it in the jaw, leaving a bruise. "Not bad for a puny stick, is it?" Izuku taunted him. In fury, Katsuki unleashed explosives with both hands, sending attacks everywhere in an attempt to get him. "Damn it, Katsuki, stop!" Izuku shouted at him. "You keep up with those blasts and you'll bring this whole building down on us." He yelled at him as he was taking this way too seriously. "It'll be worth it to beat you." He snarled at him and released more blasts. The gauntlets he wore amplified his attacks, making them stronger than they were before. "Katsuki," All Might's voice announced over the intercom, "continuing to unleash destructive attacks will damage the bomb and thus disqualify your team." "TCH, who cares? So long as I beat this loser," Katsuki said, ignoring the warnings, and let loose more explosions. "Stupid idiot," Izuku muttered under his breath. He dodged one and threw his baton at Katsuki, who just missed it, colliding against his head. He then realized that was a diversion as Izuku ran, flipped over him, and dashing retrieved his weapon and went at the bomb. "No," Katsuki shouted as he wasn't going to let him win, and fired an explosion off at the roof. The roof gave way, dropping debris right in front of Midoriya. Midoriya was knocked backwards, and the mask he wore became dislodged and was knocked off of his head, exposing his face. He shook his head, feeling disoriented, but didn't have time to relax as he rolled out of the way of a blast. His head stung as he shook it, trying to focus. It sounded like 100 birds were chirping all at once, putting a strain on his hearing. Katsuki saw it, seeing how he was being affected by it, and snapped his fingers together in curiosity, setting off a loud blast. The blast echoed around the room. Izuku shouted, clamping his hands over his ears, trying to drown out the sound. Katsuki released another one, and Izuku screamed in pain as he couldn't protect himself. "Hey, what's wrong with Izuku? Those attacks ain't even hitting him, but they seem to be hurting him," Ijiro asked, not understanding what was happening. "From the way it looks, Bakugo is only using his explosives to make loud sounds. But other than being annoying, it shouldn't really bother him that much, should it?" Mina said as many were confused by what was happening. "I know your weakness now, Deku," Katsuki said as he knew what he had to do. "While your senses are sharper, they are also highly sensitive, aren't they, especially your ears?" he said, and let loose another loud blast. "It's like a train going right by you whenever one goes off, isn't it?" he said, letting out more and more explosions. Izuku clutched at his head, having fallen to his knees, trying to drown out the sound as his head felt like it was being pounded on like a drum. Katsuki took the advantage, letting out more and more loud sounds which staggered and hurt Izuku. He stepped closer to him, letting out small but loud-sounding explosives, taking pleasure in it. Izuku, clutching at his hand, swung at him, which he missed badly and knocked him down, slamming his hands into his chest. A scraping sound was heard which caught his attention as he turned his head. Katsuki looked on, and an arrogant smirk appeared on his face as Yuga was dragging his opponent by the collar on the ground, who appeared to be unconscious. Hitoshi laid there limply, not moving a muscle. "You lose as usual, Deku," Katsuki said to Izuku. "Your droppy-eyed partner is as useless as you are. Even if he wasn't knocked out, you two pathetic losers together wouldn't have a chance at beating me." He mocked him with a sadistic grin. "1 minute remains." All Might's voice boomed through the speakers. Izuku gritted his teeth as it appeared he had no choice but to surrender the contest. Tsuyu looked on at the screens, watching with the others. "Hang in there, Izuku," she said as it appeared hopeless for him. "You lose, Deku," Katsuki shouted, preparing to unleash a blast with both hands as that was happening. Hitoshi, who everyone had ignored this entire time over what was happening, lifted his head up and opened his eyes and smiled. Yuga let go of him and suddenly fired a laser at Katsuki, who saw it coming and just barely dodged it in the nick of time. "What the hell?" Katsuki shouted in shock as Yuga had apparently betrayed them and fired another laser at him. We are supposed to be on the same team, remember, dumbass? He yelled at him, but Yuga didn't say anything in response as he fired at him again. Damn it, stop laser belly, he shouted and counter-attacked as they clashed with each other, explosions against lasers. What in the world? Tenya said, not understanding what was going on, and many as well were confused as well as to why Yuga was attacking his own teammate. Unbeknownst to them, Hitoshi having feigned being knocked out the whole time. When he had encountered Aoyama, he took advantage of his talkative nature and brainwashed him with his quirk. Once he had him under his control, he ordered him to lead him to where the battle between the others was at. He had made it look like he had been defeated and dragged there by Yuga to get Katsuki to drop his guard and then had Yuga attack him. Go. He shouted into the earpiece to Izuku. Izuku heard the chaos that was happening and saw his opening. Whilst the two were preoccupied with fighting, he dashed towards where the bomb was at. With only seconds left on the timer, he charged at it, knowing that he had to shut it off before it was too late. His hand smacked against it in the nick of time, shutting it off. Bomb has been secured and deactivated. Victory to the hero team. All Might's voice echoed all around. Yuga blinked, unaware of all that happened, not being able to recall anything. Did we win? He asked Katsuki, who looked ready to strangle him for costing them the match. The four soon met back up in the surveillance room with the other classmates, which soon became three as Katsuki had stormed off and sulked in the corner of the room after making it back. Looking on, Aizawa could only shake his head in disapproval. That was a nail-biter of a matchup, All Might said, looking on. Now then, of the four, who here performed the best? He asked the other classmates. Shinsu, from my analysis, is the MVP, Momo stated, speaking up. He feigned having been knocked out the whole time, and everyone believed him to be out of action. But what had really happened was that he used his quirk to brainwash Aoyama, fooling everyone into what was going on, and then had him attack Bakugo, thus making them fight one another and be unable to defend the bomb. Also, Bakugo was more focused on attacking than defending the bomb and risked getting disqualified due to being over-excessive with how he used his quirk. Without Shinsu, Midoriya, who despite showing no fear in the face of adversity, would never have been able to deactivate the bomb. His quirk, while lacking in offensive capabilities, when used correctly, can turn villains against one another and change the tide of battle and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Yes, that's what I would say also, All Might said, clearing his throat. Well done, Hitoshi. You have taken the first step into becoming a hero, he said to him, who looked surprised that All Might would praise him as he gave him a thumbs up. Izuku looked on, running his fingers over the mask in his hands. Perhaps he could make some adjustments to it, so that it'd be more fitting for him to wear. Cut off and remove part of it at the bottom so he could breathe better through it, and trim the upper part of it. As much as he idolized All Might, designing it to look like his face wasn't the most practical choice his mother had made. I'd say this was a good day of training, All Might said later on after it was completed. I hope to see you all soon, he said, and hastily left, knowing he was almost out of time before he had to revert back to his scrawny form. Just a sec, a voice said, and they looked and saw Aizawa standing there in the room. You're not dismissed just yet. I want to talk to you all for a second, he told them. Great, how did we mess up this time? Denki asked, ready to be admonished by him. Good job today, Eraserhead said. Huh, Mr. Aizawa, did you just compliment us? Mina asked, not believing her ears, along with many in the class. Are you feeling all right? You worked hard today, he said to them as he stood before his class. Work still needs to be done, but I'm happy that you made some progress, showing me that you are all actually taking this school seriously and not wasting my time and yours in your work, the shaggy-haired hero said to them. I know you all probably hate me, but no, the only reason I'm placing such heavy loads on you is because I want you all to be the best, he said to them. I'm not doing this unless I knew that you could make it. I'm sure you've heard about the incident the past days, and that could just easily be you it had happened to. I may be hard, but only so that you can push yourselves past your limits and be the heroes you've dreamt of becoming. Wow, you really do care about us, a voice said next to him, startling him. I guess you're just a big softy underneath your gruff exterior, Toru said. That does it, Eraserhead shouted, and reaching out grabbed a body part and began to pull Toru. I'm getting you outfitted for a bell so you don't sneak up on me anymore, he exclaimed as he dragged her towards the school. Mr. Aizawa, that's my nose you're pulling. A figure was seen in a karaoke room. He had a microphone in one hand as he moved his body to the beat of the music and began to sing the words to the song, Oh, talking away and I don't know what to say it anyway. He turned around as he sang and looked on at the other occupant in the room, a terrified female with the appearance of a raccoon who was tied to a chair with ropes, frantically struggling against them, a look of fear on her face as he strutted towards her. The room revealed several other people in the room who were dead and bloody on the floor and couches, having been murdered by him. Today isn't my day to find you. Keep shying away. I'm becoming for your love, okay? As he approached, a chain dropped from his other hand with a blade attached to it that had blood dripping from it. He kept on his jovial attitude as he swaggered over to the fear-filled woman and placed the edge of the blade against her cheek. Take on me. A neat cut against her cheek, scraping against it, spilling 2 drops of blood, mixing in with the sweat and tears pouring down her eyes. He considered singing directly at her as if oblivious that he was cutting her up. Take me on. His weapon traced and moved against her throat, her body moving and shaking from fear so much it didn't have to apply pressure to it for her to cut herself on the blade as he pulled it back behind his head and she shut her eyes tight. A footstep was heard and he turned his head, annoyance in his eyes as he saw a person enter the room, paying no attention to the massacre in the room. Knowing that this was important, the assassin dropped his weapon before quickly slitting her throat, making her bleed out. He stopped what he was doing and walked over to the figure in the room and respectfully bowed his head to his superior, who handed over to him an envelope. He took it in hand and, opening it, glanced at the message inside, knowing what the symbol inside it meant. They call for my services and I shall answer, he said with a smile as his masters had summoned him and his scythe would soon taste blood. Mom, I'm home, Izuku Midoriya exclaimed as he opened the door to their apartment and stepped in. Izuku, I didn't expect you back so soon from school, 𝐭𝐸 said as she lifted up her head as she was shown seated on the couch watching television. Yeah, it was starting to thunder and felt like rain, so I decided to head home first thing. Izuku responded to her. Everything okay? He asked as he walked around the house using his walking cane to guide him. Yes, everything's fine, 𝐭𝐸 replied, and Izuku looked on at her, sensing that something was off. He realized that his mother's heartbeat was irregular, meaning that she was lying to him. It was then that an announcement came from the TV. We'll be back with more details about the attack after a word from our sponsors. Attack, Izuku repeated with confusion in his voice. What are they talking about, Mom? He asked her, but she didn't respond to him as she turned it off and stood up and went to the kitchen. Mom, it's nothing that concerns you, Izuku. Wash up and get ready for dinner, she told him, dodging the question. Izuku looked on at her, wondering what was going on and what she was hiding from him. He thought back to what he heard the other day in class, about how both criminals and heroes had been attacked by someone. Did it have something to do with that? Knowing that his mother would refuse to open up about it, he kept quiet, knowing he'd have to ask others for answers about what had happened. As the day turned into night and rain covered the area, 2 figures were seen standing in the rain alone in the street. One was clad in a business suit, looking like your average everyday businessman. The other was dressed in more casual wear, wearing a hood over his head. The 2 stood there at the assigned spot waiting for several minutes until the area in front of them shifted and a small purple portal appeared in front of them. A figure slowly emerged from the portal, a pale blue-haired figure who had several hands attached to his person. Narrowing his eyes, he looked on at the 2 before him, the ones who would have been sent to meet with him. The first seemed to be no more than your average delinquent, whilst the other, there was something off about him. The way he stood there and his posture and his steely eyes that he possessed. What was most disturbing was, despite the rain coming down on him, he showed no concern. He didn't even seem to notice that he was being drenched. Could you at least act like it bothers you? Freaks me out, he said to him, and the man didn't respond. Come in, we have much to discuss, he said, motioning to the portal, and went back in it, and the 2 followed after him. They found themselves inside a dimly lit room, and in the room was a man who appeared to be made out of mist with glowing eyes, clad in an elegant suit. I figured it would be more suitable for us if we talked and discussed our plans in comfort instead of out in the cold and wet, the being said to them. This is 𝗂𝗓𝗄𝐴. As you can tell, his quirk enables him to create portals and teleport people. As for me, I am Shigaraki, the current head of the League of Villains, the multiple-handed man said to the 2. I am Nobuyoshioka. My superiors have sent me to meet with you. One who was clad in a business suit and appeared to be the senior of the 2 said. Now that that's out of the way, I'm sure we can all agree on why we are meeting with one another, 𝗂𝗓𝗄𝐴 said, as this was a meeting between 2 organizations. You seek our aid in your planned attack, do you not? Nabu asked, not wasting any time, seeing no reason to keep himself waiting any longer than was necessary. 𝐻MPH, we have received word that on Friday you will be sending a class out to an area for training exercises, far away and secluded, and All Might is believed to be there, Shigaraki said, not breaking his gaze on the 2. My masters are opposed to sending men on needless suicide missions, Nabu responded to him. It's just a batch of fresh rookie students, barely out of the entry exam, 𝗂𝗓𝗄𝐴 said, speaking up. They will be no threat to us. Our main target and priority is All Might. Correct, he is the end-of-level boss we're gunning for. The rest are just peons to be swept aside, Shigaraki said to him. You seek to claim his head as a trophy, do you not? But to secure victory you need our clan's aid in doing so. It is better to be over-prepared to sure things go your way, is it not? 𝗂𝗓𝗄𝐴 said to him. All Might is an enemy to us all. His death would be a great burden lifted off our shoulders if he is no longer amongst the living, is it not? True, Nabu answered him. My masters, after being hidden for so long in the shadows, have decided that now is the time to strike and remind the world of who we are. Our forces are ready for the attack. We shall carve out a glorious victory by day's end. We have amassed many who are eager and willing to be the one who ends All Might's life, Shigaraki said, clutching a hand into a fist. They won't know what happened in All Might. The so-called symbol of peace will be dead at the end of the level. Yes, and from witnessing those who have been recruited, I'm sure that if you all gang up and attack at once, you might be able to steal a baby's 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿, 𝗵𝗶 said in response, and his associate laughed in response, finding humor in it. The pale man let loose a growl. Did I offend you? The older man asked in a sarcastic tone. Shigaraki stepped forward in anger. Careful. I've slain far more dangerous foes than you. I've shown you respect by coming here. You would be wise to return it. He told him, and Shigaraki snarled dangerously in response. Shigaraki, calm down, Kurogiri said to him, knowing his temper and reaction to being insulted. Taking a deep breath to restrain himself, he looked on at 𝗵𝗶. Cut the bullshit. Is your organization willing to help us or not? He said, demanding answers. We will assist in the attack. We shall lend you 5, including my associate 𝗧𝗵𝗶. 𝗵𝗶 responded, and his associate revealed a weapon on his person which earned him his name. Only 5. The blue-haired figure said, narrowing his eyes. Are you mocking us with sending only that? Do not mistake numbers as strength. 5 of our clansmen are more than equal in contribution than your entire army. 𝗵𝗶 said to him, for if this does go well and All Might is slain, then my masters shall be more open to working with you in the future. Our secret weapon we have created is more than capable of destroying All Might, as well as your men should they get any idea about stepping out of line. They will follow my orders the way characters on a RPG do, understand? Shigaraki said, if it will make you happy, then so be it. 𝗵𝗶 responded to him. Then it's agreed, Shigaraki said, and reached out and extended his hand out to cement the partnership. 𝗵𝗶, however, did not return it. Come now, surely you trust us? Kurogiri asked him. Yakuza are bound by codes of honor, are you not? Who said anything about us being Yakuza? 𝗧𝗏 said, speaking up for the first time. I have learned that in my years, the most dangerous words one can tell another is trust me, 𝗵𝗶 said as he stood up. We trust you no more than a snapping turtle would trust an alligator. 𝗧𝗏 and our chosen warriors shall be sent to you for the attack soon. We shall take our leave now. Very well then, Kurogiri said, and created a portal which would take them back outside. He and Shigaraki watched on as they entered it and departed. You should have sent the 2 bastards to 𝗵𝗶's lair, Shigaraki said with a hiss at how they had acted towards him. That way we could send whatever parts he didn't mangle back to their leaders, he said, angrily clutching a fist, wanting nothing more than to put all 5 of his digits onto his smug face and wipe it right off. Come now, it is unbecoming of a leader to let his emotions control him, a voice said, and in the back of the room a small laptop came on. Master, Shigaraki said, and immediately bowed his head as he stood in front of the laptop. A black screen was shown, but only a voice could be heard. Is it truly worth allying ourselves with them? He asked, his tone now respectful and subdued. You still have much to learn, my young pupil, the voice coming from the laptop responded to him. There are times when one must put aside differences in order to achieve their goals. Do not underestimate them and the benefits of allying with them. Their strength and resources is comparable to ours. The voice calmly lectured him. Plus, I am in talks with another potential ally who I hope to sway over to my side. Someone in America who wields and holds considerable power in the underworld and whose name strikes fear into all there. Yes, master, Shigaraki said, bowing his head. Move forward with the planned attack. In 2 days I look forward to hear the reports of your success. The voice said, and the screen went black as the computer turned off on its own. The psychotic villain nodded his head and turned to his second in command. See to it that 𝗵𝗶 is ready, and keep him hungry as well. He works best on an empty belly, he said to Kurogiri. We will sick him on our so-called new friends if they try anything after we kill All Might. But Kurogiri protested. I know what he said. Shigaraki snapped a wild look in his eyes. And provided they follow my commands, there won't be any need. But we will remind them that it's the League of Villains that are the most powerful force out there. I don't understand why we gotta bother with English. The red-headed student grumbled the next day as he left the class with others. I mean, I'm never going to England, so why do I gotta bother? Hiroshima asked out loud. He was ignored by most of his classmates as one was finished with the class and heading to lunch. Kaminari, Izuku's voice called out, and the electric quirk user stopped and turned around, seeing him approach him. What's up? He asked, curious as to why he called out to him. Have you heard anything recently? I heard that there was another attack as of late, he asked the blonde. Huh, you saw the news as well, I guess. Yeah, some nightclub got attacked the other day. Was it a front for villains or something? No, unlike the other place. This was just your local hangout to go and have a good time and dance. When it was time to shut down, the managers went to a VIP room and saw that the inhabitants inside had all been killed. All of them had been cut by some blade of sorts. But that wasn't the strangest thing. What do you mean? The police discovered a print that had been drawn. Apparently one of the victims in their last moments drew something on the table before dying. A drawing of a hand. A hand? What does that mean? Your guess is as good as mine. Denki replied, and Izuku thought it over as that was what his mother was hiding from him. It was unsettling that a massacre would occur so sudden with no survivors. Whatever this is about, I'm sure that it'll be put a stop to soon, a voice said, and Tenya stepped forward, having overheard their discussion. The glasses-wearing hero joined them. Whomever this person may be, they won't be around for much longer, I assure you, he said to them. You seem pretty confident, Kaminari said to him, and Tenya smiled as his glasses shine. You forget that my brother is one of the finest heroes of the current generation who inspires many who work for him to bring out the best, Tenya said with a hint of pride in his voice. Should whoever this person be continue to show their face, my brother will stop them, he said to them. You look up to your brother, don't you? Izuku asked him, and he nodded. He is my idol and my hero. Tensei, or Ingenium as he is known, once he spots an evildoer will never let them escape. I can only hope to match his exploits one day, he told them. Now come on, let's forget about this as it's not our place for now to worry about villains, he said, and went to the cafeteria. After lunch had ended, Class 1 was having hero training and got into their outfits. Izuku looked on, running his fingers over the new hero costume he had. The mask had been replaced with a new design. Instead of looking like All Might's face, it was now different as the bottom part had been adjusted and removed so his mouth could be seen as well as enable him to breathe. The slots in the eyes were now lensed and colored as well. As well on the mask were a pair of small pointed horns. Lifting it up, he slipped it over his head, the mask fitting easily, and also the fabric in it would protect his ears now. Nice new getup, Kirishima complimented him as he put on his own outfit, and Izuku nodded his head in appreciation. He had made many friends in the short time he had been enrolled at and attending Shinzu, Kirishima, Tenya for starters. He had stayed away from Katsuki though, the two not interacting with one another as both were still on probation from the incident with one another the first day. So long as Katsuki didn't bother him though, then he wasn't going to interact with him. Hello Izuku, a female voice said after he exited the changing room, and he turned his head in the direction of it who also had been dressed and waiting. Hi Tsuyu, he said with a smile to the frog girl who quickly was becoming his best friend here. Tsuyu had made him feel welcome, being the first person here to do so. Are you ready for today's assignment? She asked curiously to him. Yeah, how's your siblings? He replied to her, they are good. My parents got home yesterday from their business meeting so I can have time to myself. The girls have asked if I want to join them shopping after school today, but I was wondering what you was up to. Well, I'm not doing much, Izuku said as he was focusing on using the time off from school to perfect using 10% of one for all. I hope you have a good time with them. After getting dressed, Class 1 went to the assigned room where they would be trained at. The place was a large room with a rundown building in it, and on the top of it dangling was a dummy the shape of a person. Welcome Class 1A, a voice said as a busty woman clad in a skin-tight outfit that empathized her figure and had a red mask on over her face said as she stepped forward as she spoke in an excited tone. I am your instructor for this event, Narumi Kayama, but you all know me as Midnight, the fanservice woman said as she waved a whip in her hand. I hope you are all ready for a steamy experience, the pro hero said to them. Man, what a babe, Denki said with a grin, pleased to see her. Maybe she'll give us some private tutor. He was interrupted when he got smacked upside the head by one of Jiru's ear jacks. Get your mind out of the gutter, Jiru said to him. This is an old favorite practice of mine, called rescue the civilian, Midnight declared, waving her cat o' nine tails whip. The premise is simple enough. A civilian is dangling from the roof and needs to be saved. We are going to have 1 versus 1 matchups where the first person to rescue them wins the contest. This is all about speed and reaction, knowing how to think on your feet. There are plenty of obstacles and hazards as well that you must look out for. And while I endorse a good competitive matchup, there is to be no cheating, no attacking, and no foul play. At least not that I can see, at least, she said with a wink before reaching out with her whip and touching Koji's chin with it, making him tilt his head up. Is that clear, big boy? She asked. Why, yes, ma'am, the rock-faced student nervously answered, blushing deeply. Good, now then our first matchup is Midnight and Drew names. Oh, Izuku Midoriya versus Rikido Sato. Step forward, you two hunks, she said, making her announcement. Hey, good luck out there and maybe the best man win, Rikido said good-naturedly to him as he pat him on the back as the two were prepared to begin. Ready, start, Midnight shouted, waving her whip. Rikido charged ahead, going straight into the building, while Izuku went to the side of the building looking to scale up it. Going up the wall, he came to a ledge and pulled himself up it. He felt around and detected a draft coming from one of the windows, which was opened, and went to it. But just as he did, his nose picked up the smell of smoke and ash, causing him to stop. Flames suddenly emitted from the window as it became lit and on fire, preventing him from passing through. Izuku backed away from the flames, covering his face up with his hands. Oh, a fire hazard has broken out. Can't go that way, Midnight's voice exclaimed as she and the others looked on. Midoriya has been cut off while Sato has decided to do his hammer impersonation with the walls as nails, she said as Rikido was shown charging through the walls using his enhanced strength to do so. Izuku looked around knowing that he couldn't go through the fire without risking injury when he heard a swinging sound and noticed that there was a ladder nearby. Going into a run, he jumped and leapt, grabbing the edge of it, and pulled himself up and began to climb it before reaching a set of stairs. Nice recovery. Bypassed the flaming windows and heading up top, Midnight said, taping her finger against her chin. While Rakido, it seems, is having trouble. She mentioned as the orange-clad hero was blocked by heavy objects in a room, requiring him to move them out of the way so he could pass. He went up them when they suddenly gave out beneath him and he hanged on tightly to the railing. Oh, that building won't be holding up much longer. Better hurry up, heroes, Midnight said as she continued to do commentary. Wait, what's Midoriya up to? She said as he got his baton out and undid the top and revealed cable rope hidden in it. Izuku took the rope and, swinging it, tossed it like a lasso, and it wrapped around the edge of the building and he began climbing up it. Oh my, what an unexpected turn of events. Way to bypass obstacles. It's making me all tingly inside, Midnight said with a squeal. Keep it up, heroes. Rakido had shoved a piano out of the way when he consumed a pastry, increasing his strength. He then grabbed a chair and threw it at the roof, creating a hole in it, and climbing the piano, scaled up the hole to the next floor. It's neck and neck, it's anyone's game. Izuku had reached the top of the rope when Rakido had created another hole in the way, causing him to nearly let go of the rope, but recovered in the nick of time. He could hear him inside, and it appeared that he was closer to the rooftop than he was. His radar sense couldn't detect any holds or places for him to grab and climb up, and if Rakido smashed again, he'd be risked getting knocked off. The civilian was nearby, dangling from the roof, and it was then that an idea came to his mind as he produced the rope again and swung it, wrapping around the side of the building. Rakido had reached the rooftop, emerging from the building, and smiled seeing the civilian, thinking that he had won as he ran at it, as all he had to do was touch it and he'd win. But to his shock, Izuku suddenly swung past him on the rope and grabbed the dummy. Izuku's got the civilian, he wins, Midnight's voice shouted, proclaiming him the winner. Izuku swung around carrying the dummy, trying to figure out a way to get down now. It was too high up for him to drop down as he was trying to find a place to land. He then heard a creaking sound and realized that the rope was starting to give way due to the pressure. He swung around trying to find a ledge to land on when it strained, causing him to lose control and careen at the wall. His back hit the wall with a thud, causing him to grit his teeth and inhale sharply. The cable rope started to loosen, but was then grabbed by Rakido, who caught it and pulled both of them up to the rooftop. Thanks, Rakido, Izuku said after he had reached the top and set foot on the roof. Good match there, Midoriya, Rakido said, taking the loss in stride. I'm going to have to push myself further if I want to match you, he said, and offered his hand, and Izuku took it and shook it as they congratulated one another. Oh, what a display of showmanship, Midnight shouted. That's what I call a dramatic climax. Now let's see who our next combatants are and if they can stimulate me just as much. Blood was seen sprayed all over the area as multiple bodies were seen sprawled on the floor of the warehouse. It looked like something out of a horror movie, but it was all too real as the inhabitants shown inside were all dead, some with missing limbs that had been cut or blown off. An empty magazine was seen hitting the ground as a Sega 12 shotgun was shown being reloaded. A figure was shown calmly reloading it, paying no mind or attention to all the death that surrounded him. Deaths that he had caused, and should anyone show up like the last time, he would put them down on well. Villain, hero, it didn't matter. Finishing reloading, he looked on. Although there was no movement, he could tell that there was people who were still alive. He watched, waited, and listened. He could hear the faint sound of someone breathing, which indicated where they was at, and turned and fired the shotgun. The bullet went and hit the wall, ricocheting off it, and drew out the one who was hiding. The criminal who had a fire quirk threw a fireball at him, which he dodged, and dropped the shotgun and charged at him. He dodged the attacks, moving faster than the eye could trace, and pulled out his katana that was strapped to his back. He swung the blade, aiming for their head, and the criminal leaned back and it just barely nicked his face, leaving a small cut and a trace of blood on the sword. That was all he needed. He consumed the blood, and the man suddenly found himself unable to move as he dropped to the ground, not understating why his body had shut down. He didn't have much time to think it over though, as he was skewered and sent into an endless sleep which he would never wake up from. Pulling the blade out, the attacker looked on over and spotted the lone remaining figure in the room, as it was now just them. Name, Manabu Yuasuke. Crimes, drug racketeering, arson, weapons smuggling. He said, listing all the charges against him throughout his criminal career. Was it the Gifu incident that occurred 2 years ago and apprehended 6 months later, and then released from prison 2 weeks ago? He said as he took a step forward, looking like the Grim Reaper in person. Leave me the hell alone, the man shouted as he fled, deciding not to fight like the others had. He jumped off the railing and landed on the floor, running to the door. His pursuer's feet hit the floor as well, and he saw him go. He dropped low into a crouch, and a kunai slipped out of his sleeve into his hand, and he threw it. The man cried out in pain as his knee was pierced, the blade going through it and sticking out the other side. He fell to the floor, clutching his leg, howling in agony as blood emerged from the floor. He crawled and tried to drag himself to the floor but was stopped when the weapon was grabbed and then yanked right out of his leg, causing him to scream. He looked on at the one who had done it as he placed the weapon back. As he looked down on at him, "Come on. This isn't right. Heroes don't act like this," he protested, begging for mercy. "Do I look like a hero?" his assailant said, spitting out the word as though it was venom. He stepped on the knee, twisting and grinding his spiked boot into it, making it so the man could never walk on that leg again. He did it with no mercy, wanting him to have every second filled with pain. The same pain he had put others through with his actions. "Just let me go. I'll go back to prison, I swear," the man pleaded with him. "Yeah, what a wonderful idea," the vigilante said with a sneer. "Go to prison, bribe the guards to bring you 5-star meals every day while you lounge in your penthouse suite, and then when you get out of jail after claiming you'll be a good boy now on, start right where you left off," he said to him. "An endless damn cycle over and over. You'd like that to happen, wouldn't you?" he said, towering over the fallen man. He then reached to a holster and pulled out a handheld firearm. This isn't justice," the criminal shouted at him. "You're right, it's not justice," he replied as he aimed the Glock. The gun went off and the bullet pierced the man's skull, killing him on contact. Smoke was seen emitting from the barrel of the gun as the man who held the firearm looked on with no remorse over what he had done. That was only a small part of a much bigger puzzle of what he needed to do. "It's punishment," he proclaimed before turning around and departing the scene, leaving none alive. And that's it for this chapter. Review please. And now, in the spirit of the holidays, Class 1 is shown on stage standing in 2 rows of 10. Holiday music begins to play as they start to sing. Class 1A. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose. If you ever saw it, you would even saw it glows Toru, like a light bulb. Aizawa, Toru. Class 1A. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. Mina, like Schnozola. Aizawa, Mina. Class 1A. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. Kirishima, like strip poker. Aizawa, I'm warning you all. Class 1A. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, "Miss Joke, take it Aizawa." Aizawa, Rudolph, get your nose over here so that you can guide my sleigh today, all might. Oh, Aizawa. Class 1A. Then how the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history. Toru, like Attila the Hun. Aizawa, why you little. Toru, back, back you vultures, back I say. The voice of Present Mike could be heard trying to keep a horde of reporters from getting inside Ua with the reports that All Might was teaching at the school. They had descended onto the school like ants on sugar, trying to get in and get a glimpse of the famed hero, leaving Present Mike assigned to try and stop them. I'd reckon right now Present Mike would rather be fighting 100 enemies than dealing with the media, Principal Nezu said, looking out the window before turning around to look at the rest of the assembled heroes and teachers inside the room who he had called. Now then, let's overgo what recently happened, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, he asked a man who was literally stone. At 900 hours, the UO alarm went off, indicating that someone had bypassed the defense barrier. He spoke up, his arms folded across his chest. Thankfully, it was just a false alarm though. But it was not the media like most believed, I'm afraid, he said, and Nezu nodded his head. The students had nearly panicked and caused a riot, but thankfully 𝗍𝗏𝗍 of Class 1 had managed to calm everyone down. Correct, if the press had someone who could destroy the barrier, we would know about it, he said, looking on at the group. I'm afraid that this is far more than an attempt at celebrity scandals, he told them. Hound Dog, I want you and 𝗍𝗏𝗄 to patrol the school today to make sure that no one who is not allowed here has snuck in after all. You two would be best suited with your quirks. Should you find someone, do not use any force to remove from the premises unless their intentions are ill, he said to the two, who nodded and departed. Being a bit overreactive, aren't we? Recovery Girl asked him, the elderly woman looking on at him behind her visor. I'm afraid not. Anyone who could penetrate the barrier would only do so with an evil intent, he said, looking down at the floor in thought. There's been a lot of talk going on lately. A mysterious group with little information or whereabouts, as well as this vigilante who's been going around killing with no hesitation. I've heard about this so-called vigilante as well, Midnight said, speaking up. He shot up another place the other day, using both guns and swords, it sounds like. He's attacking villains and criminals and heroes as well if they emerge and try to stop them. Indeed, no one knows who he is though. This person, whomever they may be, are highly trained and a force to be reckoned with. Sir, one of the teachers spoke up. He's only been targeting, from what I heard, those who are wanted and done crimes. I know his methods are extreme, but is he not doing the world good if he is eliminating them? Nezu shook his head in disapproval. No, it is not. I cannot condone these actions in any shape or form. The day a hero murders another in cold blood, even if it is a villain, is the day that they become no better than those they oppose and become everything they stand against, he told them, as that was a line that could not be crossed. I see, sir. My apologies. Suddenly, the building shook as a loud noise was heard. What the hell? Midnight shouted as the school was shaking. Are we under attack? She asked, as if expecting alarm bells to go off. Damn it, May. A voice shouted from within the school, the person's voice echoing all around. What the hell were you thinking combining so many combustible elements together? The voice exclaimed, "Sorry, sir." A female voice stated, apologizing. False alarm, Principal Nezu said as it was nothing to worry about. "Can I get a refill, please?" A voice asked in the small diner. "That's the 4th cup I've poured you the past 15 minutes. The waitress said as she approached with a pot. "I should instead just leave this here for you," she said as she refilled his cup. "Don't know you, stranger, but you must work late nights if you drink that much." "Thanks," the person said and took a long sip of coffee. There was few patrons in the diner he had stopped at, having come here to get food. It was small, out of the way, where people could come in and mind their own business, which was the way he liked it. For smooth and beautiful curls, use the spray lotion that is endorsed by Pro Hero. A TV in the diner spoke up, showing a commercial with a woman with snakes in her hair advertising a product. He looked on at it and a look of disgust appeared in his eyes for a brief moment. And now, more details on the incident 2 nights ago at a warehouse. The TV then switched to the news, showing a man with antlers speaking up. This is the 5th incident the past month where several bodies have been found shot up and brutally maimed. Due to the graphic nature of the images, we cannot show them to you, the reporter said as the patron looked on at the screen. Details remain sketchy, but thus far, all have been linked to drug runners and smugglers. Police and heroes have not ruled out the possibility of gang wars erupting between them. Just what is going on nowadays, the waitress said as she turned the TV off, shaking her head. "It's like everyone's gone crazy and shooting each other up, huh?" she said as she turned around and saw the person who had been at the table had left without a word or sound. A couple bills left on the table. Outside, a van door was seen opening up and it was shown filled with many gadgets and equipment, as it was much larger on the inside, complete with a changing room. A figure stepped in and grabbed a katana that was hanging on the wall and turned on the police radio that was installed and listened in. It was an old model, but it was the best he could do with right now as he stepped into the room and stripped down. A voice then spoke up on it, "All units and heroes, we have a reported drug deal going on. Any who's available proceed to the following coordinates," the voice said as the figure tied the bandana around his eyes and face and stepped out clad in his gear and picked up a rifle, strapping it across his back, and 2 sidearms he put into his holsters. "Who's the dirtbag I'm after now?" Stain said as he listened in and turned the keys and drove off, heading towards the destination. Class 1 was seen on a bus, being taken to where their hero exercise class was being held at for today. Clad in their hero outfits, they were all eager for what today's assignment would be. Of course, it would not go without incident. "What you'd say? I'll kick your ass." You have 3 guesses as to who said that, and the first 2 don't count. "I said that people aren't going to want a hero who only cares about himself," 𝐒𝐿 calmly said to the fuming Katsuki. The explosion quirk user looked ready to blow up at what 𝐬𝐿 had said. "Heroes are meant to inspire and bring hope to others. You only want to be a hero so to satisfy your ego and inferiority complex you have." 𝐬𝐿 continued on to him. "What the inferiority complex? You miserable bitch," Katsuki shouted. "Hold your tongue, such language is distasteful," 𝐼𝐵 said to him, criticizing him. "Mind your own damn business, grass hair," Katsuki shouted at her before turning back to glare at 𝐬𝐿, who seemed unfazed by his glare. "If blowing steam out of your nose is supposed to be scary, I'm afraid you'll have to do more than that. You miserable wart-faced toad," Katsuki snapped at her. 𝐬𝐿 seemed unfazed at most of his words, but when he said that, her face flinched as he struck a nerve. "You don't talk to her that way." Izuku, who had been quiet for the ride, said, suddenly standing up, glaring at Bakugo behind his mask. "Keep your mouth shut, Katsuki. What are you going to do about it, Deku?" Bakugo said, sneering at him. "All of you shut up or I'm turning this thing around and giving you all Fs." Aizawa said from the front of the bus. "Why didn't he call in sick today?" The teacher peered from a mirror back at the class, who were now quiet. Midoriya had put his hand on Asui's to comfort her. Bakugo was at best tolerated by majority of the class, while Midoriya seemed to have a way to draw people to him. While Bakugo had been the most popular student at his middle school and Midoriya the exact opposite, the positions had changed now. He had done research on both of them. Bakugo was liked and admired for his quirk's potential, which was a detriment, inflating his ego and sense of self-worth, while Midoriya was deemed useless and bullied because he didn't have one. But now that he didn't let it go to his head, as he was humble and never talked down to anyone. 2 sides of the same coin they appeared to be. They soon arrived at their location and were dropped off. "Hello class and welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, also known as USJ," a hero clad in a spacesuit said as they welcomed the class to the place. "My name is 13 and I shall be your instructor for today," he said, and was greeted warmly by the students, having heard of him. "Hey, wait a sec, I thought All Might was supposed to be here," Hiroshima asked, looking on as the muscular hero was absent. "I'm afraid that before you arrived, All Might got called away on official business and sends his apologies that he wasn't able to attend today." 13 responded to them, which Aizawa knew was code for that his quirk had ran empty and couldn't hold it any longer. The class was led around as 𝗬𝗏 gave a speech to them, detailing to them about the many obstacles and situations that a hero would be facing and that the USJ housed multiple situations that they would be testing for rescuing people such as burning buildings, water hazards, and others. Izuku listened in as he walked on, taking all the information in. But as he did, he suddenly detected something in the atmosphere as it was changing, as though there was a disturbance in it. "Mr. Aizawa," he said, speaking up. "What?" the shaggy-haired teacher said. "Something's not right," Izuku told him. "What do you mean?" Aizawa said, a look of confusion on his face as Izuku seemed disturbed by something. "Something in the air seems off," he said to him, and many in the class were looking at him, wondering what he was talking about. "Something's not right about backup, everyone," he exclaimed loudly as he detected a presence. The class stopped what they were doing and looked on as the lights in the building suddenly went out. In the distance, a dark purple portal the size of a ball appeared. "Hey, what's going on?" Denki said. "This isn't part of the exercise, is it?" he said as it got bigger and bigger. "Stand back," Aizawa exclaimed to his students as suddenly a hand reached out and a person with multiple severed hands attached to his person emerged from it. "Villains," he said with a spat. "Hello, would-be heroes. Allow me to answer your 2 questions," the ominous figure said as slowly more and more emerged from the portal. Amongst them was a large figure with a beak-like mouth and its brain matter exposed. "I'm Shigaraki, and we are the League of Villains," he said as dozens and dozens exited the portal. "And for your second question, yes, these are real," he said, motioning to the hands on his person. The portal disappeared and another person made of smoke and fog appeared. "Now please answer our questions. Would you mind telling us where All Might is?" Kurogiri stated. "All Might," Izuku said, looking on in alarm. "Yes, you see, we wish to find him and kill him," Shigaraki said to them. "Be a good little NPC and tell us, won't you? I'd hate for my friends to have to torture it out of you," he said, and many of the villains let out a laugh. "Guys, I don't want to alarm you, but I think I'm going to lose control of my bladder," Denki said, freaking out as there seemed to be no end in sight to the villains. One, however, kept his cool and stepped forward, a look of determination on his face. "Oh, a lone fool against an army?" Shigaraki asked, amusement in his eyes, and Aizawa glared at him as he slipped on his goggles. "Let's kill this fool. Snipers, fire!" a thug shouted, raising his cannon arms, but was unable to as nothing shot out. "What the?" Pow! Aizawa's boot caught him right under the chin, sending him flying backwards. He then punched another one in the face and then, grabbing them, tossed them into others. "You're dead," a female villain shouted, her pigtails starting to spin rapidly as she charged him. Aizawa turned his gaze on her and her hair suddenly stopped, reverting back to normal. "Huh," she said in confusion before she got wrapped up in his tape and hurled away. "That's Eraserhead," one of the villains shouted, recognizing what was going on. "Run," Aizawa shouted at his class. "Get out of here now," he ordered them, and he dodged an attack and punched a villain in the face. "What are you doing?" I said. "Go. 𝗬𝗏, get them out of here," he shouted as he fought against them. "Class, hurry, we must evacuate immediately," 𝗬𝗏 said to them, urging them to go. But Izuku started to protest. "This is not a video game or your Saturday morning cartoons. These villains will attempt to kill you all with no hesitation. We must go," he ordered them, rushing them along. "Kurogiri, do not let the brats escape," Shimura shouted, ordering him to pursue them. As one fled, they attempted to make contact, but to no avail. "Communications are shot. We are unable to call you for help," Ochako proclaimed as they couldn't get a reception. "The villains must have someone who can cancel out communications," Momo said as she was piecing it together. "Why the hell are we running? We should go back and kick their asses," Katsuki shouted, and despite being blind, Izuku rolled his eyes. "Yeah, and get slaughtered back there," he responded, and Katsuki snarled at him. "What you'd say, Deku?" he snapped. "Enough, you two," Tenya said, stepping in between. "Children, all of you stay with me," 𝗬𝗏 said to the class. "I'd guide you to safety, I promise," he told them as he led them. They were about to reach the exit when the villain made of smoke appeared. Now, it's rude to leave without saying goodbye," Kurogiri said to them. Kirishima and Bakugo charged and attempted to attack him, but he merely laughed as he wasn't fazed by their attacks. "Would you please tell me where All Might is? I don't believe violence is the only way to solve things, unlike my associate." "Stand back, children," 𝗬𝗏 shouted and fired an attack from his fingers. Kurogiri saw, and it teleported out of the way and saw it hit a wall and destroy it. "Your black hole technique is as impressive as I've heard," Kurogiri said to him. "But I'd advise firing at me again." "We'll see about that. Nothing can withstand a black hole," 𝗬𝗏 shouted and fired once more, and Kurogiri created a portal and the attacks went in them. "Teleporting attacks," 𝗬𝗏 said. Caught off guard, Izuku suddenly detected something. "𝗬𝗏, watch out. My quirk isn't just used for teleporting people, it can also transport other matters, namely my foe's attacks," Kurogiri said, and suddenly a portal appeared behind 𝗬𝗏. "What?" he shouted as he saw his own attacks coming right at his back. "Farewell," Kurogiri said with a laugh, and Class 1 looked on in horror as the hero's body was ripped apart by his own black holes. The spacesuit hero collapsed to the ground, his outfit shredded. "You bastard!" Kirishima shouted at him at what he had done. "𝐻M, it appears that there's too many bunched up. Let's play a little game of divide and conquer, shall we?" Kurogiri said, and he activated his quirk once more. Before any one of the students could react, several warp holes appeared beneath them and they fell through, plummeting downwards and disappearing without a trace. The villain looked on as he deactivated his quirk with a laugh as he had cut them in half. "This is proving to be a most entertaining development," he said as their army was ready to attack them. Hitoshi Shinsho and Toyokami 𝗵𝗲 were seen, the two having been teleported to a location with hard gusts of wind. Hitoshi held onto his hat as they were being blown away, having been sent to the windstorm section. "Where is everyone?" he asked, looking on but didn't see anyone around. It was just the two of them, it appeared. He did not see any of the others. "Well, we've got to find a way to find the others and get out of here," he said, and began to walk. As he did, he realized that his companion was not joining them and turned around and saw him standing like a statue. "What are you doing?" Hitoshi asked as Toyokami stood there against the side of the building, not moving a muscle. Suddenly, dark shadow lunged out from him and struck the wall. A shriek was heard as a chameleon-like figure was shown, having blended in and attempting to ambush them. The villain let out a surprise at being attacked and started to run. "Dark shadow, do not let him escape," Toyokami ordered, and the purple ghost went in pursuit and grew arms and, grabbing the villain by the tail, picked it up and slammed it onto the ground hard. The villain inhaled sharply in pain when he saw himself looking up at Hitoshi. "Aren't you a weakling?" Hitoshi said in a jeering tone. Weakling. I'll show." The villain started to respond, only to fall under Hitoshi's brainwashing quirk. Toyokami stepped forward with Dark Shadow ready to attack, but Hitoshi held his hand up, motioning for him to stand down. "How are the villains able to cut off communications?" Hitoshi said, demanding to know. He remembered the others talking about how they weren't able to make contact and that they were being jammed somehow. "One of us is capable of shorting out communications with his quirk," the chameleon villain stated, answering without fail. "I see. Which one?" Hitoshi asked him. "The one who has electricity." "Are you sure he's telling the truth?" Toyokami asked, a skeptical look on his face, and Hitoshi nodded his head. "Indeed, my quirk forces people to do whatever I tell them to, including telling the truth. We need to find one who matches the description and subdue him," Hitoshi said to him. "That way we can get communications back up and contact you." "All right then. What should we do with him?" "Take him prisoner," the bird hero said, motioning to the villain, but Hitoshi shook his head. "They won't care for their own, and we can't be delayed with burdens right now. See that building over there?" he said, motioning to it, and the villain nodded. "Ram your head into it," he ordered him. The villain stood up and charged at the building, slamming into it and knocking himself out. "Let's go," Hitoshi said, taking charge. Elsewhere, Izuku felt someone nudging him, trying to wake him up. Pulling himself up, the blind hero in training got to his knees. "Where am I?" "Izuku," a voice said, and he recognized it as Aibara's. "Thank the Lord you are okay," the Christian girl said to him. "Aibara," Izuku said, shaking his head. "What's happened?" he asked. "It appears that the villain back has transported us," Aibara said to him. "We're in a mountain range of the USJ. Shoto is here as well," she informed him, and off to the side, keeping a lookout, was the dual quirk user. Izuku stood up, getting his bearings. "Where are the others?" "Tsuyu, Kirishima, I'm afraid I don't know," Aibara said, shaking her head. "From the way it appears, we've been all separated," Shoto said, speaking up as he turned to face them. "There's several places here, so I wager that we all got sent to different places on random. They're trying to pick us off one by one," he said, and Izuku nodded his head. "That makes sense. I just hope the others will be okay," Izuku said as he got his walking stick and turned it into his baton weapon. "I have the feeling we're going to have to fight soon," he told them, and Shoto nodded. "I know you're not willing to use violence, Aibara, but we're in danger here," he told her, and the Christian girl nodded. "Let's find a way to get off this mountain and hopefully find the others," Shoto said, and the three began to go. They didn't get far when Izuku suddenly held up his hand, ordering them to stop. "What is it?" Aibara asked him. "We're not alone," Izuku said as he felt like a gazelle being stalked by a cheetah right now. "I don't see anything. Our enemies are highly trained in stealth, I'm afraid," he responded, and his companions looked on as if expecting to be attacked any moment. "Both of you keep your guard up," Shoto said to them. "Until we meet up with the others, we are in grave danger," he told them, and the three slowly went on, trying to find a way down the mountain so they could join up with the others. 5 figures clad in the red attire of the shinobi were shown, having scaled the mountain in secret before Class 1 had even gotten to the USJ and had been waiting in preparation, each with their faces and heads covered up by hoods as they were seen, each possessing a weapon, and the leader, who wore black with his costume, had a scythe in hand. Making motions with his hands to communicate via sign language, he ordered them to follow their targets, and more silent than the dawn they pursued. Izuku Midoriya carefully made his way through the mountain terrain area of the USJ, the blind hero in training making his way down the side of it along with Shoto, Todoroki, and Aibara Shiozaki. "Careful, it's getting narrower around here," Shoto called out to them. One misstep and it was a long and painful way down. 𝐼𝐵𝗃𝗃, if one of us starts to slip, grab us with your quirk. Right, the female trainee said, nodding her head. Although I pray that it won't come to that. The trio continued on. All of Izuku's enhanced senses were alert. They weren't alone. In fact, it felt like they were being stalked as though they were prey. Despite not detecting a presence, he could feel it in the air that eyes were upon them. Why do you and Bakugo have it in for one another? 𝐼𝐵𝗃 asked him. I've noticed ever since the first day that you two have mixed together like oil and water. She said to him. Have you ever seen the Karate Kid? Izuku asked her. Well, take the antagonist Johnny Lawrence, multiply him by 10 and you got Katsuki. He said dryly to her as a mental image of him wearing a Cobra Kai gi was shown. But if asked to sweep the leg, he'd have gladly done so already. He told 𝐼𝐵𝗃. That makes you Daniel then. The ground suddenly began to tremble and shake, which was cause for alarm. Earthquake. 𝐼𝐵𝗃 said, her eyes widening. No, something's coming up from below, Izuku said as he detected the vibrations in the ground. As soon as he finished speaking, a hole appeared from the ground having been dug through. Several villains emerged from the hole. 3 humanoid-looking ones and a mole man who was responsible for burrowing and drilling the hole. Now we're going to have some fun. One of them, who appeared to be the leader, said. Been a while since we've got to bust some skulls, they said as they surrounded the threesome, leaving no chance to escape or run away. Now what? 𝐼𝐵𝗃 asked. We fight, 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿 said as ice covered over half of his body. There's no other option, it appears. Afraid you're right, Izuku said as he took a fighting stance. This wasn't like the battle simulation tests. This was going to be the real thing. Give us the girl and maybe we'll let you 2 brats leave alive, the thugs said. Why? Afraid that she'd be more than a match for you by herself, Izuku taunted them, which enraged them. Kill all 3 of them. The leader, who possessed a face like a T-Rex and tail like a lizard, shouted. Take this, one villain shouted, lunging with his weapon and using his quirk extended it several feet directly at 𝗧𝗵𝗻's head. 𝗧𝗵𝗻 easily caught the pole and nonchalantly froze it. What? The villain shouted as 𝗧𝗵𝗻 then snapped it in 2, breaking it. He staggered backwards in shock and was hit with a barrage of ice, slamming him into the side of the mountain. A villainess with extendable nails lunged and slashed at Midoriya, who evaded her attacks as they were sloppy and easy to detect where they were coming from. Evading them, he swung his baton, hitting directly against their left hand and cracked the nails, making them cry out in pain, and he then swung and hit them in the jaw, knocking them out. The leader lunged at Izuku, snapping his maw at him. Izuku dodged out of the way and avoided the swung tail. Predictable, he said as the thug had no fighting expertise and relied slowly on his quirk. The attacks were open and easy to read as he dodged it. He then delivered a kick to his ankle, the force of it snapping it, making the villain yell in pain as he then hit it in the throat with a jab, causing him to choke and lose breath, leaving him wide open for 𝗧𝗵𝗻 to finish him off. The mole villain, being a coward, fled back underground trying to escape. Oh no you don't, 𝐼𝐵𝗃 said as her hair extended and in the vines went down into the hole, giving pursuit after the mole villain. Got you, she claimed, and pulled them back up as she had gotten him, with him entangled in the vines trying to get out. Unhand me, you wench, he shrieked, trying to get away, but found himself face to face with 𝗧𝗵𝗻, who lifted his hand, which was covered with ice and starting to spread to him. Wait, don't. I've got questions. Who's the head of this army? He said, demanding to know. I don't know. They just recruited me cause they needed someone who had a digging quirk, the pathetic villain said. That wasn't good enough for 𝗧𝗵𝗻 as the ice spreaded closer. Wait. The leader is some psychopath who can kill people just by touching them with his hand. What? Such a quirk exists? 𝐼𝐵𝗃 said, shocked that such a vile quirk was real. What else? Izuku demanded to know. Which other powers do you all possess? Well, one's a shark man, and another can cancel out communications. And there's someone go back, 𝗧𝗵𝗻 demanded. You said one can jam communications. Why yeah, without him and that big monster they got, I never would have signed up for this job. I'm just supposed to be used for ambushes and quick escapes. I'm not a fighter now, let me go. Izuku delivered a chop to his neck which knocked him out, and 𝐼𝐵𝗃 sat him down. These villains seem to be little more than your average variety punks who hold up convenience stores and arcades, 𝗧𝗵𝗻 said, not impressed by what he had seen by them. Their only strength is in numbers, that's all, he told Izuku and 𝐼𝐵𝗃, who nodded. But just to be sure, he said, and place a thick layer of ice over the holes so to prevent others from emerging. Let's go, he told them. 𝗧𝗵𝗻, wait, your body, Izuku said, and the dual hair-colored student looked back at him. It's getting colder and spreading throughout it. That just happens when I use my ice quirk. It's nothing, he said, dodging the question. You'll get frostbite if you keep using it like that, Izuku mentioned to him. I said it's not important, Izuku, 𝗧𝗵𝗻 replied, a hint of annoyance in his voice. Why won't you use your fire half then? 𝐼𝐵𝗃 asked. Doing so would nullify the risk of damaging your body, since that's how your quirk works, with the two countering one another. In fact, I've never seen you use your other powers. Never, 𝗧𝗵𝗻 said as a look of anger briefly appeared on his face. The day that I use my left side is the day the bastard who cursed me with it wins, he said, speaking in a tone that was unlike his usual style, which was alarming. Let's go, he said, and turned and walked away. Izuku, looking on, had a frown on his face, detecting from his heartbeat that this was a touchy subject and one that Shoto did not want others involved in. TCH, what the hell? I thought these scumbags could actually put up a fight. Katsuki Bakugo said, a look of disgust on his face. The explosion quirk user had been teleported along with Kirishima into an area where they had been immediately ambushed. Thrilled with getting a chance to fight, he had unleashed his attacks from his hands and gauntlets and overwhelmed them with it. I bet I could kick the ass of that creep with the multiple hands all by myself if this is all they got to offer, he said as he wanted to find that guy and blast that smug look off his face. The wild-haired boy remained quiet as they looked on at the sight. All the villains had been knocked out and were unconscious from the battle that had taken place. Well, right now, we need to find our way back to the others and hope all of them are okay, Kirishima said as he made sure there was none sneaking about. Don't bother, it's not worth our time, Katsuki replied, and Kirishima frowned in response. Hey, they're our classmates and we need to. If Deku and those other background characters can't even beat these clowns, then they're weaker than I thought, Katsuki said, which surprised Kirishima. I know none of them won't be losing to any of them even if they all ganged up on the weakest of them, he said, and for Kirishima it almost sounded like he was complimenting them. Well, what do we do now then? He asked Katsuki, who merely sported a slasher smile in response. We find and kick the asses out of everyone else who gets in our way. Ribbit, this isn't good, Suiwasui said, looking out at the scene before her. The frog girl was seen on a ship in the middle of a lake, having been transported to the water area of the USJ. Luckily for her, she was in her element as she had managed to evade the aquatic villains that were there and along with the others managed to get to the ship, but now they were surrounded on all sides. Oh man, there's gotta be a way out of this mess, a voice said, and she turned her head, seeing the worried look on her peers. If we panic, we're just going to make a mistake. We need to think this through, Kaminari, she said to him. Suyu's right, Ochako said, the brunette looking on. We can't make any kind of rash decisions, she said as it was her, Tsuyu and Denki Kaminari who were on the boat. The villains below patrolled and taunted them. So long as they were on the ship they were safe, but they couldn't stay on it forever. Kaminari, water conducts electricity, can't you blast them with it or something? Ochako asked him. I'm not that kind of quirk user, he protested. Sure, I can emit electricity, but only around myself. I can't throw out bolts of lightning and zap people, Denki said. Sorry, but that's how it goes. What about you use your gravity quirk to lift us so we can fly out of here? That would work, but I'm afraid we'd be sitting ducks and open targets for them to attack us if I tried that, Ochako said. A thud was heard, causing her to lose her balance briefly as the villains were now ramming the ship, trying to tip it over and force them into the water. I could try using my quirk to throw things on here at them, she suggested as she looked around for what they could use. Well, maybe we can use both of your quirks so to get out of here, Ribbit, Suyu said to them, and they looked at her. Ochako, come here for a second, she said, and the brunette hesitated for a bit before going over. Hey, what are you two gossiping about? Denki protested as the two whispered to themselves, their voices low so he couldn't hear what they were planning. Are you two talking about me? He demanded to know as they were keeping him out of the loop, and every now and then they would look back at him before turning their heads. Are you sure? Ochako asked, a look of uncertainty on her face. Ribbit, I think it's our best shot, Suyu confirmed to her. Okay then, I'll follow your lead. The two turned around and Ochako used her quirk to lift both of them up. Hey, what are you two doing? Don't leave me here, Denki protested, seeing what was happening. Kaminari, please don't take this personal, Ochako said, bowing her head in apology. Suyu then lashed out with her leg, her foot colliding against his chest. The blow knocked him backwards and he fell off the ship into the water with a splash. He emerged from the water kicking and flailing his limbs, trying to stay afloat. Get him, a shark villain shouted as they dashed towards him. HHH, Denki shouted in horror as they were about to get him. In fear, he activated his quirk, lighting up his whole body as he let loose with all the electricity he had in his body. The entire pond was lit up and glowing brightly as the villains seemed in pain as they were electrocuted by him. A yellow light engulfing the area as the thugs had nowhere to go as they were attacked. After several moments it stopped, with the villains incapacitated and defeated. The two girls floated back down to the ship, having gotten out of range to avoid it. Let's go, and don't forget Kaminari, Ochako said as the plan had worked. Ribbit, Suyu said, and lashed out her tongue, wrapping it around Kaminari and pulled him up to the ship. Sorry about having to do that, but I wasn't sure that you'd agree with it if you had known, she apologized to him. Yeah, Denki said as he had that stupid look on his face after having short-circuited and frying his brain from using his quirk. Suyu carrying him then leapt off the ship with Ochako, the three not having any fears from being attacked now as they made their escape. She thought to herself, wondering how he and the others were doing. We're nearing the exit, not much further until we're out of here, Ibara said as she and the others were seen having descended the mountain range. Praise be to heaven, she said, bringing her hands up in prayer as there had been no more attacks. But just before they could take a step further, Izuku heard a whistling sound as something was coming at them. Get down, he shouted loudly, drawing their attention, and he ducked under as a knife flew by, just missing piercing his head as it embedded itself on the ground. Shoto looked up where it had come from, and his eyes widened as he saw 5 figures above them, each clad in red and with their faces covered up with masks and hoods to hide themselves. "Ninja," he said as they were dressed in the fashion of it. The 5 leapt down from the mountain slope and threw weapons, forcing the 3 to scatter and dodge as the 5 attackers landed on the ground. "Take them," the leader of the 5 said, and each pulled out a weapon. They converged on them as they attacked. These were much more dangerous than the regular thugs that had been brought by the League of Villains. They moved with speed and precision, encircling around them, never staying in the same spot, moving faster than the eye could detect. Izuku dodged a sword swung at his head, but was then kicked in the back, sending him stumbling forward. He brought his baton up and blocked an attack in the nick of time that was close to cutting off his head. He threw a kick but missed the target as the ninja backflipped away and threw shuriken at him as a cut mark appeared on his cheek. A scythe swung on a chain was thrown at him he just avoided. He had a feeling that these were the ones he had been sensing stalking them all this time. "Stick together," Shoto shouted at Aibara and Izuku, and using his powers created a dome of ice around them to protect themselves. The enemy ninjas attacked, but their swords and daggers they carried could not break through the ice dome he had created. "They won't be able to break through that," Shoto said, confident that they were safe now. The leader motioned for the others to back off, and one of them, who carried a container on his back, sat it down. "What are they doing?" Aibara asked in confusion. The lock on the container was undone and the lid was removed, and the group vanished, leaving it before them. Sludge suddenly poured out of the container, emptying from it as more and more green sludge appeared. The sludge didn't spread out. It began to gather in one piece before taking a shape, and a mouth with several flesh-ripping teeth appeared and eyes emerged on its face. "What fiend from the depths of hell is this?" Aibara asked, a look of horror on her face as they saw what was emerging. The trainees could only look on as the unknown being let loose a roar that echoed all around the mountain area. Appearing above on top of the mountain, Scythe, the leader of the group, looked on at the scene and what had been unleashed. It was more monster than man, a villain that had been found lurking and hiding in the sewers of one of their organization's bases. The sludge villain had been discovered and defeated by his superiors, but believing that it would be of use to them, had ordered it detained and sealed in a container. After Gorgon had used his stone power to immobilize it, they had placed a collar around its neck that sent shockwaves into it to force it to comply, and now it served their purpose, having brought it with them. The sludge villain lunged at the 3, forcing them to scatter. Tendrils sprouted from its body, forming into tentacles which attacked them. The beast roared as it attacked. Shoto created a barrage of ice to attack it, seemingly immobilizing it, but it slipped through the cracks and reformed itself and attempted to devour him, which he just got away from. Izuku opened his baton, revealing the rope in it, and swung at it, but it slipped right out. "It's too slippery. We can't contain it," he said as the sludge villain evaded and escaped their attacks. A fist formed in its body which launched out and hit him in the chest, knocking him down. "That's disgusting," Izuku said, barely able to control himself from barfing at the smell of sludge on him. "I'll handle it." "Crucifixion," Aibara shouted, and her hair grew and extended, becoming longer and creating more vines which came at the beast. The sludge villain opened its mouth and spewed forth poisonous fumes which withered and turned the vines into dust, shocking Aibara. The villain fired off more attacks at the 3 as they seemed to have no means to injure or subdue it, as it was too fast and immune to their attacks. The sludge villain then suddenly dove into and went underground, disappearing. "Where is it?" Shoto asked, as it was nowhere in sight. The monstrosity had burrowed underground without a trace. Suddenly the ground beneath Aibara to shake. "Run!" Izuku shouted, realizing what was about to happen, but it was too late. The slewed villain emerged right from underneath her and entangled her. Aibara cried out as she was immobilized by as the sludge wrapped around her body, preventing her from escaping. She was helpless as her quirf was unable to help her as it withered at the touch of the sludge that covered its entire body. "With her as a vessel, I can escape this damn collar and finally be free." The sludge villain planning on stuffing himself inside of her. "Come on, girlie, open wide. It won't hurt that much after a while," he said, trying to force Aibara to open her mouth so he can get inside as she tried to resist it. "Oh no," Izuku said, "let her go." Shoto shouted as he prepared to attack. "I don't think so. Attack me and you risk killing your friend," the sludge villain said as he was using her like a shield. "Can you live knowing that she's dead because of you?" It taunted them. "Coward," Izuku said in disgust. As long as it had Aibara in its clutches, they couldn't attack. Aibara struggled in its clutches, trying to break free, but to no avail. "Shoto, we've got to do something," he said to him. "Your ice won't work, but what about your fire?" "What?" Shoto said, surprised at what he said and had suggested. "Please, look, I don't know what causes you to resent it, but it may be our only hope to save her and defeat it," Izuku pleaded with him. "If we don't do something, she'll die," he told Shoto, who looked on and back at Aibara, who was struggling, but her efforts were starting to dwindle as her body was succumbing. "You know that I know you said if you did, the bastard who you hate would win, but I don't care about that," Izuku snapped at him, shocking him at his tone. "What's the point of having a quirk if you won't use it to save people?" Are you just going to let people die because you refuse to use it? He said to him. If you won't, I'll save her all by myself if I have to, he said to him as he prepared to go. Just when he was about to, Shoto placed his hand on his body. This is only a one-time deal, Midoriya. You understand? He said to Izuku as steam started to emerge from the left side of his body as the ice he had placed on it began to melt. Izuku, realizing what he said, nodded his head in gratitude. Thank you. I have a plan to save her. You may not be able to notice it, but there's a weak spot it seems to have. Yes, that's it. Not much longer now, the sludge villain said as Aibara was about to slip into unconsciousness. Let her go, Shoto's voice shouted, and it lifted his head up and was surprised to see Shoto's left half lit aflame, as his entire half was glowing with fire. What the? I thought you could only do ice, the monster said when Izuku, who had moved into position, attacked, tossing his baton. Izuku's baton hit it directly in the eye, its one weak spot. The villain cried out in pain, weakening its hold on Aibara, giving Shoto his chance as he let loose with a stream of fire. The fire hit Aibara, right exactly where he had aimed at. Her hair. He had fired the blast not at her body but at her long hair where he had fired it, scorching and burning it off, but with the side effect of freeing her. No, the sludge villain shouted, trying to reclaim her, but Shoto created a wall of ice, trapping it completely inside. Shoto pulled Aibara out of the grasp of the sludge villain, taking her to safety. Midoriya. Now, Detroit Smash, Izuku shouted as he used 5% of One for All's power. Using All Might's signature move, his fist smashed into the block of ice, breaking it into multiple pieces. The villain, encased in them, unable to escape and reform itself, was at last defeated. We did it, Izuku said, breathing heavily as they had won against it. He looked on at Shoto, who held a nearly now bald Aibara. Is she okay? She'll be fine. She just needs to rest, he informed her, and Izuku smiled at him and gave him a thumbs up. But before they could relax, the 5 shinobi from before emerged. The villain hit the ground with a thud, slipping into unconsciousness as he had been defeated by the 2 before him. Try to contact them, and hope that it's the right one we knocked out, Fumikage Toyakami said to Hitoshi Shinsho as Dark Shadow went back inside him. Already on it, Hitoshi said as he spoke into an earpiece. They have managed to find and defeat the villain whose electric quirk enabled him to jam communications, thus bringing them back online. The villain had been tougher than the average thug from beforehand, but they had managed to subdue him. Izuku, Momo, Tenya, are you there? He shouted into it, waiting for a response. Can anyone hear me? Who is this? A female voice said. Wait, if you're talking then that means, hey guys, communications are back online. The voice, which belonged to Mina Ashido, said. We managed to defeat the villain who was responsible for it all. Where are you guys? He asked them. We're okay. Most of us stayed together at the entrance when things went haywire. But it appears half the class, including you, got teleported. Mina, Fumikage said, speaking into it. What's the situation? Not good. 13 is heavily damaged and we still haven't seen Mr. Aizawa. Tenya managed to get past that teleporting creep and went to get help, but no one's shown up. Stay there. We'll try and be there as soon as we can. Right. Be careful, both of you, Mina said to them. Aizawa laid on the ground motionless, his head being stepped on by Nama, the massive brute and secret weapon of the League of Villains, having been sent in and had pummeled him senseless. Having more than one quirk, he had overwhelmed Aizawa and inflicted heavy damage upon him. What an utter waste of time. This is the end boss of the game, Shigaraki said, a look of annoyance in his eyes. No all might whatsoever. I guess he's scared to show up, he said, clutching a hand into a fist over not getting the opportunity to kill him. It appears that information we obtained was wrong, Kurogiri said, looking on as Namu had lifted up Aizawa's body by the hair and was using it as a punching bag. Aizawa coughed up blood as he felt his ribs being broken. He couldn't even activate his quirk, let alone try and defend himself. Namu, that's enough playtime. Kill him and be done with it, Shigaraki ordered, and the beast clutched his fist around Aizawa's windpipe and prepared to rip his head right off. An explosion suddenly went off, hitting Namu in the back. What? Shigaraki said, not expecting it. Leave our teacher alone, Kirishima shouted as he rushed forwards, with him Katsuki, who had fired the blast to save Aizawa's life. Take this, Mina shouted, firing acid as the students of Class 1 converged onto the site to defend and save their teacher's life. They all stood together ready to fight the villains. Oh look, Kurogiri, a couple of low-level peons have appeared thinking they can challenge a level 100 boss, Shigaraki said, mocking them. Well, experience points is experience points. I suppose I can leave a trail of bodies as crumbs for All Might should he decide to not be a coward and actually show up. Men, take care of these pests, Kurogiri ordered the remaining thugs as Namu had stopped, still having a hold of Aizawa's body. Izuku and the others looked on as the 5 shinobi stood in front of, blocking their path. They were the ones who were keeping them from advancing and rejoining the class. Shoto could see in the distance the rest of Wano, but the men in front of them had to be dealt with first. You may have defeated a brainless monster, but now you shall deal with me, Scythe said as he pulled out his weapon, glaring at Izuku. You 3 go deal with the others, before that maniac throws a tantrum over us not helping. I'll take care of them myself. I want you to stay and watch me from a distance. He ordered the other 4 who disappeared without a trace. Shoto, take Aibara and leave, Izuku said to him, ordering him to go. What? You're the strongest of the class and the others need your assistance, plus Aibara can't fight in her current state right now. I'll hold this guy off and catch up with you all later. I can deal with this guy, Izuku, Shoto protested. I'm better equipped to fight him. Maybe, but the others need your help more than I do and you'll be more useful. Get to them, Izuku said as he held his weapon in hand. Reluctantly, Shoto went, taking Aibara with him. The ninja let him leave, leaving just the 2 of them. It is a rash fool who sends away his allies, 𝐬𝗓 mocked him. Pros always risk it all on the line. That's the mark of a true hero, Izuku responded as he recalled the words he had been told as they prepared to fight. Suddenly, before it began, the entrance to the USJ was blown off of its hinges, having been forcefully slammed through as someone stepped through it. There is no need to be afraid anymore, my students, the figure said as an outline of a muscular man was shown. His eyes filled with determination to protect them and stop the villains. To some he inspired hope, to others he inspired fear and dread. Why? The person asked as he stepped through, revealing himself fully. Because I am here, All Might proclaimed. Well, look who finally decided to show up, Shigaraki said as he stood beside Kurogiri and Namu. We was waiting for you, All Might, he stated as All Might stepped forward. All Might looked on at the scene before him. He entered through the ruins of what was the entranceway of the USJ. Reaching up to his chest, he ripped off the tie he wore as his heavy footsteps echoed on the ground, his normal grin on his face having been replaced with a scowl of anger. The remaining thugs stood there in shock that All Might was there, fear in their eyes at the prospect of having to actually fight him after all. One of them, more foolhardy than the rest, charged at All Might, preparing to attack as his fist became encased in metal, but All Might showed no concern. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in a flash. To the thugs, he had simply vanished. He then reappeared and before any of them could react, delivered knockout blows to each one of them, rendering them unconscious with 0 effort on his part. After defeating the last thug, he turned his gaze upon the 3 remaining villains. I'm only going to say this once. Get out of here and don't come back, All Might said as he made his way down. He looked on at the students, many who felt relief now that he was here to save them. But he noticed that there was someone not amongst them. He thought to himself, concern over what had happened. He thought, looking around, but did not see them amongst the rest of the students. Izuku ducked under the swung weapon and threw a kick at a side angle at his opponent, who dodged it. The ninja he was facing threw a kunai at him, which grazed past his shoulder, leaving a small cut in the fabric of his uniform. Izuku took a stance, waiting for his opponent to come to him. 𝐬𝗓 revealed the chain attached to his weapon and began to twirl it overhead. He spun it once, twice, 3 times before throwing it at Izuku, who dodged out of the way. 𝐬𝗓 retracted the weapon before spinning and throwing it once more at him, a spinning blade of death. Knowing that he was waiting for him to make a mistake, Izuku listened closely to each swish it made, detecting where the weapon was at and when it was going to come. 𝐬𝗓 threw the weapon at him like a tomahawk, coming directly at his head. Izuku whipped out his baton and entangled and caught the chain with it, surprising 𝐬𝗓 as he stopped the attack. Their weapons crossed with one another, leaving them in a deadlock. 𝐬𝗓 pulled on the chain, trying to untangle it and retrieve his weapon, but found Izuku. 𝐬𝗓, being pragmatic, threw a dirt clod directly at his face to stun him. It hit Izuku in the face. Thinking him blinded, he went to attack him and swung to cut off his head. Thankfully, one advantage to being blind was that Izuku didn't have to worry about tactics such as that, as he reached out and caught 𝐬𝗓 in the stomach with a punch, knocking the wind out of him from the force of it. 𝐬𝗓 tripped up, not expecting him to counter that. Izuku got a handful of dirt and returned the favor, throwing it at him directly in the face. 𝐬𝗓 didn't expect it and staggered backwards, running his hand across his eyes, trying to get it out of them. Izuku then charged at him and hit him with the head of his baton across the ribs. You fight well, 𝐬𝗓 said before reaching up to the head of his weapon and removed it. But let's see how you handle this, he said as he dropped the blade before producing a second one and strapped it onto the handle of his weapon. Izuku's nose picked up a scent coming from the weapon, mixing it with the metal as he detected that it was covered in a substance. Poison, he noted, as the blade was covered in venom. One cut is all I'll need, the ninja boasted as he gripped the handle of his weapon. Finally, after we kill you, we will expose to the world for what you and other so-called heroes really are, Shigaraki said, going into a standard villain monologue, but was not paid attention to. Save it, villains. I've heard your rants and raves enough times, All Might said as he stood forward. If you really think you can kill me, then give it your best shot. Namu, attack, Shigaraki ordered, and the brain-exposed monstrosity attacked. All Might readied himself and braced himself. Namu collided against him, sending him back a few feet, but he held his ground. It's going to take more than that, All Might stated before countering with a headbutt directly to Namu's exposed brain. He then followed it up with an uppercut to the jawline, knocking a few teeth out. Namu responded by snapping its jaws at him, and All Might caught its beak-like mouth, preventing him from biting his head off. I don't know about you, but this isn't The Walking Dead, All Might said before kicking it in the chest, backing it up. All Might then channeled one for all into his fist. Detroit Smash. All Might shouted and his fist slammed into 𝗏𝗲, knocking the beast backwards. 𝗏𝗲 smashed and crashed through the trees, seemingly buried beneath them. There, that takes of that, All Might said, believing it was over when he suddenly detected something. Whipping around, he turned and caught an arrow that was fired at him with his middle and index fingers. Now what? In the trees, a group of 𝗧𝗵𝗶s clad in red suddenly leapt out, each firing arrows. Now we got ninjas, All Might said as he caught each one that was fired at him. The mysterious men said nothing as they drew out their weapons. All right then, bring it, All Might stated. Suddenly, to his shock, a portal appeared behind him and 𝗏𝗲 emerged from it and grabbed him from behind in a bear hug, catching him off guard. Laughing from afar, Kurogiri was heard. You truly believe that 𝗏𝗲 was done? He's just getting started, he said as he had teleported the experiment over to All Might, as it showed no signs of damage. And even your fabled Detroit Smash did little to slow him down. You might say due to his quirk it only made him stronger. All Might grunted and blood escaped from his mouth as 𝗏𝗲 had him in a vise, attempting to crush him like a grape. The beast opened its maw wide and beat down on his shoulder, chomping into the flesh. That's it, 𝗏𝗲. Break his ribs and shatter his spine like tissue paper, Shigaraki said. But don't kill him, that pleasure is all mine, he said as he readied his hand, preparing to activate his quirk, which only required a mere touch. The mindless beast obeyed, applying more pressure to All Might. And don't any of you brats think about interfering or I'll see to it you die. All Might struggled against the grip, but 𝗏𝗲 held steady. Just when it looked like his back was about to break, 𝗏𝗲's arm became covered and encased in ice. Seeing his chance, All Might tightened his body and flexed with all his power, and 𝗏𝗲's frozen arm shattered and broke off from the rest of its body. New Hampshire Smash, he shouted and launched himself right at 𝗏𝗲. His blow hit 𝗏𝗲 and sent it flying away, crashing through into trees, snapping them like toothpicks and being buried underneath them. Well, that was a close one, All Might said. Either my spine would have been snapped or I would have puked up today's breakfast, he said as he stretched and flexed. Good thing I was in time to help, a voice said, and Shoto Todoroki appeared, responsible for saving his life just now. Let's kill the rest of these bastards now, Katsuki said as he was done watching on from the sidelines. We can kill these jackasses ourselves. Stand back, young Bakugo. This isn't your weekly anime series, this is the real thing, All Might said, and his smile had noticeably faded as a look of alarm was on his face. Shigaraki sneered behind the palm covering his face and turned to the ninjas. Don't just stand there, do something, he ordered them, demanding that they attack. The ninjas appeared to disappear as though retreating. TCH, cowards, Katsuki said with a sneer, thinking that they weren't worth his time. Suddenly the ninjas reappeared, darting to and fro around the place faster than the eye could follow. Whoa, Kirishima shouted as in the nick of time he hardened his skin to avoid being impaled by a claw weapon one of them carried. The group of red-clad ninjas darted across the USJ bastards. Stand and fight, Katsuki shouted, unleashing explosions after explosions from his gauntlets at them in fury at their tactics. This will stop them, Shoto said, and covered part of the area in ice with his quirk so they wouldn't be able to run. However, the ninjas, to his surprise, ran and skated across the ice with no difficulty, having been trained to such elements. They then produced blowguns and exhaling blew out darts at them. Heads up, Kirishima said, seeing them come at them. Rarg, you assholes think some puny ass weapons will stop me, Katsuki said, and unleashed powerful explosions intending on blowing them up. One hit him in the shoulder, but he paid no attention to it, so intent on killing them. More darts continued to hit him and he let out with explosives from his gauntlets. Hey easy man, Kirishima shouted as he was almost hit but was ignored. Bakugo was breathing hard, and sweat was beating down his brow as though he was in a sauna. He reached up and pulled a dart out of his back, but that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. All Might, having managed to dodge them, then realized it and the purpose of them. The darts were tipped with a rare poison, that which would sap and drain the muscles of whoever they came into contact with. Until Todoroki and Kirishima, he had no means of protecting himself from them. Young Bakugo, it's time you take your leave, All Might said, gripping him by the shoulder. What the hell? Katsuki said, his voice slurring, with his arms dropping by his side and unable to hold them up any longer. You'll thank me later, All Might said, and before he could protest tossed him towards the entranceway where he would be found by the others. My skin's hard as a rock, Kirishima boasted as the darts bounced harmlessly off of him. None of your attacks will work on Gak. He was cut when a rope suddenly lassoed around his neck and he was pulled up and was dangling from a tree. The red-haired boy choked and coughed, trying to breathe as he was being hanged, as a ninja in hiding had waited until ambushing him. Unhand him, villain, All Might proclaimed, preparing to attack and rescue him, but 𝗏𝗲 appeared before him, and to his shock a skeletal arm burst out of its socket, only to be covered up by muscle and tissue before flesh formed over it as it regrew an arm. What? Regeneration? He shouted in shock. Did you really think we did not plan for this? 𝗏𝗲 not only has shock absorption but the regenerative quirk as well, Shigaraki taunted him. 𝗫𝗼 roared and lunged at All Might, forcing him back and unable to come to Kirishima's aid. Kirishima was starting to lose oxygen as his eyes were beginning to roll up to the back of his head when the ninja holding the rope suddenly got hit from behind by a piece of a tree limb, making him drop the rope, enabling Kirishima to drop down. Getting the chance to breathe, he reached and undid the noose, freeing himself. "Phew, thank goodness for invincibility, right?" a voice said. "Tutorial," he weakly said as the invisible girl had shed her gloves and shoes, rendering herself fully naked. "Where are you?" he said, reaching out to find her only to get slapped across the face. "Hey, keep your hands to yourself, you pervert," she exclaimed as he had nearly groped her chest. "Annoying peons. Kurogiri, now," Shigaraki shouted, and a portal appeared and he leapt through it and appeared in front of Kirishima and Toru. "One touch is all it'll take," he said, lunging with his hand stretched out, activating his quirk. To his surprise, he was suddenly in midair, unable to move. "What?" he proclaimed. He was suddenly kicked in the face as a leaping 𝗧𝗪𝗪 had dived and kicked him, knocking him away. "Thank goodness we made it in time, Ribbit," 𝗧𝗪 said as Shigaraki had been stopped from killing them just now. In the distance, Ochako was seen having used her gravity quirk to lift him and enabling 𝗧𝗪 to get the drop on him. Having finally managed to make it to there from the water area and dropping the still short 𝗬𝗪𝗪 Kaminari off, Shigaraki, his eyes filled with more psychotic rage than usual, snarled in fury as he pulled himself up. "I think we should run," 𝗧𝗪 said, feeling the killing intent coming from him. She looked around but didn't see Izuku anywhere, but knew she couldn't only worry about him now with the danger they were in. "All right," Ochako said, realizing that this was not the time to fight. "Shigaraki, let them leave. It won't do you any good to chase them," Kurogiri said, and reluctantly the villain agreed. Izuku continued his battle with Scythe whilst that was taking place, dodging and evading his poison-tipped weapon. Scythe had the high ground as he ran across the mountain area, darting to and fro. Izuku knew that it was pointless to fight this foe if he tried to fight him at his own game, and so instead he reached to his baton and revealed the hidden rope in it. Scythe dove and leapt off the mountain from above. "Now," Izuku shouted and threw the rope at him, looking to entangle and ensnare him. However, he was unaware of Scythe spying on him from his earlier battles and knew about the rope that he had and was ready for it. Scythe cut through the rope, surprising Izuku that he did, and reached behind him and pulled out a knife from his belt and tossed it. The flying knife hit him in the knee, piercing through the fabric and into the flesh. Izuku gasped and inhaled, feeling the searing and burning pain go throughout his leg. Scythe took that opportunity to charge and slash at him. The blade cut through Izuku's outfit and the tip of the poison-coated blade hit his flesh. Izuku felt weak as he started to sweat heavily. His heartbeat was starting to increase rapidly as the poison was affecting his body now. He lost hold and dropped his baton as he staggered as he was disoriented. Scythe struck him across the face as he was unable to defend himself, now knocking him to the floor. He tried to pull himself up but got hit again. "It's over, you're dead now," Scythe taunted him. "With that poison in your veins, it's only a matter of time before you die," he said to him. Izuku pulled himself up to his knees but got kicked in the face by him. He coughed and wheezed up blood. He tried to get up but was again mockingly kicked by the ninja, who taunted him, adding insult to injury. He could have just slit his throat, but he wanted to see him suffer first. All Might stood before the three villains, a grave look on his face. This was not a favorable situation for him. His time was running out, and the reason he had come was to buy time so that UA could send backup, but so far none were here, leaving it only him and the rookies. He still had no idea where Midoriya was. For all he knew, he could be dead. "Naomu, Kurogiri, kill him. I'll deal with the brats if they interfere again," Shigaraki ordered before turning to look at the ninjas. "You lot aren't needed anymore. Go on and get the hell out of here," he said, dismissing them. All Might thought to himself, bringing a hand up and clutching it into a fist. He proclaimed as he stood up straight and narrow. He charged at Naomu and the beast charged at him. The two collided, the irresistible force versus the immovable object. They began swinging at each other, matching each other blow for blow. The force of them colliding knocked back all the spectators. "Weren't you listening? One of his quirks is shock absorption," Shigaraki proclaimed. "Yeah. What about it?" All Might stated, unfazed by it as he continued raining blows. "No. I can't get near him," Kurogiri shouted as the force of the blows kept him from intervening. "He said that your quirk was shock absorption, not nullification," All Might proclaimed as he recognized the experiment's one weakness. "That means there's a limit to what you can take." Naomu hit him in the stomach near his kidneys, his one weak spot, and even though All Might coughed up blood, he pressed on the attack, ignoring the damage and pain. "So, you were made to fight me, big guy," All Might stated as he and Naomu threw punches at one another at rapid speed, too fast to see. "If you can really withstand me fighting at 100% of my power, then I'll have to go beyond that and force you to surrender," he said as he went past his limits and created a hard gust of wind from his blows alone. The two continued on, and suddenly one of them began to gain the upper hand and drove the other backwards. Pressing on the #1 hero in the world kept on the attack, driving Naomu back with each blow. Looking on, Shigaraki's eyes widened in shock at what he was seeing. As All Might turned the tide against Namu, Izuku gripped his palms against the ground and pulled himself up off the ground. Despite what he had been through, he was still fighting. He thought to himself, "Die. Why won't you die?" 𝐬𝐴𝐵 shouted in shock that he was still getting up. He should be dead with all the hits he had taken and the poison he had taken. He swung again, looking to cleave right into his skull. To his shock, Izuku caught his hand. "Because heroes don't give up," Izuku proclaimed as he forced himself up as he activated One for All. The power emerged from within his body. He was going beyond his limits of what he could take beforehand as he went his limits that he had placed upon him beforehand. Grabbing him by the wrist, he threw the ninja overhead. The ninja recovered in midair and lunged at him, which Midoriya dodged. He caught him with a kick right under the chin, snapping his head up, giving him whiplash, disorienting him. "If your weapon is covered in poison, then that means that all I have to do is not get hit by it then. If you're relying only solely on it, then that means that you're helpless without it," Izuku proclaimed as he attacked, seemingly no longer affected by it. "You know the thing about putting poison on a weapon? It only works once, and the time period for it to be effective and last on there is short, meaning that you've ruined your weapon by using it, as well as I'm more likely to have it bleed out of me than die from it," Izuku said as he attacked. His blows hit the ninja as he dodged and counterattacked. Izuku's assault wasn't anything that 𝐬𝐵 was prepared to face, as he was being overwhelmed by him, as nothing he did seemed to work on at him. A blow to his knee, to his elbow joints, and then to his jaw from Izuku's baton staggered him as he was knocked back. Bringing his chain up, he then threw it, looking to entangle him as it came right at him, only for Izuku to catch the chain with one hand. At the same time, All Might's battle with Namu had taken to the air, and he had grasped the beast by the arm. A real hero will always find a way for justice to be served, All Might shouted as he threw Namu into the ground. A deep impact was shown as the beast plummeted and burrowed deep into the ground. All Might slammed down onto the ground, creating an upheaval, sending Namu back up. Grasping the chain, Midoriya swung and used 𝐬𝐵's momentum against him, swinging him around and around overhead. Letting out a cry of power, he threw 𝐬𝐵 the villain, smashing against the side of the mountain. Appearing with his hood off, exposing his face, 𝐬𝐵 saw Midoriya leaping at him and threw his weapon at his head. Midoriya retaliated by swinging his first directly at the weapon. His fist shattered the weapon on contact, breaking and smashing it to pieces, destroying the blade. 𝐬𝐵's eyes widened in shock and disbelief at what he saw happened as he stepped backwards in fear, holding the broken end of his weapon. "Now for a lesson," All Might proclaimed as he and Izuku were shown taking the same stance as they channeled One for All. "You may have heard these words before, but I'll show you what they really mean," he stated as both him and Izuku reared their fist back. "Go beyond, plus ultra." His fist slammed into Namu's chest, putting all of his power into it. The beast was sent flying over the horizon as it smashed through the rooftop of the USJ and was seen flying away, dispersing through the clouds as All Might had sent it miles away, nothing more than a blot in the sky before disappearing. Izuku's fist collided and slammed into 𝐬𝐵, sending him crashing into the mountain. The force of it sent the ninja straight through the mountain, going all the way, emerging out through the other side, creating an avalanche and rock slide from the force of it as tremors erupted. The effects of the punch both had dished out could be felt all around the entire area and even outside. "What's happening?" Toyotomi shouted in alarm as he and Shincho looked on, having finally escaped their zone, only for the entire area to rumble. "Everything is shaking." Momoyae Urazu knocked out a villain in the fire zone when she too detected what had just happened. "Was that a bomb that went off?" she stated, as that was equal to the force of several explosions just now. The students of Class 1 had witnessed the scene, seeing Namu disappear over the horizon. "Either I'm going nuts or that was a villain who got knocked through the roof and over the horizon just now," Rikido proclaimed as he and Koji were holding up 13 while Mizo carried Aizawa. "Guys, I think we've won. All Might did it." Mina exclaimed, "The Lord has answered our prayers," Ibara stated, clasping her hands together as Mina cheered, hopping up and down, clutching Jiru's hands, who didn't share her enthusiasm on the outside. With the villain's secret weapon defeated, all that remained now was the leaders. "I really have gotten weaker," All Might stated, looking on at the spot where Namu had flown out of. "In my heyday it would have only taken 5 punches to win, but today I had to use 300 mighty blows," he stated with a smile. "Give up, villains, you have been bested," All Might proclaimed as he had won. "There's no need to fight any longer," he informed them. "Surrender." Shigaraki clenched and unclenched his hands into fists. "And back." "He cheated," he hissed behind the hand covering his face. All Might ignored him and looked on. He shouted in his thoughts as he just now witnessed the mountain area, or what remained of it. If he could do that now, just imagine what he could do when he fully mastered One for All along with his enhanced senses. He managed to level part of a mountain already with a single blow. "Damn, Midoriya, you're even cooler than I had thought," All Might said in shock and disbelief that his pupil had done it. Izuku fell to his knees, clutching his right arm, which was severely bruised, and could feel the bones in it having been broken. That much force he had used using One for All had damaged his arm as it hung limply at his side. He didn't want to use so much, but it was the only way he could defeat the guy. He gritted his teeth through the pain he was undergoing as he forced himself to stand up and walk. "If an enemy attacks, I'm done for," he said weakly as he trudged forward, ignoring the pain that he was in. The poison was still in his system, but not as bad. Using one for all seemed to flush it out of his body. Got to find the others. All Might stood before the villain. "Come on, where's my backup? They should have been here by now," he thought, concern in his mind as his body was starting to revert back to the shriveled up form. He could barely hold it on for a few more seconds. "Fear not, Shigaraki," Kurogiri said as he stepped forward. "Naomu may have failed in his task, but look, many in our army have started to recover," he said as the thugs were starting to get back to their feet. "We're not out of this yet," he told him. "It appears that you're right," Shigaraki stated, looking on. "Perhaps we may kill All Might after all," he said, and confidence grew back in his eyes. No, come on, not now," All Might said to himself. If he reverted now, not only would it be let out the truth of himself, but he would be no match even for the weakest thug. Izuku continued on, almost nearing the exit of the area when suddenly he detected a presence. The 4 other ninjas appeared and surrounded him, cutting off any path of escape from them. Izuku gripped his baton stick in his hand as he forced himself to stand upright as he knew what they were going to do. "Come on, who's first?" he said, challenging them. He wasn't going to die without a fight. "I'll kill you myself," Shigaraki shouted, preparing to charge at All Might suddenly. The ninjas then vanished, which surprised Izuku as they had disappeared without engaging him. Bang! A gun went off and Shigaraki clutched his hand in pain. The leader of the League of Villains held onto his hand, stepping backwards as he cursed in fury. A smoking gun was shown as a group of heroes were shown at the footsteps, the cavalry having arrived to even the odds. "D-damn," Shigaraki shouted in fury at what he saw. "Shigaraki, we must escape," Kurogiri advised, and even though he didn't want to, the villain saw that they had no choice. "This isn't over," he promised as he and Kurogiri retreated through a portal. "That's right, run away with your tail in between your legs," All Might stated as the other heroes consisting of Present Mike, Midnight, and others took care of the villains with ease. Seeing that chance with no one paying attention, he left, both to find Midoriya and to ensure that no one would see him in his shriveled up state as he reverted back to it. Making it to the mountain sector entrance, he soon saw him. "Young Midoriya," he called out as he saw him. The young hero lifted his head up, recognizing his voice. "Are you okay?" he asked as he hurried over to him. "All Might," Izuku said as he walked forward, clutching his right arm. Reaching with his other arm, he took off his mask so All Might could see his face. "The others have gathered at the entrance and have been accounted for. I see you broke your arm again using one for all," All Might said to him. "Recovery girl will have you patched up in no time, as well as those other wounds you got. I had to use it twice. There's a villain in blocks of ice back there we managed to contain," he said, motioning to behind him, and All Might nodded his head. "I see, and I can guess it was you who was responsible for redecording the mountain section as well," he said with a hint of a smirk. "Yeah, I had no choice but to go up past my current limits of one for all." "You did good, kid, just rest now," All Might said. "Everything's going to be okay. I don't suppose you could carry me back there," Izuku said with a smile before collapsing onto All Might's chest, his body finally giving out after all he'd been through today. "You really are something, kid," All Might said as he reverted to his shriveled form and reaching up tenderly stroked his head. "I knew I was right to pass it down to you after all," he said with a smile, knowing that this torchbearer would lead the way to the next generation of heroes. Scythe was shown on the ground, his body battered and broken with his wrecked weapon beside him. He couldn't move a muscle as his spine had been broken from the force and blow that he had taken from Midoriya's punch, having been plowed and knocked through the mountain by the force of it. "You have failed, Scythe." A voice was heard and he moved his eyes, the only part of his body that he could move, as he looked as a person had appeared looking down at him. "You failed in your task, and not only that, was defeated by a boy," Nabu Yoshioka said to him. Scythe tried to speak up but could not form any words off of your previous records and servitude to us. "I was prepared to recommend you to be given the gift that only a select few are worthy of receiving, but now I see that I was wrong in deciding that you was worthy of such an honor," Nabu said, disdain on his face. "Not only did you lose in battle, but you also lost the sludge weapon that which we provided you with. Such failure and ineptitude is not accepted within the hand." His sword whipped out and stabbed deep into Scythe's neck, impaling him deeply and sticking out through the other side. Blood sprouted out of the wound as Scythe let out a gurgled cry before dying, his eyes wide open as he laid in a pool of blood which spilled around him. Nabu sheathed his sword and turned around and walked away from the sight. Around him, the other 4 ninjas of the hand appeared as they joined him and departed. The villains from the incident were rounded up and arrested, and all of Class 1 were safe. Some had taken hits, but nothing threatening or regarded serious medical care other than Aizawa, who was shown being put on a stretcher that Momo had created with her quirk, as well as 13. Izuku sat on the seat of the bus they were on, his head leaned back, paying no attention to the chatter of his classmates as the blind hero in training slowly dozed off after all he had been through today. Beside him, her head leaning against his own, was Tsuyu. Soft breaths escaped her as her own eyes were shut as she rested beside him. Images of what would be known as the USJ incident were shown, up to the final blow in battle. The fight was shown rewinding backwards before playing again and doing so once more, showing every highlight and move and blow that had been dealt. A figure, his face obscured by the shadows, was shown seated on a chair. By his side, a white 𝗂𝐵𝗄𝗄 helmet was shown on the arm of the chair. He watched on his eyes, analyzing the fight, deciphering the movements and how each move was precise and with purpose. He held a formidable position in the organization, one of the 5 fingers and the one who ruled this branch of the organization. Clearly the League of Villains had vastly underestimated their foe's strength. Their pathetic performance this day made him rethink about aligning with them. The fight was rewound again as the man looked on as the screen paused and zoomed in on both Aizawa and Izuku. The figure stared on at the scenes showing both student and hero. The way they fought, the style of their movements and fighting techniques which they had utilized them in battle with dispatching the villains. It reminded him of something that he remembered. Something from the past. The ticking of a clock was the only sound in the room. The clock hanging on the wall going as the big hand and little hand were on separate places. Seated there, the class of 20 did their best to try and stay alert. Some looked at their phones, some did last-minute checking homework, and some were dozing off. So are we going to do anything here today or not? Kirishima finally said out loud, speaking the thoughts of everyone here. I mean, Mr. Aizawa hasn't shown up and the class period's almost over. He stated. It was the weekend after the USJ incident, and things were relatively returning to normal for the lot of them. If they gave us a substitute or classes had been cancelled, they would have told us. He continued to talk. Well, who's to say that Aizawa is even coming back ever? Denki said, speaking up. I mean, it wasn't like he only got a bloody nose back there. Kaminari, that's harsh. Ibara scolded him, her hair having grown back to its natural length. Come on, did you not see what he looked like after that big brain guy was done with him? He probably had to have reconstructive surgery or something like that. Denki said to them. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him for the rest of the school year. That's harsh to say, Kaminari. Mizo, the multi-armed trainee, said to him. Though I will admit it'll probably be a while before he's cleared and able to return even with recovery girl's healing powers, he mentioned. Just as he finished speaking, the class door opened and in stepped a man in black with shaggy hair covered up in wrappings. Morning class. Mr. Aizawa, what are you doing here? The class exclaimed in disbelief at who they saw standing there. I'm here to teach. What do you think I'm doing here? He said dryly behind his bandages as he stepped to the front of the room to his desk. Mr. Aizawa, you seem to be feeling better now. That's good, I guess, Tsuyu said, looking on at him. The old lady went overboard on the bandages and wrappings when she treated me. The grumpy teacher mumbled as he stepped forward, looking like a mummy with all the wrappings he had on. Now then, as you know, in 2 weeks the sports festival begins, he said, and excited looks appeared on the faces of the classmates. This is the biggest event of the year and a lot of people will be watching it, both live and on TV from Japan and all over. He said to them as it was even bigger than the Olympics. Lots of people will be coming and all around to see it, and interns will be taking place soon, so this is a chance for you all to impress pros who might want you as interns during it. Chatter broke out between the students from it, and Aizawa's eyes beneath his wrappings flashed, ordering them to shut up as he wasn't done speaking. As I was saying, for the next 2 weeks, you are all going to be training. You won't have classes here starting tomorrow, as you'll be spending your time training for it, or at least I hope you will, instead of slacking off and playing video games. Now go on, get out of here, he said, and went into his sleeping bag in the room and was soon asleep. The students went to leave, the girls ignoring Kaminari's offer to be a training partner. Katsuki reached the door first and opened it. What the hell? Get out of my way, you generic assholes, he exclaimed at what he was seeing. Now what? The rest of class 1 said in unison, having gotten used to it. To their surprise, it was not what they were expecting. Standing there in the hallway was students from every class and course, it seemed like, standing there in front of the door looking on at them. Holy crap, Kirishima shouted as it seemed that the entire school had lined up outside their classroom. Hey, what's the big idea? Let us through, will ya? Gyro grumbled as hundreds of eyes were on them. At the front and center of the group of onlookers was a boy with short blonde hair. He seemed to be the ringleader of the entire assembly. If there was a word that would describe him, it would be smug. Other fitting words would also be prick, cocky, and jackass. So this is class 1, I must say I was expecting more than what I see, he told them, speaking in an arrogant tone. With him was other students, including a boy who looked like Kirishima but had silver hair, a girl with light orange hair, and a black-haired boy with odd-looking elbows, as well other students. Hey, you're very rude, Mina protested at his tone of voice. We're from class 1B, also enrolled in the hero course. And Monomanito, the arrogant student, said to them. Everyone's talking about you guys and what happened at the USJ. TCH, so what about it? Want an autograph? Katsuki sneered at him, and Monoma's smirk increased. Just to tell you that if class 1B had been there instead, there would have been no need for the pros to have gotten involved against the villains, he said to them. At that, several of Class 1 narrowed their eyes at his arrogance. "Oh yeah, well, how's about we have a go right now?" Kirishima said, challenging them. "You're on," the silver-haired student said, stepping forward, the two growling at one another like animals, each baring their teeth and in the exact same pose. 𝗵𝗃𝗄, a boy who's blind, a hothead, a girl who's invisible, and someone who can freeze himself to death. So much for the fabled Class 1 we all heard so much about. "That's enough, Monoma, Tetsu," the orange-haired girl said to them, breaking it up. "Sorry, we didn't mean to offend, we just wanted to see you guys," she said in a polite tone, trying to make up for their actions. "There is no need for us to be at each other's throats," Tenya said, speaking up. "The sports festival promotes goodwill and harmony to show the next generation of heroes. Believe that if you want to," Monoma said arrogantly as he looked down at them. "But after the sports festival ends, don't be surprised if some of you wind up being demoted to the general department after we embarrass you during it. That's a fate worse than death in my eyes," he taunted them. "Is being a part of the general department really that bad?" A female voice suddenly spoke up from the back, catching everyone's attention. The crowds parted as a female student was seen. She had porcelain skin and had long snow blue hair down past her shoulders to her back. "From what I have heard, students are more likely to be promoted from the general department to the hero course." "Who the hell are you, you worthless backup dancer?" Katsuki snarled, demanding to know. The mysterious girl merely smiled at him. "My name is Yuki, a recent transfer student from Hokkaido who's enrolled in the general department," the girl said to them, introducing herself. "Whoa, a new chick," Denki said and slicked his hair back, looking to impress. Monoma looked on at her, a look of contempt on his face. "I don't know why you've bothered coming up here, or why that even exists. Someone in the general department is as useful in being a hero as." Before he could finish that sentence, Yuki reached forward and placed two of her fingers against his lips. To everyone's surprise, his lips and mouth was frozen shut as it was encased in ice, sealing it. Yuki, her quirk, a touch of ice. By merely making contact with an object or human being with her fingers, she can spread ice across them. "Don't you know it's rude to speak ill to a lady?" the girl said as Monoma staggered backwards, trying to free his mouth from the ice that had encrusted around it. "As I said, the general department is not all what everyone makes it out to be. It is unwise to ignore them lest you be replaced by those such as myself if you're not careful," she said, a calm smile on her face as Izuku had enlarged her hand and whacked Monoma on the back to knock the ice off his lips. He stammered in fury, trying to think of a threat. "𝗵𝗃𝗄, stay the hell out of my way, all of you, or you're dead," Katsuki said, and marched past them, barking at the rest to let him pass. Class 1B also departed as well. All the others did except for Yuki. She went to leave but stopped when she passed by someone and turned to face him. "Izuku Midoriya, are you not?" she said to the green-haired boy who had been quiet the entire time. "In my old school before I transferred to UA, I was hearing much about your exploits. They say you're the ace of your class," Yuki said with a smile. "I am also a palm reader. I dabble in it. I can see the past and what may be your future as well. Allow me to demonstrate," she said, and suddenly, without permission, took his hand with her hand, which was cold to the touch. Izuku stammered at the invasion of personal space. Yuki took his hand and suddenly ran her fingers over his palm for several moments. "I see. The loss of one has led you to gain another, which is far more powerful and has been passed down through to you by a lock of hair. And yet it can kill you if you aren't careful. Already bones have been broken numerous times from using it," she said as she read it. Izuku said, as it seemed she knew what his quirk was and how he obtained it, "and yet, a path lies before you." The girl analyzed. "I see a noble being with the shape of a demon who strikes fear into others but possesses no fear himself, standing before a hand stretching out over the land and engulfing all before it in shadow. Most intriguing. Whoa, that's spooky. Do me," Kirishima proclaimed and stepped forward, holding out his hand. However, Yuki ignored him and she departed. Izuku thought to himself. It was as if she knew that All Might had passed down his quirk to him. And what did she mean by the second thing she had said? "Creeps me in dark shadow out," Toyakami said as the snow girl had something off about the way she talked and moved. A voice suddenly broke out over the school intercom. "Izuku Midoriya, report to Principal Nezu's office at once, please," the voice announced, which surprised Izuku that he had been announced. Without a word, he went to see why he had been called to go there. "So war has been declared on us," Hitoshi said as the remaining one of students looked on at what had just happened. The rest turned to look at him. "Think about it," Hitoshi said to them. "We're the only ones with actual experience fighting villains given what happened recently. The other day I was accosted by the media who wanted answers about what happened there, and I'm sure you all were as well," he said, and many nodded in response. "The spotlight's on us and the rest in UA are bitter about it. They're jealous of us and think we're all overshadowing them, and so they've declared war on us in order to show that we're not better than them." "But why?" Mina asked. "Fame and fortune," Momo spoke up. "Sadly, a good chunk of heroes today such as Mount Lady are in the hero business only for attention. It's not uncommon for one to try and upstage the other during a robbery or a fire," she explained to the rest. "Well, there's nothing really wrong with wanting to make money as a hero, is there? Ochako said, shifting leg as she looked down as she thought about her parents and the financial situation they was in. I mean, what if being a pro hero was the best and quickest way for you to make money so you can pay bills and stuff like that? She asked in a nervous tone. Of course not. There's nothing wrong with that. Tenya comforted her. If you are using the money for selfless reasons, it's an admirable cause, he said, and that cheered her up. Well, I suppose I'll see you all in 2 weeks. We all got some heavy training to do, Momo said, and the class went their separate ways. Izuku sat in Principal Nezu's office, trying his best not to fidget or appear nervous. He had not been expected to be called in by the principal of UA. He wondered what was going on and if he had done something. A door opened and in stepped Nezu clad in his suit, who hopped over to his chair. Good day, Izuku. I hope you are well. Yes, sir. Would you care for some refreshments? I can bring in some fresh lemonade or milk if you liked. No thank you, sir, Izuku replied to him, and the mouse man was amused. Izuku, you're acting like you are about to face the firing squad. Try showing some emotions and quit being so formal. He lightly chastised him. Principal Nezu, why did you want to see me? Izuku asked as he sat in a chair across from the mouse man, who was seated at the desk. I want to check up on you and what all you and your classmates went through, the principal said. It was quite a harrowing experience, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Thankfully, we got out of there and no one got seriously hurt. I trust you know that we have therapists who are more than willing to talk with you about the event and cause you need to. Nezu asked, as physically they might be fine, but the mental scars could be much worse. No, that is not needed. I'm fine, Izuku replied to him. He had a feeling based off the heartbeat of the rodent man that he could detect that there was something serious he wanted to discuss. I suppose I might as well tell you just why I asked you to visit me. During the incident at USJ, you fought against a villain, correct? Yes, sir. The person who you fought was identified and went by the villain name of 𝐬𝗓 due to the usage of the weapon he carried. Oddly, though, he did not seem to have a quirk. He was a wanted criminal and lent his services out as an assassin for hire. He was very lucky to have survived, Principal Nezu said to him, and Izuku nodded. He was quirkless. Izuku, there's something very important you should know. Quirkless does not translate as helpless, Nezu replied in a stern tone of voice. He was responsible for the deaths of many people and individuals. A person armed with only a knife is just as dangerous as a man who can shoot lightning from their eyes, Nezu said to him. Yes, sir. We found him a distance away from your battle with him. Quite an impressive blow you did, I'll admit, to defeat him, he said as All Might had explained to him what happened. What was you able to find out about from him? Did the League of Villains hire him? Izuku asked, speaking up, and Nezu was quiet for several seconds. What I'm about to tell you next, Midoriya, is going to be startling, so bear with me, Nezu advised him. When we found his body, he was dead. The news hit Izuku like a truck just now. The person who he had fought was dead. He then recalled the fight. He had plowed him through the mountain when he had punched him, knocking him all the way through it and out the other side. He was responsible for it. Sure, the man was a villain, but he was the one who had fought him, and that meant that he had. Izuku felt sick. Sweat began to pour down his brow as all the contents in his stomach was rushing upwards as he became nauseous and placed a hand over his mouth. Midoriya, hold on, Nezu said in alarm, seeing what was happening. Before you throw up all over my room, listen. The person died of a stabbing wound in the neck, he quickly informed him. Done by a blade, and what would I've been told, you don't have a sword or anything that can cause cutting or stabbing wounds. From what we learned when his body was examined, he had a broken spine and ribs due to your blow, but it wasn't fatal. He didn't die because of you, so please don't think you're responsible for it. Someone else did the deed, he slowly told him, and Izuku seemed to be a bit relieved but still felt nauseous. Whilst the late 𝐳𝗓 is dead, he appeared to be a part of a second group, one who attacked together and with precision. Their attacks coordinated, unlike most of the rabble you and the others fought, Nezu said, and Izuku had a brief flashback, remembering how the 5 that had attacked him, Todoroki and Shizaki, moved with precision as a unit. Sadly, the other thugs and villains were mostly hired goons, and no one had any real information that they could give us about what the League of Villains is up to. I was told that there was some, though, who seemed to have their own agenda and seemed unaffiliated with them, Nezu said to him. Details are scarce, but what we know is that the leader, this Shigaraki, lets his emotions guide him and is prone to psychotic acts of violence. His quirk, decay, makes him a dangerous foe, as one of Aizawa's injuries came from him. Yes, sir, Izuku said, as he hadn't been there when Aizawa had fought them. For now, I expect you'll be training for the next 2 weeks for the sports festival. Just remember that if you ever want to talk or you feel that you need help, my door is always open, Nezu said, and Izuku nodded and left the building. While that was going on, the girls of Class 1 were seen at the cafe, which would be the last time they could do something like this before they began their training starting tomorrow. They stayed there for a while, the group eventually thinning out as they left one by one. Tsuyu went to leave and go home when she was suddenly grabbed by the shoulder and forced back into the seat. You stay, Mina said as she had stopped Tsuyu from leaving. Huh, Tsuyu said in confusion. We got things to talk about, the dark-eyed trainee said to him. I'm sure you saw what happened today when we left the class. Yeah, everyone else in the school was out there. Not that, Mina said, shaking her head. The other thing that happened, when that hussy back there put the moves on Izuku. She told her, 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽. 𝗧𝗵𝗶 replied, causing Mina to facepalm at her cluelessness. Never call a rival by their name, especially if they are trying to steal something you want. I know you're sweet with Izuku and he likes you as well. And if you want it to stay that way, you're going to have to take out the competition before the competition takes out you, she said, and made a slicing motion with her finger across her neck to emphasize what she meant. 𝗷𝗵𝗶, 𝗧𝗵𝗶 croaked out. You've got to fight for your man, 𝗧𝗵𝗶, Mina admonished her. That girl's moving and muscling and all over on your territory. The pink-skinned girl said to her and acted as if she was running a finger over a palm. And remember what she did. She openly took his hand and did that phony palm reading like she was a fortune teller. That's as big as a red card as you can get that she wants him. What if she said the only way she could do it was to kiss his hand? It'd have to be as invisible as Toru for you to not see it. Hey, the invisible girl protested. That's low, Mina. All they did was talk. Besides, you got it wrong. Izuku and I aren't in a relationship. We're just friends. 𝗧𝗵𝗶 replied, and Mina, annoyed, reached over and flicked her on the head with her middle finger and thumb. Oh, what was that for? 𝗧𝗵𝗶 protested, rubbing her forehead. Haven't you seen one romance film your entire life? Mina dryly said. Talking leads to numbers being exchanged. Numbers lead to going out on dates. Dating eventually leads to CS. Stop right there, 𝗧𝗵𝗶 said, seeing where this was going, her face starting to turn as red as Kirishima's hair. I think you're overthinking this whole thing, she said to Mina. Well, don't come crying to me if that does happen, Mina said, folding her arms over her chest, a trait she was rather proud of as she had the second largest bust after Momo. 𝗧𝗵𝗶 brought her finger up to her chin and thought about what had happened earlier. She did care for Izuku, even liked him as he was cute and going on handsome and had many positive qualities and attributes which would attract a girl. The frog girl wasn't a jealous or envious person, but when she had seen Yuki openly take Izuku's hand with her own, had stirred unknown feelings inside of her. It wasn't like when during a practice or training when someone like 𝗂𝐴CHO helped him up or Mina slapped him on the back and congrats. Who knew training to be a hero would be so complex? Izuku had arrived home and opened the door to the apartment building. He stepped inside and was about to call out to his mother that he was when he heard her talking. Yes, I see. I've done the paperwork, Mr. Hida, 𝗃 Midoriya said as she was speaking on the phone. I can see you as soon the day after tomorrow so we can discuss it over and what he'll be enrolled in. Thank you, goodbye, she said and hanged up the phone. Mom, Izuku, you scared me doing that. Who was you talking to? Izuku asked, curious as to what was going on. 𝗃 was silent for several long moments as she didn't say a word. Izuku, I wanted to wait to tell you this, but now is as good as any. That was Mr. Hida. He's the principal of a school in the Kamurocho district. I've spent the past couple days talking to him while you was away and at school. He's a very nice man and is looking forward to meeting you. Mom, what are you doing? Izuku asked in a confused tone. I don't understand. Izuku, I'm taking you out of UA and transferring you to a different school, one without a hero course, 𝗃 said to him, which stunned Izuku before it quickly turned to anger at what he was being told. You can't do this, Mom. You can't take me out of UA. He protested in anger that she would do such a thing. 𝗃 Midoriya looked on at her son, a stern look on her face. Izuku, when you was 4 and played make-believe and ran around with a cape around your shoulders pretending to fly, it was cute and it was no harm. But I'm putting my foot down on this, 𝗃 told him. How many times am I going to have to hear that you've broken your arm? You could have been killed the other day. Do you think I wanted to hear when I got home from work that my only child had been murdered? If your father was here right now, what would he say? Dad hasn't been here in years, Izuku replied in a bitter and angry tone. Even when I lost my eyesight, he didn't come visit or even call to ask how we were. He said, an angry look on his face. Not once has he even tried to connect with us. In his eyes, we don't even exist. Izuku, that's a horrible thing to say. 𝗃 stated, shocked that he would say such a thing. Doesn't mean it's not true, Izuku responded. Izuku, I just want you to be safe, 𝗃 pleaded with him. There's millions of people out there with quirks and they don't try to become heroes. I never tried to become one. You can find plenty of work and education in a school without a hero course, she told him. By killing my dream and everything I've worked for, Izuku replied, an incredulous look on his face. I'm not doing this, Mom. I'm not going to a different school. And you can't make me. Yes, I can, 𝗃 said in anger. They had argued before about him becoming a hero beforehand, but it had never gotten to this extent. I'm not going to stand by and watch you die. You're being transferred to a different school. And that's that. Why can't you get a career as a lawyer instead? Or a pharmacist? Because I want to be a hero. Izuku snapped back. I'm not quitting UA and I'm not being transferred, and that's final. He shouted and turned and ran out the door. Izuku, wait, 𝗃 shouted, but was too late as he was gone and was too fast for her to try and catch up. He ran out of the apartment building, going down the stairs and outside as he ran down the street, disappearing. 𝐭 wrenched her hands together. She knew it was going to be bad, but didn't think it would escalate to this. The two openly arguing like they had done. Why couldn't he see that she wanted him to be safe? Why was so many people insisting on becoming a hero? Didn't they see the news with what had recently happened and this maniac going around? You can't keep denying your son his dreams, ma'am, a voice said as a person had entered her home. You, she shouted at who she saw standing in the doorway. You have some nerve coming here, 𝐭 exclaimed to him, marching towards him unafraid of the mass difference in size between them as she glared at All Might, pointing a finger right at him. I ought to sue you for lying to me and what you did, putting my son in danger and his life at risk like you have done, she said to him. I understand, All Might replied. And the fact that you wait what? 𝐭 said in response, confused at what he just said. I understand your anger, Mrs. Midoriya, All Might said to her. He was about to knock on the door and come in, having not gotten to see Izuku earlier at UA when he had overheard Hom and his mother arguing and stayed out of sight, and was surprised when Izuku had ran out. You have every right to be angry at me for lying to you, and I apologize for what's happened. 𝐭 glared at him, a scowl on her face. You're foolish to think an apology will just somehow make everything better, she told him. This isn't some child's manga like Naruto. All Might reached up and rubbed the back of his head. I understand your concern, Mrs. Midoriya, but you must understand. I am just as concerned for your son as you are, he told her. Izuku is like a son to me and I want what's best for him, and being a hero is what would be best for him. 𝐭 narrowed her brows at All Might. Why did you have to encourage him so? He could have had a decent life regardless if he was blind or not. Yet you gave him ideas in his head that he could become a hero once again, she told him. It wasn't me who did it. That was all your son's doing, All Might answered her. 𝐭 shook her head. Come on in. If you're going to stay, at least quit standing in the doorway, she ordered him. A few minutes later, All Might was seated on the couch, a cup of tea in his large hand. Mrs. Midoriya, please, just call me 𝐭. All right, 𝐭 to young Midoriya. Being a hero isn't some flash-in-the-pan hobby that he picks up and drops later once he loses interest in it. Some view being a hero as a ticket to celebrity status or fortune. Izuku, however, wants to be a hero for the sole reason of helping others. Even when I first met him, he possessed the qualities of a true hero, he told her as he remembered 1 year ago. It was the second day that I was tutoring him, All Might said as a flashback was shown and the two were walking, Izuku with his cane and All Might in his scrawny form. I was discussing with him the advancement he had now in his 4 other senses and how he could use them to his advantage and live life as normal as he did before he lost his eyesight. As they were shown walking, cries were heard catching their attention as tires were heard squealing, and a vehicle was shown out of control and crashing into another, causing a collision. A villain who robbed a store was trying to make a getaway when he lost control and smashed his car into another, causing a pileup. Panic gripped everyone there as they didn't know what to do, except for one person, young Midoriya, he told her as Izuku was shown dropping his cane and running to the scene of it, surprising All Might at what he did. Instead of running away from the danger or panicking over what had happened, he went towards it, unconcerned about what could happen to him. Izuku was seen running towards the scene, that of several cars damaged and people stuck in them, one having been knocked and turned on its side with 2 people inside it unable to get out. The stolen truck the villain was using was seen having crashed into a pole, and the villain, who was an alligator man, was on the ground. Your son ran towards the car wreck. His first instinct was to go there and see if there was anything he could do to help, his body moving all on its own without any hesitation, he explained as All Might hanged back from the difference, looking on at what he was doing. It didn't matter to him that he was blind or he could possibly get hurt in doing so. People were hurt and in trouble, and that was the only thing that mattered to him. Heroes are the ones who run toward danger whether they have a quirk or not, All Might stated. Izuku heard the sounds of people and one person stuck in his vehicle pulled with all his might to unlatch the door and get them out. However, the villain was shown recovering and standing up and opened its mouth wide, preparing to bite down on him and rip him in two. It was then I knew. Knew what? 𝐭 asked before he could. All Might emerged in his muscular form and delivered a hard punch to the villain, dislocating its jaw and knocking it out. He then grabbed the door and ripped it off its hinges, freeing the occupants. When I first decided to train him, I was going to teach him martial arts and use his enhanced senses so that he could take care of himself. Even though I said he could get into UA, I myself had doubts over the chances he had. But when he willingly ran towards the incident with no fear, despite his condition, I realized then and there that he was the one for him I'd pass the torch to. 𝐭 dabbed at her eyes with a Kleenex as she listened to what All Might said. Your son wants to be a hero, not for adulation, fame, to prove people wrong, or accolades, but because he genuinely wants to help people. I understand and realize why you are afraid for his safety. It's only natural for a parent to be for their child. But Midoriya has the gift. There are many tales of a person's body moving without even thinking, rushing headfirst regardless for care of their own safety. That was what your son did that day. That was when I knew he could be a hero. You have an amazing son in Ko, and you should be very proud of what he's accomplished." As he finished, the door to the Midoriya's home suddenly opened and Izuku stepped in, having finally cooled off and returned home. "Ah, young Midoriya, good to see you come back." "All might," Izuku said, surprised that he had come here. He wondered if his mother had called him to try and convince him to be transferred. "I was just getting ready to leave," he said as he stood up off the couch. "However, I'm sure there's something you two want to discuss, so go ahead." Silence reigned in the room as none of the occupants spoke. "I'm not being transferred," Izuku said, finally speaking up. "I know," Inko replied, "and I'm not going to drop out of the hero course." "I understand." With that, all of the students of UA began their training for the sports festival, which would take place in 2 short weeks, pushing themselves and their quirks to the limit as they trained for it. Some did physically, others mentally, but each one whether from whatever class they were in, with the goal of winning it the night before the sports festival. Over 24 figures were seen in a club, all men and many on them carrying a weapon of sort. They were shown seated at a long table. On it was a feast of many exotic foods and beverages. The figures dined, each clad in suits, and whilst some adorned tattoos, others wore patches or rings. They all had the same symbol on it, that of a snake with blood-red fangs, showing that they belonged to the same clan as they were in Yakuza organization. Fathers, brothers, sons, all had ties to the organization. Seated at the head of a table was an elderly man who required a cane to walk with. His face was marred with the visages of time, yet his eyes were as sharp as a man of 4 his age. All who came in the room paid respect, bowing their heads to him. On his left hand he was missing 2 of his fingers. Closer to 90 he was than to 80, but he was still an imposing figure who throughout his long life showed no mercy and absolutely ruthless to his enemies. One did not live his age in this business long without being, so he tapped his cane against the ground 3 times, letting out a hard thud against the carpet. When he did, all the occupants in the room became quiet and turned their attention to him. A prolonged silence filled the room as they looked on. He then began to speak. "Many of you are too young to remember, but after the bombs dropped in the Second World War, with their honor disgraced and their names aligned with mud, the only thing that our fathers and grandfathers had left to rely on was their fists and dreams to turn their fortunes around." The man, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, said to them as he explained their origins. "When America occupied Japan afterwards and the war in Korea broke out, we emerged from Osaka and took advantage of the chaos and became a force in the underworld. Stores would pay tribute to us, mothers would curry favor with us and ask to take their sons in, and even the Americans knew better than to cross us. Half of Japan was at our beck and call," he said as he recalled the glory days of their organization, when their name meant respect and fear, when they could openly walk the streets and none would dare stand in their path. "But," he said, a bitter look on his face, "like how the Tokugawa usurped the Toyotomi, times changed. One event changed our world drastically and sent us scurrying to the shadows, hiding in the dark like rats." "Quirks," one Yakuza clan lieutenant said, a look of disgust on his face, and the elderly man nodded. "When that happened, our world and place was taken from us," he informed them. They were all quirkless, none of them possessed one, and had disavowed and removed contact with any family members who had. Territory that we had owned with blood was taken and stolen from us. We were ridiculed and mocked by others for sticking to the old ways, some of us choosing to betray and forsake their honor and join them, becoming little more than bootlickers to those with quirks, siding against their own family and brothers. And nothing is more despicable than that, he said with bitter reflection. "But after so long, our time has come once again," he announced. A chorus of cries came from the younger members in the room. "The League of Villains are nothing more than a shadow of itself. The sea trade and drug market is open for us to take now," 𝗏 proclaimed to them. "The Americans are long gone, and the so-called heroes are nothing more than a bunch of narcissistic fools. Hell with them," one called out at the table, and he nodded his head. The group was getting rowdy as emotions were at an all-time high and were boiling. "We'll take back what is rightfully ours and bring respect back to our names, and you shall make your forefathers proud," he said to the younger members, pointing his cane at them, and then he stood up. "We'll take back Osaka and then to Kyoto, to Tokyo, and all 5 islands of Japan will be at our beck and call once more. And we'll paint each and every corner of the streets with the blood of any damned fool with a quirk who stands in our way. Those who turn their backs on us will pay the ultimate price." Raising his cane, he hoisted it overhead. "And everyone shall once again know and fear the name of the Bang." A bullet suddenly pierced through the room from the window, going right into his skull. Dropping his cane, he fell to the ground dead. Stunned at what they just saw, the Yakuza did not have time to react before more gunshots came into the room and striking down others. Others pulled out their firearms and fired at where the direction of the attacker was coming from as guns were blazing. Machine gun fire entered the room. Blood spilled and filled the clubhouse as they were cut down, the bullets tearing through flesh and the objects in the room like it was paper. Soon the floor was littered with bodies as all the occupants inside were dead, filled with lead and blood seeping out of their wounds. The scenery changed to outside, and on a rooftop a figure was shown. A machine gun was shown as a figure peered through the scope, surveying the chaos and damage, seeing that they were all dead. Stain, the Punisher. His quirk, blood immobilization. By consuming a person's blood, he can temporarily paralyze and immobilize them. Seeing that not a one of them was amongst the living, he put the gun up, strapping it over his back as he was done here, as he prepared to leave. Halt! A voice shouted, catching him by surprise, and he turned around, and a hero scaled up the walls, running up them and leaping through the air over him. This has gone far enough. A figure appeared in front of him. This is madness what you are doing, and has no place in society, the hero said to him. Clad in armor with thrusters on the back of it, the imposing hero stood in front of Stain. I have heard many tales of you, the one who they say kills indiscriminately and maims heroes who try to stop you. The figure stated. But no more, now you shall pay for your crimes, he announced. Stain looked on, disgust in his eyes. You actually have the gall to stand there and lecture me. Those bastards I just killed deserve death, and you know it. He snarled at him in disdain. You are not the one who decides who lives and who dies, the hero stated as his face was revealed. I've heard much talk about you, this mad crusade you've been on. It ends tonight, he proclaimed. Having been stationed there, having heard about the rumored meeting of top Yakuza, listening in on a secret radio when the gunfire had broken out. Investigating the source, he had discovered the source of where the bullets and gunfire was coming from and moved to confront the attacker. Stain pulled out a pistol and shot at him, but with superhuman speed, he dodged each bullet and, yanking it out of his hand, shattered the firearm. You do not face a mere thug, you face 𝗔𝗵𝗲, the hero proclaimed as Tensei Ada, the brother of Tenure, revealed himself. You deem yourself an executioner, yet are nothing more than a wild beast. You shall be put down before you endanger any more lives. Stain snarled and reached and pulled out his katana, bringing it forth. If you and the rest stand in my way, then you shall also die as well, he said as the two prepared to do battle.